What's up guys, Chaos Shinobi here. This is What If Naruto's Reborn at full power. Summary: 6 years into the 4th Shinobi War, Konoha is destroyed, so Naruto decides to time travel back to his childhood to change events with his godlike strength. Chapter 25. Most of the council looked a little shocked, watching a 12-year-old Jounin say he's engaged. "Who are you marrying and when can I tell her congratulations?" Tori asked, the first to recover. Hiyashi, much to my relief, took pity. "He's marrying my eldest daughter, Hinata." "Have you told her yet, Naruto?" he asked, turning to me. "Did I mention I've been in Wave for the past 2 weeks? And that I just got back today? And then had to come here?" I asked, the question somewhat rhetorical and somewhat sarcastic. "So? I want to congratulate her," Tori shouted. I winced before remembering that she didn't get to have her white wedding, her children's father acting as my spy. "Ooh, do you think she'll let me help plan her wedding?" she went on. After a while I began to tone her out. "Hey, Tori? Where are Fugaku and Tara?" I asked, noticing the lack of twins. Tori nodded, her eyes lighting up. "They're with Hinata. Let's go. You need to propose," she shouted, dragging me by the wrist. I briefly wondered if all kunoichi suffered from dual personalities. "Hey, Hina-chan? Get ready for Tori, she's a little excited," I warned. Hinata's emotions displayed confusion and I felt her digging around my mind, finding my most recent memories. "You're proposing now? We're 12, she thought, trying to hide her happiness and excitement at my announcement. "Wait, you talked to my father?" "When?" "About 2 months ago. Right after we got team assignments. Anyway, watch out, Tori never had her white wedding. She wants to plan yours." "I'm pretty sure she's deciding what flowers to order," I decided, studying the Uchiha's face. Tori was 19, a mother of twins, and a Chunin instructor, but she couldn't keep the happiness off her features. Not for long. "So who knows? Does Kakashi?" "Stupid question, Kakashi is part of the council." "Does Sasuke know? What about Sakura? Am I allowed to tell Sasuke?" Her questions flew in and out of my ears, blurring until I couldn't recognize words, only general impressions. "Slow down, Tori, guys can't think that fast," I said, closing my eyes as I walked through the street back to the Noble District. We sped past the Uchiha compound and my own property, going directly to the Hyuga compound. The man at the gate smiled, recognizing both of us and let us in. We walked up the path towards the main house. About to walk in the front door I stopped, hearing a shout behind us. "Kasan!" A voice shouted. Tori, in a well-practiced movement, spun around and braced herself before she was tackled to the ground by 2 children. "Why did I have children?" she asked me, laughing breathlessly, and pried her off of her mother, holding her up. "I don't think you really planned them," I said, lifting Tara in my arms. Fugaku immediately shouted his complaints, so I shifted Tara to one arm and held out my other to Itachi's son. "Naruto-san, I missed you," Tara exclaimed, hugging my arm tightly. I laughed easily. "Tara-chan, Naruto is a big ninja. He's not going to be here to play with you all the time," Tori reminded her daughter. Tara looked up at her mother with wide obsidian eyes and Tori sighed, defeated once again by the infamously powerful puppy dog eyes. With Tara, it was almost as powerful as her father's Sharingan. I had just put Fugaku and Tara down when I was tackled to the ground. Tori and her children laughed as they watched the breath get pushed from my lungs as Hina-chan sat up on my chest. Seeing her pale eyes smiling, blushing ever so slightly, I grinned. "Hello to you too," I said, chuckling. "Are you comfortable? Because I'd rather not be like this when your father comes home," I pointed out. Hinata-chan jumped off my without another word, the blush increasing intensity. Hello, Naruto-kun," she smiled shyly. I rolled my eyes. "Do you want to go out for lunch?" "My treat," I offered. Tori's eyes laughed smugly as Hina-chan nodded. "Tori, don't you think you should take these 2 home?" Tori almost growled at my dismissal but put on a cheerful face for her kids. "Naruto's right, let's go home and get something to eat. Maybe we can play ninja," she suggested, distracting her children as Hina-chan and I slipped away. We had just reached the main gate when I ran into Hiyashi. "Oh, hello Hiyashi-sama," I greeted. "I was just going to take Hina-chan out to lunch." "All right," he said, sounding a little suspicious. The man had warmed up to me after having me around so much, even more so after my promotion, but he still wasn't sure how to behave around me. "Don't be too long, Hinata. You're making good progress but you still have some training left," he said before nodding at his daughter and vanishing into the compound. We walked to Ichiraku Ramen, our usual lunch date location. Spotting us, Tucci smiled and put down a bowl of miso ramen for me and a bowl of pork ramen for Hinata-chan. I smiled at the man, saying hello. So, word on the street is that you two are Ixnay. I coughed loudly, smiling densely. Tucci took the hint and turned to his ramen. Naruto-kun, do you want to spar? I've been training the pack with Kiba, Hina-chan said, blowing on her ramen as I ignored the temperature. Hardly able to breathe, let alone speak, through the noodles, I nodded. Swallowing, I coughed. You're on. I accepted the challenge. She looked at me pointedly, sending her thoughts across the seal. Mortal foxes only. I still haven't seen the Fox Council. We'll do that soon. I'm being set out on a solo mission soon. I might need a tracking team's help, I hinted. Hina-chan smiled, rolling her eyes. Who are you looking for, Tsunade? I can't take that relationship around from Sakura, I explained, shrugging. Hina-chan smiled and looked at her ramen. I could tell from her thoughts that she was wondering how I'd proposed this time around. I couldn't exactly recreate the first scene. Flashback. Flames reflected on the water, the burning Akatsuki base fading from sight as it hid in the smoke. Turning to Hina-chan, I saw her breathing heavily, splattered with blood, and clearly exhausted. I'd never seen anything more beautiful. Marry me? I said, still gazing at her. She looked at me, confusion and joy crossing her pale eyes. She nodded, her eyes watering. I wiped her tears as the base collapsed into the sea behind us. And flashback. That was completely spontaneous, I said, chuckling. Hina-chan closed her eyes, remembering our last wedding, the memory filling my own head as the connection strengthened. It had been a small affair, being in the middle of a war, but nothing raises morale like a wedding. It was not a traditional wedding. I was not wearing the Hokage robes, Hina-chan was not wearing a white kimono. We both wore blood-stained Jounin gear. Gar had presided over the quick ceremony, just as I had for his and Matsuri's wedding weeks before. There had been too much bloodshed for anyone to really cry, but there were a long line of well-wishers and congratulators. Sakura was the only one to cry, remembering what she might have had with Sasuke. Sitting now, eating ramen with Hina-chan, I smiled knowing that, this time, the wedding was going to be different if Tori had anything to do with it. Our food paid for, Hina-chan and I ran to the forest of death, not racing but enjoying the speed and each other's company. Approaching my clearing, I paused, hearing someone there. I held a finger to my lips and signaled for Hinata to stay behind. She shook her head furiously and whipped out a kunai, twirling it dangerously. Sighing, defeated, I nodded and walked slowly closer to the clearing. From my vantage point, I saw blue electricity envelope a certain raven-haired boy's arm. I groaned, knowing I'd have to beat Kakashi up again. I ushered Hinata-chan forward and we walked into the clearing. Sasuke, I started pleasantly. My voice immediately darkened as I activated Akuma no Mi. Give me one reason I shouldn't rush into Kakashi and kill him where he stands? Because he didn't teach it to me, I copied it, he said, turning around and showing me his own red eyes to Tomoe. When did you activate it? I think I got it during that last spar and wave. I came back to the bridge after you woke me up and could actually see all of you moving. Why didn't you tell me? I could have helped you strengthen it, I said, feeling a little hurt. Don't you remember that spar? You cracked my femur. I wasn't very happy at you, he scoffed. I nodded, conceding. Sasuke looked behind me, noticing Hina-chan. Did you? We were going to spar, but if you're here we can go somewhere else. It's a big forest, I said, my eyes moving back and forth. Sasuke's Sharingan picked up the movement and he nodded ever so slightly. No, it's okay, this was always your clearing, he began, taking a step away. Yeah, but this is the only clearing you know the way out of. I know a different spot. A few hundred yards east that'll work. Oh, if you hear explosions, don't freak out. Same to you, Sasuke said, nodding at his arm. I smiled sympathetic, remembering the damage learning Chidori had done to me. I stepped forward and applied a little medical ninjutsu to his wrist, strengthening the muscles and bones so they wouldn't get damaged easily. Thanks, he said. I was turning around when I saw a blue flash as Sasuke charged up his Chidori, rushing a tree. Just before he hit the tree, the electricity vanished. Sasuke jumped up onto the tree to avoid hitting it face first. Oi, Sasuke. Try to focus your chakra in your fingertips and knuckles, it makes the chakra easier to gather and stabilize, I suggested, forming a Chidori in my right hand, raising my hand so Sasuke could see. He studied my arm before nodding and turning back to his tree. He charged up his own arm and rushed the tree, the jutsu holding. With a crack, he pushed through the tree and it fell behind him. Hinata-chan nodded at the Uchiha. A small smile on her face. He's learning it quickly, she commented. I nodded and reached my hand out to her. She grabbed my hand tightly and we dashed into the trees, hand in hand. This clearing was smaller than the other, only about 20 yards in diameter in a nearly perfect circle. The grass was dotted with small boulders and young trees, making the terrain more difficult for training. The ground was uneven and rocky, a good challenge for anyone who had come to spar. I went through seals, summoning 2 mortal foxes to spar alongside me. Hinata-chan thought about who she should summon before flying through the seals and slamming her palm on the sparse grass. A puff of smoke rose in front of each of us. I had summoned Koyuki and Domino. Domino was a large fox with pure black fur except for a circular patch of white over his left eye, inspiring his name. He nodded at me respectfully as Koyuki jumped to my shoulder. "So what are we doing today?" she asked, her tail curling around my neck. I pointed at Hina-chan, now flanked by 2 foxes of her own. One was a smoke gray vixen with sky blue streaks running down her sides. The other was as dark as Domino, another vixen with piercing yellow eyes. Both glanced at Koyuki on my shoulder before resting their eyes on my whisker marks and bowing their heads simultaneously. "Naruto-sama," each said quietly. I smiled. "It's nice to meet you," I smiled, kneeling down to greet the foxes. The gray glanced at Hina-chan, who nodded encouragingly before walking towards me. The black vixen glanced around herself before stepping towards me cautiously. "My name is Yonaka," the black vixen announced. She glanced at the gray vixen at her side. "This is Hiro." "Yonaka-chan, I can introduce myself," she said nervously, reminding me of the old Hyuga Hinata. Hello, Naruto-sama." "Hello, Hiro-chan, Yonaka-chan." "Hinata-chan speaks highly of you too," I said, still smiling. The 2 vixens glanced at Hina-chan, who simply shrugged. "So what are we doing here?" Koyuki repeated, flicking her tail to get my attention. Hina-chan answered. "I challenged Naruto-kun to a spar to show him how strong we are," she explained. Koyuki purred into my neck, analyzing the 2 vixens and my mate. Domino walked around Yonaka in a circle, studying her. I whistled and he stopped, watching me as I shunshined to the other side of the clearing and waved to him. He jumped to join us and I began to lay down a strategy. "Are you sure you want to do this, Hina-chan?" I called across the clearing. She scoffed as she and her summons shifted their weight, poised to attack. I nodded at her offensive pose and shifted into my Warao Akuma pose. Koyuki leaned back, ready to begin her ice assault. I pulled a scroll and tossed it to Domino, who opened the storage scroll. He glanced at the seals before picking his weapon of choice, a curved scimitar. He curled his tail around the hilt and took up a kunai in his mouth, nodding to me that he was ready. Hinata looked impressed at Domino's control. She reached into her jacket, pulling out a scroll just as I had, handing it to Yonaka. Yonaka grinned as she unsealed metal claws that fit over her front paws perfectly. Even at this distance, I could see her flex her paw and grin at Domino, leaning forward as she prepared to pounce. "Your count," I offered. She nodded. 3. 2. She was interrupted by a flurry of movement, quickly approaching the clearing. Ignoring our current spar, I dashed in front of Hinata, Koyuki and Domino with my heels. I concentrated chakra to my fist and punched the ground, sending a jagged fault line towards the trees. The ninja saw the fissure and jumped to avoid it. I leapt towards him, a blur in the forest. Holding a kunai at his throat, I recognized the ninja. "Kiba. What the hell are you doing here?" I shouted, removing the kunai from his neck. I grabbed him by the hood, Akamaru barking in protest, and dragged him to the clearing. Hinata looked just as surprised to see him. "Watch it," he growled, feeling his throat before glancing at the gathered foxes. "You summon foxes too?" he asked me. Hinata nodded as I began to speak. "I'm the holder of the contract. I was the one that let Hinata-chan sign it," I said. Koyuki jumped to my shoulder and I smiled. "I don't know if your mother told me who I really am." "Did she tell you yet, Kiba?" "She told me," he said, shrugging. "Tucci-san told me you were going to spar." I didn't think he was talking about the Forest of Death. "What are you doing here?" "We were about to spar," Hinata-chan said, pointing at the battle-ready foxes. I coughed. I think Kiba was asking why we weren't sparring in one of the other training grounds. "This forest is infamously dangerous," I clarified. Turning to Kiba, I narrowed my eyes slightly. "Why are you here, Kiba?" "I'm here because I don't want to trash any of the grounds other people use. Sasuke's here learning an extremely dangerous jutsu, one of Kakashi's original. Hinata-chan is here to be my sparring partner and so I can show her the jutsu I've designed for foxes." "You made?" "Yes, I did. I've been the holder of the contract for over 4 years, don't ask how I got it. Some of them are similar to Inuzuka jutsu but they are all a little different or my originals." "You're avoiding the question. Why are you here?" If I didn't know Kiba, I would have sworn he blushed. He began to mumble incoherently and I rolled my eyes. I turned to Domino and dismissed him, Koyuki staying on my shoulder. Hina-chan dismissed both of her summons before turning back to me. "I guess sparring is out," she said. Kiba looked ready to either protest or apologize, but I shrugged. "It's okay, I still have Haku and Zabuza at my house. Do you two want to meet them? You'll be seeing them a lot, both are officially Konoha shinobi courtesy of the village council." "Sure," Hinata-chan smiled brightly. "You still owe me a tour, you didn't get to show me around the compound last time I came over." Kiba agreed grudgingly. I walked over to Hina-chan, offering her my hand. Kiba brightened when she shook her head, wanting to race. I glanced over at Kiba, much slower than either of us. "How about we race back to Sasuke? We can see if he's done with the Chidori yet," I offered. Hinata-chan and Kiba both nodded and we all got ready to run. Hinata-chan threw the race, getting last place while I kept up with Kiba, pulling ahead in the last few yards. Finding Sasuke passed out, I checked his vitals. "He's okay," I decided. "His chakra is pretty low. I'll let him heal from this the normal way. If I use the getaway technique too much, it won't be as effective when we need it," I explained, lifting Sasuke onto my back. His head rolled onto my shoulder, his eyes closed. Kiba nodded and the three of us ran back to the gates. Like always, I jumped over it. Hinata-chan walked over to the gap and slipped through quietly for Kiba's sake. Kiba followed the Hyuga through the fence and ran to catch up as Hinata-chan and I jogged slowly towards the village. I led the two through the noble district, stopping at my gate. I deactivated the seal on the gates and walked in, leaving them unlocked behind me. I walked straight to Namikaze Manor, Kiba's jaw dropping as his eyes took in all 3 stories, mentally counting the rooms and the size of the grounds surrounding the house. I strode to the porch, kicking my front door open. Kiba and Hina-chan followed me as I went straight to the primary living room. Opening the door, I saw Haku and Zabuza sitting on the sofa playing cards over the coffee table. I walked to the smaller love seat and put Sasuke down gently before turning back to the former missing nin. "Guess how amazing I am," I challenged. Haku's eyes lit up with hope. Zabuza scoffed, telling me to cut it out. "Fine, don't apologize to the guy who just cleared your status as missing nin, got you Konoha citizenship, and the chance to become Leaf Shinobi," I said, chuckling. Kiba snickered as Haku flew over to me, tackling me in a hug so forcefully I almost lost my balance and fell backwards. Zabuza stood and lazily gave me a guy hug, an action much more dignified than actually hugging, no matter what Hinata-chan and Haku said. "Anyway," I began, sitting next to Hinata-chan on the couch opposite Zabuza and Haku, leaving Kiba in the armchair. "You guys are invited to live in the Namikaze compound for as long as you want. You don't need to if you do want to. I'm sure you could find an apartment somewhere, but my door's always open to you guys," I offered. Haku smiled, a little more controlled now, and nodded excitedly. Zabuza pretended to think about it until Haku punched him in the ribs. Gasping for air, he agreed. "Hello, Zabuza-san, Haku-chan," Hinata-chan said, holding out her hand. "I've heard so much about you two from Naruto-kun," she smiled, blushing slightly. Zabuza looked at her up and down before accepting her handshake. "You must be Hyuga Hinata," he said, noting her pale eyes. He leaned back comfortably while Hina-chan introduced herself to Haku. "Who are you?" he asked, looking at Kiba. I answered for him. "This is Inuzuka Kiba. He is one of Hinata-chan's teammates. He helped her get her pack together while I was away from Konoha," I explained. Zabuza nodded once as Haku offered Kiba her hand with a friendly smile. "So you guys are going to be Konoha-nin? Do you know what rank?" Hinata asked, looking at me. I shrugged. "They'll probably start Zabuza as a Jounin and Haku as a High Jounin or Low Chunin. Do you have a preference, Haku?" "I think I'd rather start as Jounin," she said, thinking. I made a mental note to talk to Hiruzen while I turned to Kiba. "I'm going to need your help, Kiba," I said. He stared at me, confusion in his eyes. "With what?" he asked suspiciously. I chuckled at his distrust in me. "It's nothing bad, I swear. I've been meaning to throw a party but never really got around to it between training and the mission to Wave. I want you to tell everyone from our academy class and their Jounin sensei. We have a few things to celebrate properly," I said, smiling at Hinata-chan, something that did not go unnoticed by Kiba. "Like what?" "First, my promotion to Jounin. We never had a party for that. Second, Team 7's first C-rank mission, even though it did turn A rank. Third, welcoming Haku and Zabuza into Konoha. Fourth, I really feel like throwing a party," I said, chuckling at the end. Kiba looked assuaged and nodded, accepting the task. "Thanks, I owe you one." "Nah, I like partying," Kiba shook his head, not realizing what he was turning down. "Besides, if you invite people, no cute girls will show up." I raised an eyebrow. "Did I mention the pool out back?" I asked, waving for them to follow me as I walked towards the back door. I opened the door nonchalantly, revealing the backyard. The back porch was small, just enough space for a table and a few chairs before the stairs connected it to the patio. The patio was red brick dotted with blue-green slate slabs. There were a few tables lined against one side of the patio, leaving open space in the center. Opposite the porch, a huge pool was laid in the ground, a built-in jacuzzi making its home in one corner of the pool. I watched, grinning, as Kiba's jaw hit the ground and his eyes widened in surprise. Hinata-chan didn't freak out, she skipped forward, Koyuki jumping off of my shoulder after her. My mate touched the water with one hand, testing the temperature before taking off her shoes and putting her feet in the water. Kiba recovered as I stood next to him, both of us watching Hinata-chan get into a water war with my favorite mortal fox. What was that about no girls showing up? I said, lightly smacking Kiba's shoulder. He didn't move, only watched Hina-chan as she laughed, almost pushed into the water by Koyuki. Koyuki grinned and shook her fur, spraying Hinata-chan. Okay, Kiba eventually coughed. I was wrong. You need to have a party. When are you thinking, tonight or tomorrow night? Everyone's in Konoha for the next few days, I smiled, turning away from Hinata-chan and stepping just inside the house. I grabbed 2 towels from one of the closets and brought both down to the patio, draping them over a chair for Hinata-chan and Koyuki when they were finished. Thanks, Naruto-kun, my mate laughed over her shoulder, catching a glimpse of me as she tried to defend herself from Koyuki. No problem. We're going back to the living room, I called back, grabbing Kiba and pushing him through the door, ignoring his protests. Come on, Kiba, don't make me hurt you, I growled teasingly. Kiba scoffed but let me push him back to Zabuza and Haku. I heard Zabuza shout and I sighed, knowing what to expect when we entered the room. Kiba's head shot up at the sound. Shouldn't we hurry up? Nah, that was just Haku teaching Zabuza some manners or something like that, I shrugged, opening the door. As I expected, Haku stood over Zabuza, senbon in hand and a foot on his chest, keeping him down. Okay, Haku, don't kill him. What did he do this time? What makes you think I did anything? Zabuza shouted, indignant. I raised my eyebrow and he scoffed. She started it and she ended it, Kiba chuckled nervously noticing the senbon in Haku's hand. Didn't I make some house rules before I left you two here? I asked tiredly. Haku smirked, her hand not falling. Yes. You said no jutsu, sword fights, or training inside or around the house. You never said anything about senbon, she said, narrowing her eyes at the demon of the bloody mist. Okay, new rule, I announced. No senbon, ice senbon, or poison inside or around my house. Better? I asked, not sure who I was talking to. Haku sighed before taking her foot off of the man, pocketing her senbon. Thank you. Just as I finished telling Haku why she shouldn't try to kill Zabuza, Hinata-chan walked in, her clothes soaked and her face bright red. Koyuki was walking next to her, her fur still damp. We kinda fell in. Hina-chan said sheepishly, making me laugh. Kiba glared at me, probably for making him miss that. I almost glared at myself. That's okay, I think some of my mom's old stuff will fit you, I said, still laughing. Hina-chan smiled shyly and I grabbed her wrist, leading her into my bedroom closet. I hadn't yet gotten around to cleaning it out yet, so most of the clothes were just sealed into scrolls so I could fit my stuff inside. I looked through the scrolls, finding one of my mother's clothing that I recognized. I'm pretty sure something in there will fit. We'll leave so you can change, I said, once again pulling Kiba away. We were sitting on the couches, just talking, when Hina-chan came back. Her old outfit gone, she now wore a deep red kimono with white sakura petals embroidered close to the hem. Her dark hair was tied into a ponytail, still wet. I smiled and nodded, catching Kiba's attention. He took one look at her and fell back with a nosebleed. It was only then I noticed that the kimono was not exactly up to her neck like most hyuga robes. I laughed in the Inuzuka's expense before smiling at Hina-chan. You look beautiful, I said, trying to keep my 12-year-old vocal cords from cracking. Hina-chan blushed slightly and smiled, walking over to me. She glanced at Kiba. Kiba, she sighed tiredly. He just doesn't know when to quit. I already told him to back off. Hina-chan, guys are idiots. They either are oblivious or don't care what the girl thinks. Kiba falls into the second category, I hinted, glancing at the genon. I groaned. He was getting blood on the white couch he had fallen onto. If that stains, I'm going to hurt him. It's not his fault he's a stupid, perverted, stubborn. What were we talking about? Hina-chan asked, chuckling as she moved the Inuzuka so he wasn't bleeding on my furniture. I sighed. How am I going to explain your clothes when I take you to your father? I asked, knowing how Hiyashi would respond, even if we were engaged to be engaged. The truth? We didn't do anything wrong, she shrugged. Yes, I left you with a fox beside a pool. Hiyashi will believe that, I said, rolling my eyes. Hinata-chan shrugged. Take Koyuki with you. Konoha needs to get used to foxes again. A mortal fox is the best way to start, she reasoned. I thought about it and nodded, looking at the fox. You're doing all the talking. I was inside with Kiba, I reminded her. She pouted but nodded, paying me back by jumping onto my shoulder, still wet. Very mature. Okay, let's get you and Kiba home, I said, picking up the unconscious ninja as Hinata-chan said goodbye to Zabuza and hugged Haku. I'll see you later, she promised. Haku smiled, Zabuza grumbled a reply, standing and heading towards the kitchen. Resisting the urge to roll my eyes, I opened the front door for Hina-chan and she smiled as she stepped through the doorway. I closed the door behind me, the latch clicking almost inaudibly as the door shut. We walked side by side and hand as we walked the now familiar path back to society, leaving the silence behind as I closed the outer gate, entering the busy street. We dropped Kiba off, neglecting the exact details of why he was unconscious. Tsume glared at me when I mentioned the party but allowed Kiba to come. Getting the door nearly slammed in my face, I turned away from the house, meeting Hinata-chan in the front lawn. I didn't say a word about Tsume's behavior, not wanting Hinata-chan to turn around and beat up the Inuzuka clan head. Passing the Hyuga gate, the woman at guard looked at Hina-chan's kimono, the vibrant color looking out of place in the pale color scheme of the Hyuga compound. Ignoring the occasional stares, we made our way to the main house, Koyuki on my shoulder. I was about to knock on the door when Hinata-chan stepped in front of me, opening the door and ushering me inside. I spotted Hiyashi walking down the hallway towards us and I signaled Hinata. She nodded and started talking. That's good, father says my training is almost done, she began, alerting me to the topic we were supposed to be continuing. I glanced down the hall again. Hiyashi-sama, there you are, I smiled, bowing my head. I'm sorry we took so long, we ran into one of Hinata-chan's teammates who wanted to hang out with us so we all went back to my house, I said, smiling sheepishly. Hiyashi narrowed his eyes at Hina-chan's dress, ready to comment before Hinata-chan cut in. Naruto-kun is having a party to celebrate his promotion and Team 7's first C-rank mission. Can I go? She asked, her pale eyes wide and begging. Hiyashi must have been stubborn about her clothing, not even her expression, one that Kyubi referred to as her vixen eyes, could distract him. What happened to your clothes? He asked. I could tell he was trying not to narrow his eyes at me. Hinata-chan's face reddened. I fell in the pool, she said sheepishly. Hiyashi's eyebrows raised in disbelief and Koyuki elaborated. I apologize, Hiyashi-sama. It was my fault that your daughter fell into the pool, she said clearly. Hiyashi, despite his status as clan head of the elite Hyuga clan, jumped at the talking fox. It wasn't your fault, Koyuki-chan, Hina-chan protested. You fell in too, but you can't shake yourself dry, Koyuki pointed out before turning to Hiyashi. It was my fault, please do blame Naruto-sama or Hinata-sama. Naruto was a gentleman, lending Hinata-sama his mother's kimono while her clothes dry. Hiyashi looked at his daughter, who nodded, before turning to me and sighing. He shook his head tiredly and looked at me. Hinata, go to your room. Naruto, follow me. And bring that fox, he added as an afterthought. Koyuki fumed silently at being referred to as that fox. Hinata-chan bowed her head, her thoughts laughing with mine. I nodded and Hiyashi led the way to a small library. He sat in a chair and folded his hands in his lap, motioning for me to take the chair opposite him. Naruto, I trust I'm correct in thinking that you wish my daughter no harm, but you must act with her reputation in mind. Personally, she can behave as she wants when she bears your name. Until that happy event, you must remember that each and everything she does reflects on the Hyuga name. She is the eldest child of the main house, she must act as such. I can't have her coming home wearing someone else's clothing, no matter how honorably it was received. Do you understand? Perfectly, sir. I did not lend her my mother's kimono to damage her reputation. Under the circumstances, I thought it best to return her to you before it got dark, especially since you had mentioned training her further, I said, trying not to be disrespectful to my future father-in-law. You seem to be rather interested in her training, may I ask why? He asked. I shrugged my shoulders, smiling minutely. I'm not going to lie, I am not well liked in this world. If those I am close to are strong, they are better suited to defend themselves against those who want to harm me through them. If your daughter is able to protect herself, I'm sure that both you and I will sleep better at night. Also, our wedding will not be until she is a Chunin, as we agreed. If Hinata-chan grows stronger, That happy event, as you put it, will be sooner rather than later. My words seemed to be chosen well. Hiyashi smiled slightly and stood from his chair. I leapt to my feet and walked, half a step behind him, towards the front door. Nodding at me, he said his goodbyes, vanishing into the house before I could return the courtesy. Not sure what to do, I began to walk back to my house, the Hyuga compound and its residents disappearing behind me. I smiled, watching my party become a success. The entire Rookie 9, their Jounin sensei, and a number of other people were in attendance. The lights reflected off the pool, dancing happily in the waves created by various people swimming and jumping in. The music was loud enough to dance, quiet enough to talk over. I chuckled as I watched Konohamaru get punched by Moegi. For what, I didn't know. All I knew was that he probably deserved it, especially by her standards. Kuji was standing close to the tables, all loaded with different types of food. Ino was shouting as she was lifted by Kiba and dumped into the pool. Kiba laughed as Ino swam to the surface, flicking her long hair out of her face. He stopped laughed when she grabbed his ankle and pulled him in. Shikamaru stood to the side with Zabuza, neither wanting to be there but forced. Haku was laughing, dancing with Sakura and Tori. Sasuke was laughing with Kakashi, just telling him that he had recreated the Chidori. Even Shino was talking, chatting with one of the random Chunin. The party had a number of crashers but I didn't mind. The more the merrier, right? A party was no place to start complaining about the number of people. Glancing around the party, I realized a few things were missing. It wasn't the same without Gaara, Temari, or Kankuro. They deserve to be here, I decided, about to harash into Gaara's kunai when I felt a tap on my shoulder. The scent of lavender floated into my head and I smiled, turning to face Hinata-chan. I'm not going to lie, my jaw dropped for just a few seconds. My eyes took in the lavender dress, coming to just below her knees, something very controversial within the Hyuga clan. Even more impressive, I spotted a bathing suit strap hiding under the dress's halter straps. Hina-chan had her hair down, the bangs framing her face curled. Her blood-steel necklace glinted in the light emanating softly from the lanterns. I glanced at my own attire, a simple black shirt, my normal sage jacket, and some dark jeans, and felt underdressed. You look nice, too, she chuckled, filling the silence my staring had created. She grabbed my hand and stood next to me, watching the patio from our vantage point on the second-floor balcony. What are you doing up here by yourself? We're all here to celebrate your accomplishments. Nah, Kuji's here for the food, I said, chuckling. Zabuza is here because Haku made him come, Shikamaru is here because Ino made him come, and Asuma is here because Kurenai made him come. Kiba's here because you, Ino, and Sakura are here. Shino is here because he didn't have to do anything else, I said, pointing at each guest and explaining why they'd come. At the end of my speech, Hina-chan hugged my arm. I'm here to celebrate your accomplishments, she said in my ear. I smiled and pulled an arm around her. She seemed to think about something before looking up sadly. It doesn't feel right without the San siblings here. I was just thinking about that. I was actually about to harash into Suna and get them. I left a kunai with Gaara and Sandstorm, I said. Hinata-chan's eyes brightened and her thoughtful expression morphed into a carefree smile. Well? Get going, she said, pushing me playfully. I chuckled and closed my eyes obediently, following my kunai to Suna. I opened my eyes to see Gaara talking to a mortal raccoon on a sand dune somewhere outside of Suna. Feeling my chakra, he glanced up and his face broke into a smile. Teiko, he greeted, dismissing his summon and walking to give me a hug. Why are you here? Did something happen in? No, nothing happened, I chuckled. Do I need an excuse to visit my favorite student? Never mind, don't answer that. Are Temari, Sandstorm, and Kankuro around? Yeah, they should all be at my place. What's up? Party in Konoha, I winked. The Rookie 9 is celebrating my becoming Jounin and 2 new additions to the shinobi force, Yuki Haku and Momochi Zabuza. You got them away from Gato in time? Gaara asked excitedly, fighting a blush as he thought about Haku. I nodded happily. They're living in the Namikaze compound with me. I'll catch you up later, take me to Temari and Kankuro, I promised. Gaara nodded and led me into the village, bypassing the guards and taking me directly to his house. Approaching the building, I could hear 2 people fighting and I smiled to myself, remembering how the 3 San siblings never quite got along unless someone was in danger. Temari One-Ijan, Kankuro Onsen, I'm home. He called. Temari shouted a greeting from the kitchen. I smiled and held a finger to my lips, wanting to surprise the kunoichi. I stepped into the doorway, ready to repeat my familiar greeting. Sabaku no Temari, short as ever, I said. Temari jumped and tackled me in a hug, laughing. Kankuro looked a little less entertained by my sudden appearance. Calm down, Kankuro, this is Kyoritsune, Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto, Gaara-sensei? She ran off a list of my identities, only the last sticking. He smiled and offered his hand. Sabaku no Kankuro, kick-ass puppeteer, he introduced himself. I nodded, shaking his hand. I know. Listen, the four of you are coming back with me to a party. It feels really empty without you guys. Konoha do not know how to party, I added, knowing that it would encourage Kankuro. He looked a little confused but nodded. Without my saying a word, Sandstorm shifted into her human form and walked over to me. Temari, Gaara, and Sandstorm all grabbed onto me, looking pointedly at Kankuro. What? He asked, oblivious. Temari rolled her eyes. Hiraishin time. Grab onto me and I came take you to Konoha in less than a second. Just hold on really tightly and don't let go until I say you can, I ordered. Kankuro looked a little skeptical but grabbed onto me. I closed my eyes, focusing on Hinata-chan's necklace. I pushed the five of us through, adding more chakra to make sure we stayed together and in one piece. I opened my eyes to the balcony as Hina-chan put her necklace back on. I chuckled as Temari and Kankuro stumbled, probably disoriented by having their eyes open during the jump. Okay, first things first, I said as soon as Temari and Kankuro's eyes focused again. Everyone take off your Tsunohitaites, nobody knows I brought you here. Gaara, you can put on your Ariguma mask if you don't want anyone to know who you really are. I haven't given away your identity. Second, everyone meet Hyuga Hinata, my mate. You can trust Hinata-chan, she knows everything about me and hasn't told anyone but her summons who, not so coincidentally, are also foxes so it doesn't really matter. Temari and Kankuro untied their Tsunohitaites as Gaara unsealed his mask, looking at it. After a while, he resealed the mask. Are you sure? You can't undo this, I warned him. He nodded and untied the Hittite he now wore around his neck. I'm sure, he said, sealing the forehead protector in with his mask. The higher-ups of Suna know who I am. I'm sure most of Konoha knows your identity, Kyoritsune. I'm sure they won't mind playing host to your student for a night, he said, his eyes searching for Haku, still dancing. If you're sure. Kankuro, Temari, Sandstorm, if anyone asks who you are, just say that you're an old friend of Kyoritsune. They won't do anything as long as you don't try to kill anyone, I smiled, leading the way to the patio. The Sand siblings invaded the party easily, no one really bothering them as they partied alongside the Konoha 11 plus Sasuke. Dancing with Hinata-chan, I realized I was about to ruin Tori's plans. I pulled Hina-chan away from the crowd, only laughing when she asked me where we were going, something I didn't even know. We lay down in the grass of one of the training fields, watching the stars in the cold night air. Hinata-chan was next to me, wearing my coat over her dress and smiling at the moon. It's so beautiful, Hinata-chan whispered, staring at the sky as a comet raced towards the horizon. Still gazing at my mate, I found myself wondering which star I should steal out of the sky, just to make her happy. She suddenly turned to face me, smiling. I don't need a star to be happy. Not as long as you're with me, she smiled, staring into my blue eyes with her lavender. Not knowing what I could say, I sat up and leaned down until our lips met. All too soon, I needed to break for air. Sitting up, I smiled softly at my Hinata. I love you, I said, not for the last time. I love you too, Naruto-kun, she said, moving so that her head was lying in my lap. I brushed her hair away from her face and melted as I saw Hina-chan's face light up with a contented smile. It was more than content, it was peaceful joy. Marry me? She smiled and sat up, pulling me into a tight hug. When she pulled back, she met my eyes and a single tear rolled down her pale cheeks. Always and everywhere, she repeated our promise. I smiled and brushed her tear away before leaning in for another kiss. Coming back into the party, I saw Tori narrow her eyes and she saw Hina-chan's slightly red eyes and blissful smile. I winced, remembering that she had staked a claim on her part of our wedding. Separating myself from Hinata-chan for just a moment, I ran into the house and into my bedroom. In the bedside table drawer sat a small black box with a note from my mother. I opened the box and took my mother's wedding ring out of the velvet bed before dashing out to find Hina-chan before Tori attacked her. The ring itself was simple and elegant, not exaggerated but not boring. The band was silver with small waves etched across the surface. The face of the ring was a medium-sized diamond surrounded by smaller sapphires. After I had found the ring, I took it to one of Konoha's jewelers to make a few changes. There was now a lavender amethyst every other sapphire surrounding the diamond. On the inside of the band, I had the words always and everywhere inscribed into the silver. I found Hina-chan talking to Temari, the Sunakunoichi hugging her happily. I appeared behind Hinata-chan and tapped her shoulder, clearing my throat. I was tackled by two giggling kunoichi. Kakashi, the closest person to us, chuckled to himself. In the flurry of movement, I seized Hina-chan's left hand and slid the ring onto her finger, struggling to breath. Thought. You might want the ring before you suffocate me, I gasped out. Temari and Hina-chan jumped off of me, the latter blushing while the former grabbed her left wrist, twisting it so she could see the ring. I coughed, sitting up so I could breathe without doing any more damage to my ribcage. It's beautiful, Temari said breathlessly. Hina-chan's face broke into a new smile as her eyes took in the ring that was now hers. I stood and walked closer to Hina-chan, hugging her waist. It was my mother's, I said, my eyes resting on the ring before moving to my mate's happy smile. I changed a little bit, adding the amethyst and the inscription on the inside, but everything else is the same. When I mentioned the inscription, Hina-chan slid the ring off of her finger, studying the inside in the light. Always and everywhere, she read, sharing a smile with me while Temari looked a little confused. Hinata-chan smiled at her expression, sliding the ring back onto her finger. Always and everywhere. That was what we promised to each other. That's how I said yes, she explained. Temari cooed, smiling at us just as Tori marched up behind her. Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto, she growled. Give me a reason why I shouldn't kill you right now, because that would mean the wedding's off? I said nervously. Tori followed Temari's gaze and found the ring before she went through a complete transformation, extremely dangerous and angry psychopath to equally dangerous giggling teenager. I slipped away, desperate for a little quieter atmosphere. I found myself in the quietest spot, next to Shikamaru and Zabuza. Shikamaru glanced at the girls I had left behind and sighed. Troublesome, he muttered. What did you do to get them like that? He asked me, watching the girls laugh. His personality shining through, Kiba glanced up and started walking towards the three excited kunoichi, wondering what had happened and if he could use it to his advantage. You'll hear when Kiba finds out. He won't be very happy, I said, hiding deeper in the shadows as Haku, Sakura, and Ino walked towards the sphere of insanity and joy that seemed to emanate from the ring on Hinata-chan's finger. I grabbed a cup of punch and almost drank it before noticing the smell and pouring it out. Walking back to Zabuza, I sighed a little angrily. Do you know who spiked the punch? It smells like sake, I said. Zabuza shook his head and Shikamaru glanced at the cup in his hand before pouring the drink into the bushes. All three of us, as well as the rest of the party, cringed when Kiba started yelling. Naruto! I am going to kill you! He growled, stalking towards me. I sighed and glanced sideways at Hinata-chan, shrugging apologetically. Shikamaru glanced at me, his eyebrows raised. What did you do? He asked as Kiba came closer. Might have proposed. Asuma's cigarette fell out of his mouth. Too? Kurenai asked, watching her student clench his fists. Hinata-chan? I said a little nervously. Kurenai's face went from anxious to happiness and she walked towards Hina-chan, asking to see the ring. I sighed in disbelief. Her student is coming over her to rip my head off and she wants to see the ring? What is it with women that make them so troublesome? Shikamaru offered. I nodded and Kiba stopped in front of me, fuming. You have 3 seconds to convince why I shouldn't kill you, he growled. I shook my head and sighed, because I'm a 12-year-old jounin. You can't. I was interrupted by a kunai scratching my cheek. Kiba smiled evilly. 5 seconds are up, he snarled. I sighed and sent out a pulse of killing intent towards the Inuzuka. He collapsed. The rest of the party looked at me, questions in their eyes, and I knelt at the Inuzuka, checking his pulse. He's fine, I reported. Killing intent. Picked up the strict back in Kumo. I'll take him inside, I volunteered. I picked him up and carried Kiba to the living room, placing him on the couch. I put a blanket over him and poured a glass of water, leaving it on the coffee table for him once he woke up. I came back out inside, nobody had moved. Can you do something? I asked Hina-chan through our seal. She shook her head. All I can do is announce the do it. It'll distract the kunoichi. I can handle the guys. Okay, then. You brought this on yourself, she pressed, glancing at her left hand. So, Tori, she began loudly. You said you wanted to help plan my and Naruto-kun's wedding? She asked loudly, pointing to her left hand. Tori's eyes widened and she smiled, tackling my mate in a hug as all of the girls raced towards Hinata-chan, all wanting to see the ring. I shook my head and turned to the guys and said 2 words that were sure to get everyone's attention. Bachelor party, I said, smiling quietly. It worked. All the guys, even Shikamaru, walked over to me and started throwing around ideas. If Kiba had been awake, and not wanting to kill me, I'm sure he would have made a number of suggestions. The party didn't last much longer after Kiba's would-be attack. When people began to leave, I smiled as I watched Sasuke follow Sakura away. Shino was one of the first to leave, offering to take Kiba home. After a quick Hiraishin, the Sand siblings were all safely returned, none the wiser. The shinobi all left in ones and twos until I sat in my living room with Kakashi, Zabuza, and Haku. Married already? You're making me feel old, Kakashi complained. I shrugged. You still have time, Kakashi. I'm sure Shizune would be willing to pick off where you left off, I winked. The copy nin chuckled, shaking his head. If it happens, it happens. Besides, I thought we put that in the never talk about ever again part of our brains. I could always talk about the time you kissed. I agree, never talk about ever again, I said loudly, overpowering the rest of his sentence. Besides, Hiyashi and I agreed that the wedding would be postponed until Hinata-chan becomes a Chunin. She's sticking to plan more than I am, so that means Chunin exams. They're coming up, Kakashi reminded me. I nodded, smiling. I know that, Kakashi. I was appointed a Jounin sensei. And, unlike you, I actually go to the Jounin meetings every week. Hiruzen is lucky if you go once or twice a year. I'm busy, Kakashi said, shrugging. I scoffed and Zabuza rolled his eyes. I glanced at Haku, already asleep on the couch. I shushed Kakashi and pointed to her, a finger on my lips. I lifted her gently, trying to not wake the kunoichi. I carried her into the room that she had claimed as her own. When Haku was safe and asleep, Zabuza left for his own room on the second floor. Kakashi left for his own apartment soon after, leaving me in the silence of the Namikaze house. Instead of going to sleep I was wide awake. I created a dozen shadow clones and went down to the Namikaze records, learning the clan history. The Namikaze were an old clan, related to the Senju clan. The Sage of Six Paths had two sons, naming his younger son his successor on his deathbed. The older son, who craved power for the sake of having power, felt embittered and his descendants became the Uchiha clan. The younger son, whose ideals centered on gaining power to protect and love, had two sons, just like his father. The older son became the next head of the Senju clan while the younger branched off and became the founder of the Namikaze clan. The two clans stayed allied with each other, sharing ideals and morals. When Konoha was founded, the Namikaze acted as the bridge between the Uchiha and the Senju. Despite their ties and past allegiances, the Namikaze tried to stay as open-minded as possible, a trait that helped them to befriend the Uchiha. After the founding of Konoha, something strange happened to the Namikaze clan. Due to some unknown cause, it became increasingly rare for Namikaze women to bear sons. Without men to carry on the name, the Namikaze name dwindled down to a small number. There were still Namikaze by blood, from the mother's side, but they weren't recognized by name. By the time Kyuubi attacked Konoha 12 years ago, my father was the last true Namikaze in both name and blood. Eventually, I left the scrolls in the clan records, stumbling to my bedroom and collapsed on my bed, the day's events finally catching up to me. I smiled, remembering Hinata-chan's eyes in the starlight, and fell asleep, the smile never leaving my face. My life was a blur of events and memories, all leading up to the Chunin exams. D rank, D rank, D rank, D rank. Mission, 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 mission. Training, 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 training. Some more D-ranked missions and I'd repeat the cycle. Eventually, I gave Sasuke and Sakura the forms to enter the Chunin exams, smiling proudly at each of them. I had grown a little, not much, but enough to make me taller than Sakura at least. What are Chunin exams? Sakura asked excitedly, glancing down the form. Yep. I pulled a few strings. Usually only 3 Junin teams can enter the exams, so you are getting a new teammate for the course of the exams, I said, smiling when Sasuke asked who their new teammate was. Yuki Haku. Awesome. Sakura cheered. Sasuke nodded, as happy as he could get without exploding from the pressure. He gave a genuine smile. I chuckled as Sakura pretended to cough, covering her sharp intake of breath as she saw happiness cross the Uchiha's face. Take the day off, I ordered. You've been training really hard the past few weeks. If you want to enter the exams, you need to get a signature from a parent or guardian. If you are taking the exams, hand me that paper, signed, by the end of the week. Don't give it to Kakashi, he'll probably lose it, I said, ignoring their chuckles as I tried to remember anything I'd forgotten. I think that's it. If you have any questions, talk to me or Kakashi. Also, I recommend you start learning your way around the Forest of Death, I hinted. Sasuke nodded, a little confusion in his dark eyes overshadowed by determination and acceptance. Sakura, seeing Sasuke's eyes, nodded slowly. Johnny, I said, waving before closing my eyes and her eye shining to my kitchen. I opened my eyes and found Zabuza at the fridge, a carton of milk at his mouth. Really, Zabuza? You aren't the only person in this house to drink me, I complained. Zabuza put the lid back onto the milk and put it back in the fridge, shrugging. What are you doing home? Don't you have to chase a cat around or something? Nope, Tora has other Jinan teams to terrorize. Team 10 is really starting to hate that cat, I chuckled, taking the milk out of the fridge and pouring it down the sink, ignoring Zabuza's protests. There are glasses in that cabinet. If you want milk, pour some into a glass. Don't drink from the carton, it's gross. Whatever. Where's your team? Kakashi is probably reading Icha Paradise. I think Sasuke and Sakura are going to explore the 44th training ground. The Forest of Death? Haku asked, appearing in the doorway. I nodded and she pursed her lips. Can you help me find them in there? No problem, I nodded before glancing at Zabuza. I'll pick up milk on the way home. We're out of. Haku was cut off when I pushed her out of the door. She rolled her eyes and we started running towards the Forest of Death, leading the way as I slowed down so that Haku could keep up. I jumped over the fence again, about to point out the hole in the fence when Haku ran up a tree near the fence and jumped over and onto another tree. I smiled and jumped to join her in the trees, activating demon eyes. I stared into the forest, searching for their chakra signatures. Finally, I found them close to the tower. I was about to run towards them when I realized how close they were to each other. I felt like an intruder as I watched Sasuke lean in to kiss Sakura. I pulled the chakra away from my eyes, the color drifting back to blue as I sat down on the tree limb. We should probably stay here a while, I hinted. Haku's face broke into a grin. Did he? Yep. I don't think we should disturb them. If Haku had an inner Haku, she was cheering for her new best friend. After a while, I reactivated my dojutsu so I could see if they were done. Finally, I nodded to Haku and we both stood, stretching. Without a word, I led her to her two new teammates. When we got to the tower, I noticed Sasuke and Sakura sitting down on the grass, talking. I grimaced, not wanting to interrupt what was obviously flirting between the two Jinan. Haku spared me, announcing our presence. There you are, she called from the trees, jumping down to meet them. Both jumped and Haku pretended not to notice. I followed her out of the trees, fighting a grin. We've been looking everywhere for you guys. Haku wanted to get some training in. I thought you 3 against me for the bells again would help get your skills in line with everyone else's. Sakura nodded, blushing slightly. Sasuke didn't nod, a smile growing on his face. I mentally smirked. Can we go back to our training ground? This place gives me the creeps, Sakura shivered. Sasuke threw her a confident smile. I smiled, if there was any arrogance in his expression. It was overshadowed by the reassuring comfort. We aren't going back to our normal training ground. We're going to one of the namikaze fields that I set up just for your 3, I answered. Grab on. I put a seal in the middle of the training ground, I said, holding out my arm. The 3 Jinan, Haku included, held onto my arm, closing their eyes. I closed my own eyes and focused on the Hiraishin kunai I had sent into the small woods dotting the namikaze grounds. Before we begin, I said, stepping away and taking a scroll out of my vest. Sasuke, I'd like to give you this, I said, unsealing Kamisora. This is Kamisora, my first blade, I said, holding the hilt towards him. He grasped the cloth-covered ebony and took the sword, drawing it out of its sheath before looking at me. Why are you giving me this? He asked, testing the sword's weight in his hand. I've noticed that, the more surprises you have up your sleeve, the more battles you win. Learning jutsu is just one part of being a ninja. Versatility is just as, if not more, important. I learned kenjutsu for the situations where I was against a strong opponent, chakra gets depleted, a katana does not, I shrugged. Sasuke studied the blade before nodding, attaching the sheath to his belt. When you are ready to learn, go to either myself, Zabuza, or a Tokubetsu jounin named Gekko Hayate. Hi, he nodded, sheathing the katana in a fluid motion. I nodded, smiling at the 3 Jinan. Begin, I said calmly. Sun shining into the trees. Doton, Shinjuzanshu no Jutsu, Sakura shouted, panting as the battle wore on. I was playing defense, letting the 3 wear themselves out until I decided they were ready. I let Sakura pull me into the ground, wanting to see the follow-up attack. Instead of Sakura going through seals, she jumped away from me. I glanced behind me and saw Sasuke sprinting towards me, his arm sparking with a chidori. I closed my eyes and her eye shined to one of my kunai scattered in the woods. Hyotan. Faku Sutorapu, Haku shouted close by me. I rolled my eyes at the name as ice began to creep up my legs, freezing me to the tree limb. Foxtrap? Really? I shouted, focusing demonic chakra to my legs to shatter the ice. My face fell into a frown as the demonic chakra seemed to feed the ice. Okay, demon chakra is good for it. How about nature chakra? I said to myself, closing my eyes and concentrating on the forest around me. Seeing the chakra, I began to pull it into myself, focusing it at my legs. The ice shattered, just in time. I bent backwards to avoid Haku's ice senbone. I swallowed as they hit the tree trunk behind me. Haku was aiming to kill. How did you do that? That jutsu is supposed to be inescapable, Haku asked, narrowing her usually friendly eyes. It would have been if I were any other person. I'm trained in Shinjutsu, meaning I can see, absorb, and manipulate nature chakra if I'm still, I explained, remembering my battle with Pain, the path who had the ability to absorb chakra and ninjutsu attacks. I felt the forest shift, sliding away from me. I smiled as the woods blackened and the shadows leapt at me. I closed my eyes and briefly cut off my chakra, breaking myself out of the genjutsu. Good job, Sakura. You're making progress, I commented, nodding at the kunoichi. Next time, let the target populate the genjutsu. They'll subconsciously think of things they're afraid of and it will slip into the genjutsu. Sakura nodded at me before jumping towards me, her hand glowing with chakra. I leapt away as the tree branch shattered under her fist. She met my eyes with determination and I activated Demon Eyes, giving her a vulpine grin as she landed onto one of the lower branches. Sasuke shunshined in front of her, Haku to her right. Haku lifted her hand, revealing a handful of senbon as Sasuke and Sakura each drew a kunai. Sasuke glanced at the two kunoichi, nodding once. The two kunoichi jumped away in opposite directions as Sasuke rushed me. Realizing what they were doing, I jumped, dropping down towards the ground quickly, dragged by my weights. Haku and Sakura nearly collided where I had been seconds earlier. Somersaulting, Sakura landed in a crouch on the branch, Haku skidding to a halt. Sasuke jumped down to meet me at the ground. He started a taijutsu match, something he should have thought better of. I wasn't using the War Awakuma, I used a variant of the Gentle Fist, relying on my Demon Eyes to keep track of Sasuke's chakra network. Haijutsu, Mikyu Hayuzu, I heard Haku mutter as Sasuke jumped away from me. 21 mirror materialized and circled around me, forming a dome. My hands were about to form seals when I heard something I hadn't expected. Doton, Dorodomu, Sakura shouted, holding her open palm open towards Haku's mirrors. A wall of earth rose around me, closing at the top to form a dome. My eyes narrowed. Haku's mirrors weren't a problem but Sakura's dome could do a lot of damage. Remembering one of the technique's abilities, I raised my voice, trying to keep the panic out. Sakura. Don't take my chakra. If you get any of Kyuubi's your body will attack it, I shouted through the wall, already dodging Haku's senbon. I sighed, not wanting to destroy both layers at once. If I destroyed them at the same time, Haku wouldn't have a chance to escape without injury. Haku, I'm breaking out of here. Come next to me so I don't hurt you, I said seriously, closing my eyes. Haku studied me, thinking I was trying to trick her. I opened an eye. Fine, don't let me break out of here the fun way, I chuckled, pouting. I rolled my eyes, focusing on one of the Hiraishin seals outside of the domes of ice and earth. I opened my eyes to a trap. Sasuke stood, wielding a kunai. I glanced around me, mentally counting his shadow clones. Too many, I held my hands up in surrender, glancing at the gathered Hiraishin kunai at my feet. You moved all of my kunai? I asked, lowering my hands. Sasuke smirked. Can't have you escaping, can we? He chuckled. Sakura and Haku walked towards us. I glanced at Sakura and sighed, she looked exhausted, the earth prison draining too much chakra. Are you okay? Sasuke asked. Sakura nodded, leaning on Haku. No, you're and sit, I ordered. The young kunoichi nodded slowly before collapsing against a tree. Did Kazura teach you that jutsu? Yeah, she mumbled as I reactivated Demon Eyes, studying her chakra coils. I nodded once. I'm saying this as a sensei, don't use that unless you absolutely have to. Even then, never use it on me. If you take another ninja's chakra, it won't hurt you. If anything, it'll replenish your reserves. If you take any of Kyuubi's chakra, it could kill you, I said, reaching into my vest for a soldier pill. Eat this and relax. You all pass, I smiled. Haku sat down next to Sakura, twirling a piece of grass in between her fingers. Sasuke glanced at the girls before standing by me. Moving quickly, I grabbed Kamisora from its sheath, studying the polished metal and glancing at Sasuke. This katana has been all over the world. I had this forged right after I took Hariguma out of Suna. I had always meant to learn how to wield it but it was mostly for show until I met Zabuza and Haku. After learning who we were, Zabuza offered to teach me Kenjutsu if I helped Haku with her medical ninjutsu. I accepted immediately. It's not every day when one of the 7 swordsmen of the mist take on an apprentice. When Araguma and I left Zabuza and Haku, they were headed towards grass. Araguma and I left for the Land of Iron, and later the mist, to further my Kenjutsu and expand my spy network, I said, remembering my journey fondly. Kamisora, I murmured, placing my left hand on the flat of the blade before passing it back to Sasuke. Take care of that sword, I'm very fond of it, I said, glancing at the sword as Sasuke slid it back into its black sheath. He nodded and I turned towards the girls. Sakura looked much better, the color returning to her face. She stood, still leaning on the tree just in case. I think I'm better now, she said, looking up at me. What was that? That was a soldier pill. They are made of powerful stimulants and nutrients to help the body replenish chakra and stamina. Certain recipes have different reactions. One is rumored to be so powerful it can keep a shinobi fighting for 3 days without rest. In my experience, it is better to avoid the stronger pills, they can have negative side effects. What kind of side effects? Mostly anxiety, I answered, thinking. I think all 3 of you should start carrying soldier pills. They are useful if you know how and when to use them, I said, reaching into my vest and pulling out 6 pills, 2 each. I'm going to give you 2 but don't use them at the same time. This is my own recipe, I designed it to be fairly weak to lessen the side effects and concentrated on replenishing chakra sooner. I passed the food pills out and each Shanan nodded, storing the pills in various pockets. I dismissed the team and began to walk back to the Namikaze Manor, stopping when I felt Sasuke running to catch up. I glanced at him and the paper in his hand. I read the paper, he began, sounding a little anxious. It says I need a parent or guardian to sign it and that I can't have my sensei sign it. Kakashi is my guardian, he finished. I nodded slowly, trying to find a solution. It was true, students could not get their sensei's signature to enter in the exams. I hadn't thought about that when I gave the team the permission slips. I know, I said, looking up at him with a smile. Give it to Tori. She's your clan head, making her your guardian. If the other villages have a problem with that, I can explain the situation, I said, smiling. Sasuke smiled gratefully for just a moment before he turned and raced to join Sakura and Haku as they walked back to the village. I turned away, a smile on my face before I remembered what was waiting for me at home. My content smile transformed into a grimace. My living room was covered in lilac, white, and cream. I chuckled, the sight of the demon of the bloody mist amidst all the lace. My chuckle died when Ino and Hinata forced their way through the sea of wedding preparations. I backed away reflexively as Ino pulled a tape measure off of a pile on the coffee table. What are you doing? I asked, trying not to sound terrified of the Yamanaka. Relax, Naruto, I'm not going to hurt you. We need your measurements for your suit, Ino almost growled. Zabuza winced, subtly leaving the room as I glared at him. It's okay, Naruto-kun, Hinata-chan chuckled quietly. I already got mine done for the dress. It's your turn. Just stand still and hold your arms out, she said. I grimaced but obeyed as Ino snapped her fingers. Stay, she ordered. I stood up straight, holding my arms out while Ino took the measurements, recording them on a notebook Hina-chan had pulled out of the frill. When she was done, she retracted the tape measure and walked back into the kitchen. Hina-chan looked at me sympathetically. Just be glad Tori has classes to teach, she smiled optimistically. Sorry about your living room. That's okay, I can just make some clones to clean, I pointed out, my hands forming the familiar seal. Kage Bunshine no Jutsu, I muttered, 3 clones appearing out of the materials. They groaned with me. You know what to do, I said. The clones grimaced but began to straighten up the mess, organizing the supplies and samples into various piles. When Ino came back 10 minutes later, she didn't glance at the lack of mess as she turned to Hina-chan and I. Okay, we need to pick out flowers now, she planned, glancing at the notebook in her hands. Hinata-chan and I will pick out the flowers while Naruto stands there not touching anything. Got it? Okay, Hina-chan said. I nodded, thanking Kami for not making me pick out flowers. Ino and Hinata-chan talked excitedly about the wedding all the way to Yamanaka flowers. Seeing us walk in the door, Yamanaka Lise, Ino's mother, smiled widely. Here comes the bride, she said in a sing-song voice, making Ino laugh. Ohio-san, she smiled, pulling Hina-chan to the orchids. The groom's here too. Don't worry, he knows not to touch anything, she said, glancing at me before suggesting different flowers and colors. Lise steadied me quietly, still smiling. You must be Namikaze Naruto, she said, noting my blonde hair and blue eyes. I nodded, holding out my hand. She took it, still smiling. "Just call me Lise." "It's nice to meet you," I said, taking my hand back and staring at the girls, sighing. "I will never understand." "That's what I said," Inoiki said, walking through the back door. Ino smiled at her father before talking about the meaning of lilies. Staring at his daughter, he shook his head. "Nope, still don't." "Ohio, Inoiki-san," I greeted. He smiled at me before glancing back at Hina-chan and Ino. "Picking out flowers? They don't really need you here," Inoiki said, his eyes on the front door. "I'm here for moral support or something," I chuckled. Inoiki glanced at his wife. Lise rolled her eyes at her husband, nodding. "Ino, I'm stealing Naruto for a moment," he said quietly. Ino didn't notice over the sound of her own voice. Inoiki flashed a smile, victorious, and dragged me out of the door to the Jounin standby station. Scattered all across the station, I noticed Kakashi, Asuma, Shikaku, Kuza, and a number of other Jounin. I sighed, noting that they were all male, almost guaranteeing that we were gathered to talk about my bachelor party. "Kakashi, why do I feel like this is all you're doing?" I growled, watching the silver-haired ninja put away his orange book. He grinned under his mask. "Because it is," he shrugged. "I think Kiba calmed down, by the way. He would have been invited, but he isn't a Jounin?" I guessed. Asuma shook his head. "His mother wouldn't let him come," he chuckled. I sighed. "That woman is never going to like me, is she?" I groaned. Kakashi shrugged. "Do we have to do this now? I really don't want pink lilies at my wedding." "Don't worry, Ino hates pink," Inoiki smirked. "Purple lilies maybe, but never pink," he chuckled when I growled. Shikaku sighed. "Bachelor parties are troublesome," he muttered, right on cue. "I don't even think there's a date for the wedding," I argued. "We can't plan the party if we don't have a date." "Come on, Naruto. You know Hinata is going to have a bachelorette party if Kurenai has anything to do with it," Asuma said, pulling out a cigarette. I shrugged. "Good for her," I shrugged. "Besides, I doubt her father will allow that. Hina-chan is still the Hyuga heiress." "Ooh," I brought up Hiyashi. That made them think. I walked to the door, my hand up in a wave. "You don't need me to plan a party. Surprise me," I called. "Johnny." I shut the door behind me and heard Kakashi complain about me taking all of his lines again. With a smile, I ran back to Yamanaka Flowers. I should have known better. I should have expected this, I yelled at myself as I was chewed out by an angry blonde teenager. Yamanaka Ino had just as big a temper as Sakura. Not as bad as Hina-chan when she was pregnant, but still terrifying. "Never thought I'd see this," the great Kyoritsune, quaking in fear before a teenage girl, a familiar voice. I grinned, turning towards the door. "Sabaku no Gara. You're a little early," I commented. The redhead chuckled and took a step forward before hitting the wall of killing intent radiating from Ino. He glanced up at the blonde, impressed. "What did he do this time?" "Ditched his fiancée to plan his bachelor party," she growled. Gara looked at me, smirking. "Ino, I told you, your father dragged me away." "I don't even want a bachelor party," I exclaimed. Kankuro and Kiba, the epitome of perversion, both stuck their heads in the door. "What?" they both shouted, indignant before turning to the other and complaining about me. "Shut up, Kankuro," another familiar voice ordered. The puppeteer shrunk away from the door as his sister stepped in. "Hey, Hina-chan, Naruto," she said, nodding at each of us. "Tamari," I nodded back. "Shikamaru should be at his house if you want to bother him some more," I divulged. Tamari's eyes lit up with mischief and she adjusted her battle fan on her back, grinning, before walking out of the door. The two had gotten along just as they had during my party, just as they had in my past. I hoped that they'd get together in this timeline as well. Gara watched his sister leave and sighed, glancing at me. "Poor Shikamaru," he commented. I shrugged. "Shikamaru will be fine no matter how many times he complains about it. Tamari is a good match for him, she'll make sure things get done. That's how most Nara relationships work, just look at his father." "Speaking of relationships, congrats, you two," Gara said, smiling at Hina-chan. She blushed and I chuckled. "Speaking of other relationships, what's going on with you and Haku?" I asked, making the redhead blush. My smile widened and I raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" the great Iriguma blushing. "Never thought I'd see the day," I grinned. "Yeah, today is completely unbelievable. I'm thinking yellow orchids with purple irises on the tables." Ino drifted off while Hinata-chan's face broke into a smile. "I was thinking that. And the bouquets, white hibiscus and lilacs?" Ino asked, bouncing on her heels excitedly. "Of course," Hina-chan laughed. Gara and I sweat dropped. Gara left all too soon, unable to suffer through the preparations. Since he left, Haku, Sakura, and Tenten all joined us, only adding to the nightmare. "Who are you getting to make the dress?" Sakura asked, her hands full of cake ideas. I almost regretted not having a repeat of our last wedding, Jounin uniforms and friends. The wedding presided over by Gaara, the god Daimakaze Kage. Almost, I took one look at Hina-chan's face and abandoned the thought. "I'm not sure. I've had a few suggestions but I can't decide who to go to." Hinata-chan's voice drifted off as Ino rattled off preparations. "We need to come up with an invite list. After that, we still need to come up with a seating chart. Where are you going to have the wedding?" Ino's rapid talking came to a halt and she looked at me expectantly. I struggled to remember the question. "On the Namikaze grounds. I found this place the first time." "I don't need a backstory, just lead the way," Ino cut me off, pointing down the road. I shook my head and held out my arm. Hinata-chan, Sakura, and Haku immediately grabbed my arm while the others looked on, confused. "Hiraishin time, grab on." I already put down a Hiraishin seal. "I figured you'd want to see the place," I said, shrugging. Ino and Tenten shifted the bundles in their arms and closed their hands around my arm. "Close your eyes, it's a little disorienting," I warned. Each girl closed their eyes and I shut my eyes, focusing on the Hiraishin seal near the white gazebo. Flashback. I wandered through the Namikaze grounds for the first time, exploring every inch of my new home. I was about to turn around and walk back to the Namikaze manor when I spotted something, stepping stones through the woods. Curious, I followed the smooth slate slabs until a garden arch, covered with vibrant blue forget-me-nots. Looking up from the ground, my jaw dropped slightly. I was staring at an open field, surrounded loosely by a circle of trees. Just inside the ring of trees, patches of lilac calla lilies and yellow tiger lilies made their home, spreading lazily into the clearing. In the center of the field sat a forlorn gazebo, the white wood rotting and falling apart. Following the stepping stones, I walked further into the clearing, walking towards the gazebo. I studied the Victorian style, somewhat out of place but still beautiful despite its bad shape. The 8 walls were open to the air and looked like they were hand-carved. There was a single bench inside the large gazebo, directly opposite the door. I glanced around the clearing smiling for no reason. The flowers seemed to imbue life into the air, something calming and exciting at the same time. Flashback. Staring at the now repaired gazebo, I heard Ino gasp at the sight of the flowers circling the clearing. They were under more control, residing inside a clear boundary I had set for them. Walking over the flowers, Ino's face fell into a confused frown. "Someone was working on these," she mumbled. My hand went to the back of my neck and I chuckled. "That was me," I admitted. Ino nodded, studying the rest of the clearing. "When did you do all this?" she asked, impressed. I shrugged. "Shadow clones. The only part I really did myself was stain the gazebo," I said, glancing at the rich color of the wood. I had not added anything to the original design. The bench sat in the same space it had before. "It's beautiful," Tenten breathed, looking around the clearing. Sakura smiled, sitting on the grass. "I'm stealing this clearing when I get married," she said, closing her eyes as the sun hit her face through the tall trees. "Sure," I chuckled. "I'm sure he'll appreciate getting married surrounded by flowers," I said, laughing at the image. The image got less humorous when my imagination thought of Sakura's happiness. Hina-chan looked mesmerized by the clearing. She dropped the items in her hands and sat down next to Sakura, feeling the sun's warmth on her face. "There's something about this clearing." Her voice drifted off as I sat next to her. "I know," I said quietly. Hina-chan smiled up at me before laying her head in my lap. I played with her hair while Ino explored the clearing, making sure it was perfect for her friend's wedding. Sighing happily, she sat next to us. Haku and Tenten joined us on the grass and we sat talking, catching up on recent events. The sun began to approach the horizon and I sighed, not really wanting to leave. "Did it pass inspection, Ino pig?" Sakura asked lightly, leaning on her elbows as she looked at the blonde kunoichi. "Yes it did, billboard brow," she smirked back. I glanced up and groaned, watching someone approached. Ino glanced up, her eyes not identifying the ninja. "What now, Kakashi?" I growled. "Probably here to drag me off so he and the other guys can plan a bachelor's party." Haku laughed quietly as Tenten scowled. "Guys are idiots," she remarked. I raised an eyebrow. "Not you, just most guys." "Trouble with Neji?" Hina-chan asked. Tenten sighed, shrugging. "No idea. He's getting really tense with the Chunin exams coming up," Tenten said, leaning onto her master scroll. I shrugged. "He's in the branch family," I reminded her. "He thinks he has more to prove than the rest of us. Most of the rookie 9 are heirs," I said, smiling at Hina-chan as she grimaced. "Have I ever mentioned how much being the Hyuga heiress sucks?" You can't have any fun, she complained. I'm glad that Hanabi will take over soon. She's better suited for politics and images than I am. You do a great job, Hina-chan. I protested quietly. If it makes you feel better, I've insulted a few clans and I'm on the council. You only did that to help Zabuza and I, Haku defended. I smiled at her, yawning. Tell that to Tsume. She hasn't let Kiba anywhere near me after the party, I said as Kakashi approached us. Hey Kakashi. I called to the Jounin, waving. Sorry, girls, I need to steal Naruto for a bit, he said, smiling. Go ahead, Hina-chan smiled before glaring at me. Don't come back until you got drunk and did something stupid, that's what a bachelor party is. Get it out of your system, she ordered. Also, tell the guys who your best man and groomsman are. Only if you tell the girls now, I want to see their faces, I countered. Hina-chan sighed but nodded. All of you and Tamari-chan are bridesmaids, she began, looking unwilling to say who her maid of honor was. I didn't blame her, Sakura and Ino fought enough. Being Hina-chan's maid of honor would only cause celebration and revenge. Who's the maid of honor? Ino asked, almost pleadingly. I winced, telling myself that Sakura was only the maid of honor because Sasuke would be my best man. It was really hard to pick. Hina-chan tried to delay the inevitable. I have to say that I could only decide after Naruto decided to make Sasuke his best man, she hinted. Sakura's eyes widened and she began her victory dance. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, Sakura shouted, hugging Hina-chan tightly as Ino fumed. Billboard brow? She snarled. I held my arm out to Kakashi, my eyes wide. Without a word, he held on and we Harai shined away, to the house. Even at that distance we could hear Ino's shouting. I winced for Hina-chan's sake. Turning to my living room, I stopped. Every male ninja I knew, Jounin, Chunin, and Junon alike, was gathered around my coffee table, laughing as someone put on some music. Someone forced a shot glass of sake in my hand. I stared at it before turning to Kakashi, incredulous. When did you put this together? I shouted over the music as a number of kunoichi came into the room, none wearing much more than lingerie and mesh armor. My palm flew to my forehead when I recognized Kurina and Anko. Kakashi only laughed. I chuckled, watching everyone get drunk and act like idiots. Before long, the only people sober were myself, Shikamaru, and Sasuke. While everyone else enjoyed the entertainment, we tried to talk over the music. By the way, Shikamaru, you're a groomsman. Don't complain about it, you're walking with Tamari, I winked, laughing as the Nara grumbled and grabbed his first glass of sake. Sasuke started laughing until I told him what role he was playing. Best man? He asked, his eyes wide. I nodded and passed him a shot glass. Sakura is Hina-chan's maid of honor, I hinted. Sasuke glanced at me before downing the alcohol. Eventually, Anko tricked me into drinking. I don't remember much from the rest of the night. I woke up with a huge hangover, groaning. I glanced around myself, noting that I wasn't alone in my bedroom. I put my face in my hands when I recognized who was sleeping next to me. I stumbled from the bed, trying not to wake Anko while I was glad to find myself mostly clothed. I picked up my shirt from the chair it was hanging on, forgotten, and tripped into the hallway. Not wanting to know what had happened with who, I avoided the guest rooms as I walked straight to the kitchen. Opening the fridge, I pulled out the orange juice. I poured myself a glass, almost missing, and walked into the living room. Needless to say, it was trashed. One of the couches was on its side, the coffee table upside down and various pieces of clothing were strewn across the room. I chuckled, recognizing Kakashi's mask lying on the armchair. If the other guys were as drunk as I remembered, they wouldn't even remember what his face looked like. Turning the couch and the coffee table right side up, I propped my feet onto the table and drank my juice, trying to remember what happened. Placing my glass on the table, I stifled a laugh as I saw my old sensei stumble out of one of the rooms wearing only his boxers, his hands covering his face and his Sharingan exposed. Your mask's over there, I said, trying not to laugh at his Pakun boxers. Kakashi nodded tiredly and put his mask on before turning and looking for his clothing. Who'd you wake up with? Don't know her name. You? Kakashi said, wincing as he put a hand on his temple. He reached down and pulled his pants out from under a couch cushion. How did they get there? You don't know her name? Harsh, I winced as I laughed. I concentrated chakra to my hand and held it to my head, trying to soothe my hangover. You dodged the question. Who'd you wake up with? He said, falling onto the couch next to me. I pulled my hand away from my head, my headache lessened, and held my hand to Kakashi's hair. Thanks. No problem, I said. After a while, I grimaced. Mitarashi Anko, I told him. His eyes widened and he leaned back. At least I woke up with my pants on, I retorted in advance. Kakashi blushed under his mask. Touché. I sat there for a while as various ninjas stumbled out of the rooms wearing more or less clothing. After they picked up their clothes, they retreated back into the guest rooms without a sound. I think Sasuke won the contest though. He stalked out of his room wearing a towel, glared at me, picked up his clothes, and walked out of the door without a word. All the rest of the clothing reclaimed, I spotted an orphan Chunin vest. Picking it up, I recognized it and laughed. Kakashi walked over to me, confused. "What is it?" "Iruka," I laughed, holding out the vest. Kakashi laughed with me, stopping when Anko stalked out of my room, my sage coat over her lack of clothing. I kept my face straight as she walked over. "Cammy, I have a hangover. Do I want to know what happened last night?" she asked, smirking at me. I coughed. "I don't think anything happened." Unlike Kakashi, I woke up wearing my pants. I smirked at the jounin. Anko chuckled before wincing. "Come here," I said, my hand glowing green. She obeyed, sitting beside me, and I put a hand to her temple. "You've got to teach me this," she said, closing her eyes as her hangover weakened. "Do you get drunk often enough to make it worth it?" I asked, chuckling as Anko glared at me, dodging the question. I pulled my hand away and pointed to Iruka's vest. "I have a feeling Iruka's going to be late." Right on cue, the Chunin appeared. He, unlike many of the ninja that had searched the living room, was wearing most of his clothes. "Looking for this, Iruka-sensei?" I smirked, holding out the flak jacket. The Chunin smiled sheepishly before walking over to me and taking his vest back. "Thanks. Damn it, I'm late," he shouted, sprinting out the front door. "Called it," I chuckled, stretching. "Never doing that again in my life. I can't even remember most of yesterday," I complained. Anko grinned. "That's what makes bachelor parties fun. You aren't supposed to know what you did, especially if you're the groom." I raised an eyebrow. "Been to a lot of bachelor parties?" I asked. If Anko had any political training, she wouldn't have grinned and nodded. However, Anko didn't have any need for niceties. "They're more fun than bachelorette parties," she shrugged. "Guys understand that you're supposed to get drunk at a party." "Tell that to Kakashi, he doesn't even know the name of the girl he slept with," I said. "It's okay, she probably won't remember his," she shrugged. I smirked. "Do you know he took his mask off yesterday?" Anko looked scandalized. "Let me guess, you can't remember?" "Okay, Naruto. That goes in the never talk about ever again box," Kakashi interjected. "Most bachelor parties do," Anko grinned. She got her lingerie together and walked towards the door. "Stealing your coat," she shouted at the door. "I want that back later," I called back. She laughed and slammed the front door behind her. I rolled my eyes and sighed, pulling a shikamaru. "Troublesome," I muttered. Kakashi laughed and stretched. "I should probably get home," he announced. "Johnny," he waved, shining away and leaving me with the cleanup. Still narrowed. I struggled, trying not to punch him in the jaw for betraying Konoha and serving heavy team. "Kabuto, can you do me a favor?" "That depends," he said warily. "It isn't much. I want you to know that I know what you're doing." "I won't give you away as long as you give your master a message," I said quietly. Kabuto's eyes flashed with panic before he killed the emotion, transforming it into arrogance. "What message?" He growled quietly at his discovery. "It isn't very long," I reassured him. He didn't look very reassured though, so I sighed and gave him the message. "Foxes eat snakes. Tell him to keep that in mind next time you see him." "Why are you telling me that? Why don't you just call some Anbu and see if they can drag me away?" He smirked. "I wanted to give your master a chance to stop before he gets in over his head. If he comes to Konoha, I can guarantee that both myself and the professor will stand in his way. As for the Anbu, they might get hurt attacking you. I know you are strong and that you still have a lot of potential. Don't make me attack you and I'll leave you alone." "I'm not going to tell anyone about your allegiances," I promised. Leaving the corner I had taken for my chat with Heavy Team Spy, I glanced around at the group. Most of the ninja were still looking at me, a number of them were scowling from trying and failing to overhear us. Sighing, I watched as the Otonin sprinted through the crowd. "This is going to kill my ears," I complained to Q. He had no sympathy for me, arguing that I should let them attack the traitor. Instead of following his advice, I ducked under Dosu, grabbing his left ankle and wincing as a sound wave attacked me, shrieking in my ears. I twisted the Otonin around, grabbing his right wrist to meet his ankle. I glanced tiredly at the ninja now pinned under my right hand. "Otonin. Judging from the melody arm, you must be Kinu to Dosu," I said, my left hand going to my ear. "Crude but effective, especially if your opponent has sensitive hearing," I commented, releasing him as I stood. I offered a hand to him, he studied it with narrowed eyes. "It's just a hand, it won't bite." I bit back a grimace, remembering data techniques. Dosu ignored my hand and stood slowly. He glared at me with his left eye. "I don't need your help," he growled. I sighed, moving my hand to the pocket in my sage coat. "I'm only being polite," I shrugged, staring into the crowd of Jinan before raising my voice. "There will be no more fighting in here. That extends to all nations, including Konoha Jinan," I said, nodding at the rookie 9. All but Kiba stared at their feet. A large cloud of smoke rose from the front of the room. "Quiet, pests!" Morino Iviki shouted from the smoke. The smoke lifted to reveal Iviki and his crew, all facing the Jinan. "Sorry to keep you waiting," he said quietly. "I am Morino Iviki, proctor of the first test in the Chunin exam." Unwilling to break the tension, I stifled a laugh as the Jinan all froze. "You," from the hidden sound, he shouted, pointing to Dosu. "No doing whatever you want before the exam. Or do you want to fail before it even starts?" he threatened. Dosu glared at me before turning back to Iviki. "I apologize. This is our first time taking the exams. It will not happen again. I'm only going to say this once, so listen up. There will be no battles, competitions, or the like without permission from the proctors. Even if you do get permission, actions to kill your opponent will not be permitted. Anyone that messes with me will be disqualified immediately," he threatened. This exam looks easy," Zaku muttered. He quieted when Iviki spoke. "Now then, we will start the first test of the Chunin exam. Turn in your applications and take a number card. Sit at the desk with your number on it. Then we will hand out the written test." When all the applicants were seated, I stood close to Iviki as he explained the rules. I watched as the rookies all tried not to panic. "Know those that commit awkward cheating doom themselves. If you want to be a Chunin, know that shinobi should act like exemplary shinobi. Also, if one team member gets 0 points, the entire team shall be disqualified," he announced, grinning sadistically. "This test lasts 1 hour. The last question will be given after 45 minutes. The second hand on the clock twitched to 12. "Begin." At once, all the Jinan turned over their papers, reading each question. I smiled as I watched Sakura, already scribbling at the parchment. I smiled as Sasuke figured out the puzzle, activating his Sharingan behind his hair. Haku created mirrors to reflect other people's answers. Akamaru began to bark the answers to Kiba. Tenten used mirrors on the ceiling connected by ninja wire to see other people's tests. Shino began to use flies to gather the answers. Neji activated his Byakugan. Ino used her family's mind transfer jutsu on Sakura. Gaara created his third eye out of sand. Kankuro used crow to gather the answers. The 45 minutes sped by as the same teams were disqualified. Pacing the front, Iviki stopped and turned to the Jinan. "All right. Here is the 10th question," he announced. "But, before that, I'm going to add some rules for the last question." Just as the room tensed, Kankuro walked back in, smiling before he read the atmosphere. Iviki chuckled at him. "Aren't you lucky? It looks like playing with dolls paid off. Anyway, go sit down," Iviki ordered. Kankuro smiled and walked back to his chair, dropping the answers on Tamari's desk as he walked by. "Let me explain. These are the hopeless rules." "First," he began, "you guys will have to choose whether or not you will take this 10th question." "What do you mean, choose?" Tamari shouted. "What happens if you don't take the question?" "If you choose not to take this question, your score will be 0. In other words, you will fail," Iviki said, smiling evilly. I stifled a chuckle out of respect for the Jinan. "And of course, the same goes for your teammates." The room got louder as the Jinan protested the rule. They quieted when Iviki spoke again. "And one more rule," he said, looking down. "If you choose to take it and are unable to answer correctly, then you will lose your right to take the Chunin exams ever again." Kiba broke the inevitable silence, just as he had last time. "What kind of ridiculous rule is that? Besides, there are plenty of people here who have taken the Chunin exams before," he shouted, indignant. Akamaru barked in agreement while Iviki laughed, silencing the room once more. "You're just unlucky," he said, staring at the Jinan. "I make the rules this year. But, I give you the option to go back. For those of you who aren't confident, you can choose not to take it and take the exam next year or the year after that. Let's begin," Iviki growled. "The 10th question. Those who will not be taking it, raise your hands. Once I confirm your number, leave the room." Once more, the Konoha Jinan, number 40, was the first to leave, taking his team with him out the door. More and more Jinan raised their hands and I saw Kiba tense up. Briefly I wondered who would shout out and end the test. Eventually, watching the teams dwindle down, Kiba snapped. "Give us the damn question. None of us are going to quit at this point, just get it over with," he yelled to the proctor. Ibiki put on his most serious face and stared at the class. "I'll say it again. This is a life-altering decision. If you want to quit, now is your chance." No one moved. Ibiki strode forward, counting the genin. Ibiki glanced around at the sentinel ninja, each nodding their head. When he looked at me, standing at the left of the chalkboard, I grinned and nodded. "I like your determination. For those who are still here. The first exam. You've passed it," he announced. The genin all looked surprised. Sakura was the first to recover. What does that mean? All of a sudden, you're telling us that we all passed," she shouted, standing at her desk. "What about the 10th question?" "There never was a 10th question," Ibiki said, laughing. "Well, you can look at your decision to stay as the 10th question." He smiled. Tamari was the next to complain. "Hey! Then what were the first 9 questions for? It was just a waste of time." The Sunakunoichi shouted at the interrogator. "No, not a waste," he said, turning. Ibiki went on to explain the purpose of each aspect of the test, bringing in the hypothetical situation again. "Now, this mission. Will you take it or not? Because you want your life spared, because your comrades will be in danger. Can you get away from dangerous missions? The answer is no. There are going to be missions that you must accept, no matter how dangerous or risky it may be. Showing your courage to your teammates in a tight spot, as well as the ability to get through hardships. Those are qualities needed of Chunin. In a pinch, there are those who cannot risk their own fate and those who waver and give up on their chances thinking that they will have another chance. I believe that those fools who lack determination have no right to become a Chunin. You have passed through the gates, the first part of the Chunin exams has been completed. I wish you." Ibiki's speech was cut short by the flying ball of cloth that was Mitarashi Anko. 2 kunai later and the banner was up, hiding both myself and Ibiki to the genin. "You guys. It is not time to celebrate yet. I'm the proctor of the 2nd exam, Mitarashi Anko," she shouted to the genin. I poked my head out from behind the curtain and sweat dropped, noting that she still wore my sage coat. "Quite an entrance," I commented. She glared at me, licking her lips. "Shut up. Let's move on to the next stage. Follow me," she yelled back at the genin, none of them moving. Ibiki stepped away from the banner. "Read the atmosphere," he said emotionlessly. Anko glanced at the genin. I laughed as Sakura compared me to Anko. 78? She asked. "You let 26 teams slide by? I guess the first exam was too easy this time around." "It seems that this time there are a lot of excellent candidates," he growled. Anko shrugged, looking back at the genin. Well, alright. I'll drop more than half of them in the 2nd exam," she said confidently before wincing slightly, the remnants of her hangover finding their way to her head. "I'll give you the details tomorrow. We'll be changing locations, so get a jounin to tell you the time and place." "That's it, dismissed." Tomorrow, Forest of Death. "What is this place?" Asuna stammered, gazing at the no trespassing signs and the foreboding trees. "This is the location of the 2nd exam, the 44th training ground," Anko answered, smirking at the genin. I jumped down from one of the trees, landing with a small crater as I grinned at the intimidated genin. "Careful, Anko-chan. You don't want them to be scared before they go in there," I chuckled. "The 44th training ground. Better known as the Forest of Death." Anko withered. "You're stealing my lines," she hissed. I turned to face her and winked. "Okay, I'll back off. I just need to say something. If anyone finds any kunai that look like this," I held up one of my Hiraishin kunai, "pick it up and throw it, doesn't matter where. Also, don't freak out if you see a yellow flash." "Losing your Hiraishin kunai, Teiko?" Gaara asked, chuckling. A few of the genin looked confused at the title. "Kind of. Some of the animals in there thought it'd be fun to scatter my kunai all over the place. I think it's revenge for monopolizing the best field," I said, shrugging before turning to the genin. "Most of you know who I am. If not, all you need to know is that I am a jounin. For the rookies here, just because you're young doesn't mean you're weak." "Don't let the older genin push you around," I said, smiling at Team 7. "Hi, Sensei." Sakura nodded at me. Sasuke stood next to her, unfazed by the atmosphere resonating from the trees. Haku nodded at me, smiling. "I'll be in the forest. Don't kill anyone, Anko, especially not my team. Watch out for the Ariguma," I warned. Anko rolled her eyes. I smiled at Hina-chan and motioned towards her necklace. She rolled her eyes too but closed her hand around the blood-steel vixen. I jumped over the fence, stopping on a tree branch out of sight. "There's something creepy about this place," Ino said, her hands in front of her face. Anko laughed at the girl. "Hey! This place is called the Forest of Death. You'll soon realize why. Evidently we have a lot of hothead kids this time. This'll be fun, Anko chuckled quietly. Before we start the second exam, you all need to sign these, Anko announced, holding the waivers. It's a consent form, you must sign it before I can begin the test. From here on out, there will be deaths. You have to sign these, or I'll get blamed for it, she said, smiling. She went through explaining the rules and the time limit. 5 days. Ino leaned forward. Kuji paled. What will we do for food? He asked, almost crying. Hunt. Eat or be eaten. There are things in this forest that will not hesitate to swallow you whole. I recommend going for the smaller prey. That forest is teeming with man-eating creatures, poisonous bugs, and poisonous plants, Kabuto smiled. After hearing more and more of the risks, Shikamaru raised his hand. So, can we quit in the middle of it? He asked tiredly. Anko gave him a harsh smile. According to the rules, no. I want you to spend 5 days in that forest. Just like I thought. This is going to be such a pain, he complained. Moving on. Conditions of disqualification. Number 1, if all 3 members can't make it to the tower by the end of 5 days with both scrolls. Number 2, if a team loses a member or a member becomes incapacitated. Also, do not look at the scrolls until you've reached the tower. That's it for the rules. Give all 3 of your consent forms to the guys over there. After that, pick the gate you want to go in by. The gates will open simultaneously. Anko stopped, sighing. Finally, I'm supposed to give you a word of advice or something. Don't die. Handing in the consent forms, each Shannon team received a scroll. Like last time, Team 7 was given a heaven scroll before they left for their gate. The other teams all drifted away from the main gate and I saw Anko stare into the trees. 26 teams. I wonder how many of them are going to survive. I left Anko at the main gate, following the now familiar paths of the forest to gate 12. The time flew past and the Chunin opened the lock in preparation. When the gates finally threw themselves open, Sasuke took the lead as the trio ran into the trees. Each time I felt one of my kunai thrown, I Harai-shined to it, scaring quite a few Shannon. Time passed as I kept tabs on the more important teams, Team 7, the Sand Siblings, the Otonin, and Kabuto's team. When one of my foxes alerted me that Orochimaru was about to attack, I ran to Team 7, only a few miles away. When I reached them, Orochimaru had begun his attack. Unfortunately, I arrived just in time to watch him swallow the Earth Scroll, something I did not appreciate. Well, let's begin the battle for the scrolls, he said, licking his lips. He tried to freeze Sasuke with killing intent, something I had already shown him. I watched Sasuke stay frozen, by choice this time, as Orochimaru threw the kunai towards Sakura. Narrowing his eyes, Sasuke leapt to her, picking her up and taking her away. I jumped to the snake farther away, Haku struggling inside. I withdrew Mizuchi and sliced the snake's side open before he could notice I was there. Covered in slime, Haku fell out of the snake, landing on a tree branch further down. Oh, this is disgusting. She complained, trying to wipe the slime off. I nodded, knowing the feeling from experience. Yes it is, let's go save Sasuke and Sakura. He's fighting someone out of his league, I said, jumping back to Sasuke. Again I had horrible timing, catching a glimpse of Orochimaru extracting himself from another snake. Never lower your guard, even for a moment, he said in a woman's voice. Prey must always be tensed and ready to flee desperately. Before a predator. I grimaced, disgusted when he started moving his tongue. He slid out of the snake, his lower body a long snake tail as he wound up a tree. Disturbed, I threw a kunai towards him, stabbing the wood above him. Orochimaru, I said loudly. Have I mentioned how disgusting your techniques are? At my voice, the snake Sanin's head shot up, looking for me. Oi, Sasuke. Sorry I'm late. Naruto, he said quietly. I thought he'd say something really heartwarming and grateful, a sign of how little I understand him. Very dramatic entrance. Is Haku? I'm fine. Covered in who knows what, but not inside a snake anymore, she said, shrugging. Sasuke smiled tightly before glancing at Orochimaru. I know. Sasuke, meet Orochimaru, the snake Sanin. You might have heard me refer to him as Heavy Team. He's a body-snatching maniac and very strong, a dangerous combination. Protect Sakura and Haku, you've done enough against him, I ordered. Sasuke nodded, moving in front of Sakura as Haku checked her for injuries. You must be the fox Kabuto was telling me about. How did you discover him? He asked, his tongue flitting in and out of his mouth. By putting 2 and 2 together when other people got 3. I also know about how you sent the auto ninjas to kill Sasuke. I know that you wanted to put a curse seal on Sasuke. I won't let that happen. I said, drawing a kunai. I don't let my teammates die. A pretty speech, Fox, but do you have the strength to back it? Orochimaru smirked. I answered with a chuckle. He stared at me with narrowed eyes and I pointed to myself. Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto. The question isn't if I have enough strength to protect my team. The question is if I have enough self-restraint to let you slither away with your life. I don't think so, he said, rolling up his sleeve revealing a seal. His hand flew to his mouth and, before I could move, he ran his bleeding thumb across the seal. Kushios no Jutsu. A whirlwind rose up under him, destroying the trees as a large snake appeared under his feet. The snake flicked its tongue at Sasuke and I narrowed my eyes. Orochimaru. Leave my team alone. This is between you and me. At least until the Anbu get here. The ninja raised an eyebrow, smirking. You may be a jounin but you aren't close to my level yet. Who knows, maybe I'll get you the seal, he grinned, the snake turning to me. I chuckled quietly and threw the kunai towards his head. He leaned to the side easily, allowing the kunai to bury itself in the tree behind him. I have a better idea, you want a battle for the scrolls? Winner takes all? Now, Naruto-kun. If I wanted your scroll, your team wouldn't be alive right now, he smiled, licking his lips again. But, you seem to know what I want. I know exactly what you want and I know exactly how to stop you. I'm giving you the chance to run with your pet before I get angry. Haku smiled hopefully at me then sadistically at Orochi team. You should leave, she advised. You won't like Naruto-sensei when he gets angry. There is a reason why he is a flea on side order. Silly girl, I know all about your sensei. Namikaze Naruto, the infamous Kyoryutsune. I have no doubt that he is strong. I also have no doubt that he is not on my level. Kyoryutsune may be feared in Kumo and Iwa. I am feared in every nation. Mostly because you're a body-snatching pedophile, I smirked. Orochimaru glanced at me with disdain. Sorry, team, did I hit a nerve there? Do what you want, Fox. You can't stop me, he said, ignoring my insults. His hands met in front of his chest and a hand seal I had not seen in years. My eyes widening slightly, I jumped in front of Sasuke, too slow to draw my Uzuchi. Naruto. I heard Sasuke shouted behind me, warningly. I winced and growled as Orochimaru's fangs connected to my neck. His neck shortened, his head returning to his shoulders. I fell to my knees, clutching the 3 commas now forming in my skin. Forcing my head up, I glared at Orochimaru. Sasuke, take Sakura and Haku and get out of here. I'll keep him busy while you 3 get away. I coughed, my skin radiating with pain as Orochimaru's soul buried itself into my subconscious. Sasuke's eyes widened and he took a step towards me. I can't just. He fell silent as he met my eyes. He nodding determinedly, and jumped towards Sakura and Haku. Both stared at me, their eyes wide, before I nodded towards them. They frowned worriedly but let Sasuke drag them away. Watching them leave, Orochimaru laughed. That was foolish of you. Once I finish you, I can easily track Sasuke down and give him the seal. Q, find that piece of his soul and kill it. I'm going to summon you when you're done. Got it, kid. QB roared into my subconscious and I felt a small shadow in the corners of my mind jump. I sat, seemingly defenseless, as QB tracked down Heavy Team's imprint on me. Glancing at Orochimaru, I laughed humorlessly. If you were even a little bit human, you'd understand. If I let them stay, they'd want to fight you. I can't risk that, I said, glaring at the Otonin. His smirk grew into a sadistic smile. Do you still think that they could fight me? You couldn't even defend yourself. Look at you. I'm surprised you can even move while your soul gets comfortable in my subconscious? I said, feeling the pain evaporate as Q roared again, now in victory. I glanced at the seal, the pain gone but the tattoo still visible. I did my research. Did you do yours? Kushios no Jutsu, I shouted, slamming my palm to the tree trunk. Instead of a whirlwind, the trees lit in an inferno, burning away as QB appeared out of the air and released a growl that echoed around the trees, a wave of killing intent pulsing away from him. I jumped to his head, placing a hand on his head. He shook as I took the chakra he had no control over. Orochimaru, still in disguise, paled at the sight. I will say this one more time. If you value your pathetic existence, run. Get out of this forest and then out of Konoha. If you still believe that you are even close to my level, stay and fight. I had hardly finished when he narrowed his eyes and sank into the tree branch, retreating. I frowned. That wasn't fun. I was kind of hoping he'd stay and summon Manda. I hate that snake, QB growled, shrinking quickly. I chuckled. Which one? I asked, jumping off onto a tree branch. When he had finished his transformation, he leapt up to meet me, thinking. Both, he decided. I laughed, petting him as Anko appeared, racing out of the trees. "Oi, Anko-chan," I shouted, waving. Seeing me sitting beside Kyubi, she lost her footing and fell down a branch. Jumping back up to meet us, she panted heavily. "Did you see a not very subtle and extremely disgusting snake shaped like a human?" "Yeah, we saw him." "Before you ask, my team got away." "While you did what?" "Me? I got a new tattoo, courtesy of Heavy Team," I said, exposing my left shoulder. The black curse seal was right above my mate's seal. It would have looked cool if I hadn't known what it was supposed to mean. Recognizing the seal, Anko's eyes widened and her right hand went to her own seal. "You got bitten?" she asked, panicked. "I'm okay. I know what the cursed seal of heaven does. I already had Kyubi tracked down and killed the part of Orochimaru inside my mind," I reassured the snake mistress. "He was aiming for Sasuke." "Why did he? Oh, no. Yeah, he wants Sasuke for his next body. I couldn't make it to get Sasuke out of the way, so I took the bite." "Sasuke doesn't have a friendly Baijuwu to defend his mind," I shrugged, sitting. Anko sat next to me, dazed. After a while, I leaned back, sighing. "He isn't dead. I know what he's planning." "So you let him go?" she asked, sounding angry and surprised. I nodded slowly. "He's going to launch an invasion of Konoha. Ado and Suna against us. We don't have to worry about Suna. I have spies and friends to watch them and help limit the damage. All we have to worry about is the Ado Nin and Orochimaru. Orochimaru will attack Hiruzen while he trusts his pawns to obliterate Konoha. What he doesn't know is that most of his fighting force will be fighting for me." Anko raised her eyebrows. "Why would Orochimaru's followers be fighting for you?" "A lot of Heavy Team's followers do so out of fear. If I give them someone else to fear or promise to kill Orochimaru, most switch sides." I stared into the trees, my ears listening for sounds. Picking up Haku's voice, I smiled. "Hey, Q. Do you want to stay out a little longer? Stop beating around the bush." "What do you want?" "I just wanted to send a fox to Team 7 to tell them I'm not dead or hurt. They need to relax before they attract attention." "I'll do it," he said, shaking his fur as he stood, stretching. "Anything else?" "Yeah, tell Sasuke it wasn't his fault, remind Sakura that the Earth Prison Dome is for emergencies only, and tell Haku to make sure they don't hurt themselves. I'll be waiting for them at the tower." "Got it." "Can I?" "No, Sandstorm needs time. Come to the tower when you're done." "Can I at least?" "Yes. But don't kill anyone," I said tiredly, watching Kyubi's train of thought as Anko stared at us, amused. "Get going." Kyubi grumbled, smacking me in the shoulder with one of his tails before sprinting into the trees, his scarlet fur swallowed by the trees. I glanced back at Anko. "What?" I asked. She chuckled and shook her head, standing up. "Let's just get to the tower." "Maybe someone made it back already." "Not likely," I shrugged. "There are only 2 teams that could even be close to the tower. The Sand Siblings and Team Guy." "You don't think your team covered some ground?" She chuckled. I shook my head, serious. "They saw their sensei get bitten in the shoulder by an S-ranking missing nin, one of the legendary Sannin. Add that to the wave of killing intent Q sent out and how tired they were to start with, I'm pretty sure they didn't make it that far. On top of that, they still have to find the Earth Scroll," I said, jumping into the trees. Anko ran to catch up but stayed a pace behind me. Glancing back, I smirked. "Is Mitarashi Anko scared of the dark?" "No, I'm letting you be the bait for anything that sees us," she grinned back, licking her lips. With Orochimaru, it was disgusting. With Anko, it was intimidating. "Everything in this forest knows me. I've been training in this forest for more than 3 years. I learned the Chidori, Rasengan, Hiraishin, and my other more dangerous techniques. I mastered the Rasengan in this forest, inventing what I call the Rasen Shuriken." "You've invented a jutsu?" "Of course I have. I couldn't just use my dad's jutsu all the time." "Silly Anko," I chuckled. A kunai flew past my face, slicing my cheek. I sighed. The scratch was in the same place that Anko had marked in the last timeline, slashing through the whisker marks on my left cheek. Let me rephrase, I can't always use techniques people expect me to. You never use snakes until you need to. I don't often use Hiraishin or Chidori. We ran in silence until the tower came into sight. Dawn was approaching and I smiled at the tower, the doors already opened. Later that day, Q bounded from the forest, racing towards the tower. I saw a few of the shinobi panic at the sight of his tails but I called them away. "Oi! Don't touch him, he's with me," I shouted to the nervous ninja. They didn't relax, only held their kunai aloft as I jumped down to Q. Seeing me, he skid to a stop and started laughing quietly. His laughter got louder until his voice echoed off the trees. "You should have seen their faces," he laughed, breathless. He winced and a tail went to his ribs. "I'm laughing too hard. Of course, that got me laughing. When the Sand siblings arrived minutes later, both scrolls in tow, both Kyubi and I were rolling on the grass laughing as we shared the image of the Auto Nin being greeted by the most powerful tailed beast. Kankuro glanced at us before walking inside, followed by Tamari. Sandstorm and Gar stayed behind, kneeling by us while we recovered. After a while, Gar cleared his throat. "Do you need medical attention? You seem a little..." Gar drifted off at a loss for words. Glancing up at us, Sandstorm cut in. "Insane?" "Exactly," he said, smiling at the kitsune. I recovered slowly, holding my now aching sides. "What happened?" "Auto, Kyubi, lots of growling and screaming," I chuckled. Gar's eyes lit up with humor and he chuckled, nodding. "Did you see Orochimaru?" he asked quietly. I nodded, scowling. "Team bit me," I said, shaking my shirt to the side to show the seal. "Don't worry, Kyubi killed the soul fragment before it could get comfortable. I'm not really sure what'll happen now. It might be possible for me to go into the Curse Seal stages and the Demon Cloak at the same time." "Have I ever mentioned how glad I am that you don't hate me?" Gar said after a long silence. I chuckled and glanced at Q. "Do you want to stay out a little longer? Introduce yourself to the other Jounin?" I asked, studying him. The demon fox thought about it for a while before nodding, shaking his fur and sending grass into the air. "Yeah, I could go for that. Fainting Jounin are always funny," he chuckled, growing a few inches so he reached my waist. Waving Gar to follow me, I opened the doors and led the way to the other shinobi. Most of the room was occupied by Jounin sensei and exam sentinels. I saw Anko debriefing a few Anbu in a corner. Stepping into the room, the shinobi flew silent before reaching for weapons. I sighed and stepped in front of Kyubi, who was now growling quietly at the ninja. "Yes, he's a demon." "Get over it," I said tiredly. A few of the shinobi narrowed their eyes, tightening their grip on their weapons. "Relax, he isn't going to hurt anyone." Gaara chuckled at the assembled ninja before walking towards his siblings, waving to Q and Kakashi walked up to us, smiling. "Yo, Naruto, Kyubi," he greeted, not disturbed. I chuckled, remembering his first reaction as I summoned Kyubi for the first time in front of him. Flashback. "Naruto-kun, you need to summon him." Hina-chan shouted over the fires. We were in Ame, once again caught in the middle of a great shinobi war. "I can't. There are still civilians in here," I shouted back, trying to help Kakashi move rubble away from the few survivors of the ongoing attack. "They'll all be dead if you don't do something," she shouted, ducking as Sasori's tail flew towards her. She growled as she jabbed a kunai into one of the joints, temporarily jamming the weapon. "Have I ever mentioned how much I hate Kabuto?" "Every day," I shouted back, trying to find a solution. I glanced at Kakashi, desperate. He nodded, pulling a small girl out of the collapsed building. I closed my eyes briefly, knowing that this would terrify more of our forces than Kabuto's resurrected army. "Get ready, Kyubi. Battle time." "Hell, yeah. I'll kill everyone all over again," he grinned in my mind. I sighed, my hands flying through the seals. Kushios no Jutsu. A roar filled the air as civilians and shinobi alike froze in terror. I glanced at Kakashi, now on one knee from the wave of killing intent pulsing from my oldest friend. "Hatake Kakashi. Meet Kyubi no Kitsune," I said quietly. I jumped onto Kyubi's head and we began our assault on the enemy ninja, trying to buy time for the Ame citizens to escape the last of the battle. And flashback. I shook myself from the memory. Wordlessly, I pulled my shirt aside, revealing the seal. Watching Kakashi's right eye widen, I shook my head. "I'm okay. I had Q track down Heavy Team's soul fragment before it could get settled. I couldn't get Sasuke away from him in time so I took the bite for him. I'm surprised that Sasuke didn't complain about Heavy Team's fangs being in his neck. It's really disgusting," I said, wrinkling my nose as Kakashi visibly relaxed. "And Orochimaru?" "Still alive. He'll be back, same time and place." Anko showed up right after he retreated. I told her bits and pieces but she doesn't know the big thing. "Alright. How's the rest of the team?" "Last I saw them, they were all okay. I had them escape after Heavy Team bit me," I explained. Kakashi nodded and we went back to the main group, ready to wait for the rest of the teams. At the end of the 5 days, the same 21 Genin had made it through the second exam. The Hokage was told of Orochimaru's interference and asked me to keep an eye on his movements. The Genin were assembled and the meaning behind the Chunin exams was explained to them. I watched on the sidelines as Gekko Hayate jumped down and explained about the preliminaries. I watched Kabuto raise his hand to quit, Orochimaru smiling at him the entire time. "Excuse me, I'll quit." Kabuto smiled at Hayate. The special Jounin nodded and glanced at his clipboard. "Let's see. Yuriakishi Kabuto from Konoha, correct? Okay, you can leave, Hayate said, glancing back at the older Jinan. Hi, he nodded, walking away. Hiruzen studied the Jinan. I've seen his face before. If I remember correctly, he dropped out of the last main battle as well. What is he thinking? He asked quietly. Ibiki glanced at Anko and she referred to her notes. Yakushi Kabuto. According to his records, he's failed 6 straight times. Background? From his time at the academy, he was a student that didn't really stand out and his grades were average. He didn't pass the graduation exam until his 3rd try. After that, as for the missions he's carried out, he's done 14 D rank and 2 C rank. Not a battle record to write home about. However, Anko's voice drifted off. However? Hiruzen asked. I leaned into the conversation. It's about before the academy. Do you remember the story about the boy brought back from the Kikyo Pass battle? Hiruzen nodded. I remember. As I recall, an enemy boy survivor at the battlefield was taken back by a Jounin in the medical unit. So he's that boy? He asked. Anko nodded as Kabuto walked away. Hayate coughed, bringing attention back to him. So, are there any others who would quit? I saw Sasuke's resolve, unmarred by pain from his curse seal. Now then. We will begin the preliminaries, Hayate said. These will be one-on-one individual battles. In other words, actual battle format. There are now exactly 20 people, so we shall have 10 battles. The winners of each battle will be the one to move forward to the 3rd exam. There will be no rules in their battles. You will fight until someone dies, collapses, or admits defeat. And, if you don't want to die, I recommend that you admit defeat quickly. Also, if I deem that a match is over, I don't want to needlessly add to the number of dead bodies, so I will intervene and stop the match. He nodded at Anko, who spoke into her headset. As the wall lit up, Hayate nodded at it, coughing. This will randomly select the foes for the preliminaries. Now then, let's get right to it and announce the 2 names for the first battle. The signboard flickered to life, kanji symbols dancing until they landed as they had last time, Akedo Yoroi vs Uchiha Sasuke. Now then, the 2 displayed on the board, come forward, Hayate said calmly. The 2 Jinan stepped up and Hayate raised his hands. Alright, the 2 for the first battle have been selected. Any objections? No, Yoroi called. Alright, Sasuke smirked. Orochimaru smiled and I clenched my fist. Now then, we will begin the first battle. Everyone else, please move to the upper levels, he coughed. Now then, let's begin. The battle went much faster than it had last time. Without the seal, Sasuke could use his Sharingan to its full potential. He was able to evade Yoroi's chakra absorption technique as soon as he realized what he was doing. With the 9 taijutsu I suspected Kakashi had been teaching him, the battle was over in minutes. Stop, Hayate ordered. HR walked to Yoroi's now unconscious body, Sasuke standing tall a few feet away. This match is over. The winner of the first battle is Uchiha Sasuke. You move on to the finals, he told him. Sasuke smiled victoriously before coming up the steps to meet us on the upper level. Now then. We'll get started with the second match right away. The board lit up again, now displaying Ibumizaku vs Aburame Shino. The preliminaries went as they had last time, the same victors and the same losers with the exception of Mahina-chan. When she was called down to battle Neji, she switched away from the gentle fist and going into the early stages of the Warao Akuma, which I'd been teaching her. Neji never stood a chance facing unknown and effective techniques. When Haku was picked to go against Kiba, he laughed again. His laughter ended when he and Akamaru found themselves in a dome of ice that not even Fang over Fang could destroy. When the mirrors were dismissed, both Kiba and Akamaru were temporarily paralyzed, vaguely resembling porcupines. The date set for the third and final exam, the Jinan and their Jounin sensei talked about preparations for the exam and how they would train. Before I could get ambushed by Haku, looking for more medical ninjutsu training, I separated myself from the crowd and tracked down Hayate. "Hayate-san," I shouted, waving at the ever-6 special Jounin. He glanced over at me, smiling slightly. "Oh, hello Naruto. What is it?" "I was wondering if I could convince you to train one of my students in Kenjutsu. I'm going to be away from Konoha for a while on a solo mission," I explained. Hayate glanced back at Team 7, noting Sasuke's sword. "The Uchiha." "Yeah, Sasuke. I've given him my old katana, Kamisora, but I think a straight sword would be better for him. I was going to talk to you about that as well." Hayate studied the Uchiha for a while, watching how he moved. "I'll really owe you a favor," I coaxed. "Kiragetsu a favor," he sighed, smiling as he coughed. "All right, I'll help him," he agreed. "Thanks." Don't worry about having to train him all the time, he knows he can go to Zabuza and myself when I return." Hayate only nodded and walked away. I chuckled at the ever-sick ninja and walked back to Team 7. "Naruto-sensei, can you help me with my medical ninjutsu?" Sakura asked, still fuming after her tie with Ino. I shook my head sadly. "I can't, I'm going away for a while," I said apologetically. Sakura pouted. "How long is a while?" Haku asked. I shrugged. "I'm not sure. I'm being sent on a mission, it could take anywhere from 2 days till after the Chunin exams. I'll try to be back as soon as possible to help you prepare, but I can't promise anything." Sasuke looked at me with an expression I couldn't identify. "What kind of mission?" "I'm going to track down and bring back 2 exceptionally powerful ninja, Tsunade the Slug Sannin and Jiraiya the Toad Sage. Finding Tsunade is the main objective, finding Jiraiya is more personal for me." Sakura glanced up at me, confused, and I sighed. "Jiraiya is my godfather. My father named me after the protagonist of Jiraiya's first book, Tales of a Gutsy Ninja." On the other hand, Tsunade is perhaps the best medical ninja in history, better than me in a lot of things. "I'm going to bring her back so she can be your teacher, Sakura, while I focus on Haku." Looking appeased, Sakura backed down. Sasuke wasn't that easily assuaged, staring at me with that unknown expression. "What about your wedding? Does Hinata know that you might not be back in time?" "I'll be back for the wedding, that I can promise. Hina-chan's necklace has a Hiraishin seal on the back of it. All she has to do is send a little chakra to the charm before the wedding and I'll come right away." Speaking of which, I pulled out a scroll from my sage coat. Unsealing it, I took out 3 necklaces, each with a different charm. The first was a wolf, the second a snake, and the third a small slug, for Haku, Sasuke, and Sakura respectively. I passed each their necklace, turning the charms over to show the Hiraishin seal. "If you ever need me, concentrate chakra into the seal and I will feel it." "Why is mine a snake?" Sasuke asked, anxious and confused, probably remembering our encounter in the Forest of Death. "I picked the charms based on your natural summons, the summons that will be easiest for you to summon on a regular basis. My natural summons are foxes. I'm not sure if that's because I'm Kyujin Chiriki or as that would have been my normal summons. I'm like a fox, I protect what I hold special and I have the senses of a fox." "Sasuke, you are similar to a snake. You are strong offensively, making up for low defenses. You rely on your own speed to watch your back, you don't let your team intervene if you think you can handle the challenge. You have a more subtle chakra signature than the girls and would probably make a good spy. Sakura, don't get grossed out but you are similar to slugs." "That's not an insult, slugs have a strong defense to balance out their lack of raw power. Slugs are the natural summons of Tsunade and often help her in her medical ninjutsu. Haku, you are loyal and cunning, 2 attributes associated with the wolf. Wolves do not have as good senses as foxes nor are they as fast, but they are stronger in terms of raw power. If you sign the wolf summoning contract, I assume that your senses will heighten, just as mine did when I signed the fox contract." I know where all 3 contracts are at this moment. The wolf contract is in Ame but I may be able to pull a few strings. The holder of that contract is a friend of mine. The slug contract is currently held by Senju Tsunade, assuming she hasn't gambled it away. When I find her, I'll see if she'll let you sign the contract, Sakura. Unfortunately, I can't get the snake contract. If things go according to plan, I should have it in my possession at the end of the Chunin exams. If not, I'm not sure I'll be able to find it." "He has it, doesn't he?" Sasuke asked quietly. I nodded. "Yes. I'll try to get it but I can't make any promises. If he doesn't tell me where it is before I kill him, I'll have to track down his subordinates. Orochimaru has bases scattered all over the continent, it could be in any one of 2 dozen, I said quietly. Sasuke nodded slowly, no anger in his eyes. I stretched. "I'm going to go pack things to do, people to see, other people to threaten," I smiled. "Oh, Sasuke, I convinced Hayate to teach you in Kenjutsu. Ignore his coughing, he's an expert in Kenjutsu. If he changes your blade, let him. I think a straighter sword will work better for your fighting style." Johnny. Haku grabbed my arm and we Hiraishined back to the Namikaze manor. I grabbed the already packed scrolls off of my bed and put them in various pockets. Glancing at the large summoning contract leaning on my wall, I sighed and attached it to my lower back. I glanced in the mirror and I smiled. If I was 4 years older, I'd look identical from how I looked during the pain invasion. My eyes flashed almost warningly as I unsealed my yellow mask. I turned away from my reflection as I tied the mask on over my face, ready to leave. 1 week later. I glanced at the cards in my hand then around the round table. Knowing how Tsunade thought, I left Konoha for the first poker tournament in the largest gambling town I could find. Sure enough, the blonde kunoichi sat across from me, narrowing her eyes as I raised. She was silent, glancing in between my mask and her cards before she raised, matching me and then some. "I never thought the Kyotsune was a gambler," she said after a long silence. I shrugged and smiled under my mask. "I'm not," I said, glancing at the other players. "I'm on a mission. If I wanted to find you, I needed to go gambling," I smirked. Tsunade tightened her hand on her cards, the other hand twitching towards a kunai. "You got guts, kid. Not many people would take a mission to find me," she smiled evilly. I shrugged. "I requested this mission. I'm too much like my dad, don't know when to quit but usually get what we want." "And who is your father?" she asked, going all in. I pushed the rest of my chips to the center and smiled under my mask. "Wouldn't you like to know? I'll give you a hint, he was a hero." Tsunade raised an eyebrow, scoffing. "I've had enough of heroes. They never last," she said, glancing around her as the other players folded. I sighed sadly. "I'm sorry for your loss, both of them. They didn't deserve that," I said. The dealer nodded at Tsunade and she showed her cards to reveal a straight. The dealer looked at me and I showed my royal flush. Silence fell and Tsunade stood from the table. "What do you know about that?" she yelled at me. I stood, leaving the chips behind. "You have no." She was cut off as I walked up to her, invading her personal space. "Come with me," I said, spinning on my heel and walking out of the casino. Tsunade followed grudgingly, taking my chips with her. I smiled at the slug Sanin. Some things never change. "What do you want, Kyotsune?" We stood in a dirty alley, away from the town. I sighed again. "My father was a hero. He died fighting for what he believed in, just like Dan and Nawaki did." "Then your father was a fool," she spat. I moved my hand to my face, lifting the mask away from my features. Tsunade gasped at the resemblance. "Don't insult my father. I'm only here asking you to do me a favor. One Kyotsune favor is worth a lot more than the chips in your hand and you can't lose it." "You're a kid." "No, I am a ninja. The second I put on this headband, I wasn't a child anymore. I am a jounin in the village hidden in the leaves. I respect you, Tsunade. Don't tell me I was wrong too." "What kind of favor?" she asked warily. I smiled. 2 weeks of your time. In my jounin team, I have one student who has the most potential as a medical ninja that I've seen in a long time. So much that I don't trust myself to teach her correctly. I want you to spend 2 weeks with her before the final exam of the Chunin exams. If she doesn't meet your standards, you can forget it ever happened." "What's her name?" "Haruno Sakura. She is 12 years old, a rookie jounin. She knows the mystical palm technique and how to help chakra exhaustion. Sakura has earth-nature chakra and can perform the Earth Dome prison, even though it trains her at her current level of chakra. She has the best chakra control I've seen in my travels, which is saying a lot. Also, her natural summons are slugs." At the mention of her summons, Tsunade smiled. "You should have said that first. So, let me get this straight, I go back to Konoha with you and spend 2 weeks training some kunoichi in medical ninjutsu?" "Basically. If you agree, you, Shizune, and Tonton can all stay in the Namikaze compound. Right now, the only people living in the entire compound are myself, Yukihaku, and Momochi Zabuza." "The demon of the bloody mist?" "The former. I convinced the council to grant them Konoha citizenship. Zabuza is currently a jounin in Haku, his former student, is a jounin in my team." "Who's on your team?" she asked, walking back to the street. "Well, at the beginning of the year there were an uneven number of jounin. Right after my graduation from the academy, I took the jounin test. I defeated 4 jounin and became a jounin sensei alongside Hatake Kakashi. Our team only had 2 jounin, Uchiha Sasuke and Haruno Sakura, until our first C-ranked mission. The mission turned A rank when we encountered Zabuza, my old Kenjutsu teacher. He agreed to stop hunting the man we were guarding and came back to Konoha with us. Haku joined the team, Team 7, for the length of the Chunin exams." We maintained silence for the rest of the walk to Tsunade's hotel. Walking into the room, I spotted Shizune carrying Tonton. "Shizune, this is." She glanced at me and I remembered that she didn't know Kyoritsune's real name. "My name is Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto. I'm a Konoha jounin. I'm here to escort you back to Konoha until the end of the Chunin exams." Shizune nodded confusedly, distracted when Tonton began to squirm. "Tonton. What's wrong?" she asked the pig. Tonton glanced at me and squealed. I took a step back apologetically. "I'm sorry, it's my fault. Don't worry about that. Most animals react like that around me," I said, scratching the back of my head. Shizune looked confused while Tsunade noted the whiskers on my face and nodded slowly. Naruto. Are you the? She began to ask. I glanced at her and nodded. Yep. You don't have to worry about me going ballistic, I improved the seal so he can't take over. I didn't mention that he wouldn't, assuming that the explanation would be long and tiring. There is just one stop we need to make on the way back to Konoha. Where? Tsunade asked, trying to calm the pig. I need to talk to Jiraiya, he's beginning to poke around my spy network. Right now, he's in Hot Springs country? Tsunade guessed. I nodded and she reddened angrily. Pervert. Tell me about it. I was raised by Kakashi, I said, rolling my eyes. Kakashi thinks Uro-sennin is a good author and he wasn't talking about Tales of a Gutsy Ninja. Shizune nodded in understanding and Tsunade reached for a bottle of sake. I sighed. Some things never change. 2 days later. Hey. Uro-sennin's perverted giggle was picked up by my ears. My palm flew to my forehead and Tsunade growled. Where is he? She snarled. I pointed towards the women's spa and Tsunade rolled up her sleeve, ready to beat the crap out of her former teammate. Minutes later, screams at pain echoed off of the water. Shizune and I winced in unison. You stupid perverted, Tsunade growled. I walked around the fence and saw the toad sage, cowering as Tsunade raised her fist. I cleared my throat and she glared at me. I need to talk to him alive, Tsunade, I said, neglecting the Obachan out of respect for my life and safety. She growled but stood down. Jiraiya glanced at the fence behind him and chuckled, sitting up. Kyotsune? Why are you hanging around Tsunade Haim? He asked. I stalked over to him and put my hand over the hole in the fence. Jiraiya, the self-proclaimed world's biggest pervert. I should kick your ass, I said clearly. I grabbed his shirt with both hands and pulled him up. His eyebrows drew themselves together and Tsunade grinned. Can I know what I did before I kick your ass? He asked, smirking. I raised an eyebrow, glancing at the slug Sanin. He's cheeky. I'm surprised you didn't kill him, I said. Tsunade chuckled and shrugged. Hiruzen-sensei was against it. Funny, he didn't say a thing to me, I said, releasing the toad sage. I'm not here to fight you. I'm here to tell you to stop screwing with my spy network. I'm a Konohanin, your ally. And why should I believe that? He chuckled. My hand went to my mask once more, taking it off. Jiraiya's eyes widened as he recognized my spiky blonde hair and blue eyes. Naruto? Hey, Uro-sennin, I chuckled, my hand at the back of my neck. Shizune laughed behind Tsunade as Jiraiya's jaw fell. Bet he didn't expect that, she whispered. I chuckled and grabbed the man by his hair, pulling him away from the spas before he could do any more research. So why do you want me in Konoha? Jiraiya asked, sitting on the couch of our hotel room. I shook my head tiredly. I'm getting married. No, you can't come to the bachelor's party, the guy's already through it. No, I won't tell you anything that happened. No, if someone else tells you, you cannot use it in your books. Next question, I said expectantly. Jiraiya's mouth closed, thinking. Who's the girl? Hyuga Hinata-chan, the eldest of the main house, I said. Jiraiya gave a low whistle. I'm not sure if I should say good job or good luck. A main house Hyuga? He shrugged. I shook my head, ready to defend her. She's different from the other Hyuga. She cares about people that her father wouldn't. She wants to change the Hyuga clan into something better than it is now. She knows all about Kyuubi and understands. Q even let her sign his summoning contract, I said. Jiraiya's eyes bulged. She signed a demon summoning contract? That should be impossible. It isn't impossible, just unlikely. I signed the contract when I was 4? I don't remember. Kakashi was there in case anything happened, I said, reassuring my godfather. The reason demon contracts have such a bad reputation is because the people who sign them don't understand the rules. Unlike the other summons where you sign them and then get the approval of the boss, you need to get the approval of the boss before you sign it. If you don't, the scroll will act defensively and protect itself from you, most likely killing you in the process. So, you're friendly with the Kyuubi? Best friends. He coached me through Sage Mode when I was younger. Once again, Jiraiya's eyes popped out of his head. You know Shinjutsu? Yes. It's strange though. There are different side effects for my Sage Mode and yours. Instead of getting a few fox-like traits, which I already have, I fully transform into a demon fox. It's strange. Demon fox? You. How? Traits. Jiraiya had had enough. His brain began to melt and I sighed, glancing at the kunoichi. Not wanting to have to wait for him to recover, I pushed chakra to my hand. My fingertips lit up with green energy and I poked him in the forehead. Jiraiya jumped at the chakra and pulled out a kunai. I jumped back, drawing my Zuchi in an arc to deflect the projectile. Better? I asked, sheathing my katana. Jiraiya glanced up before nodding. Good. Everyone grab your stuff, we're leaving now, I ordered. Narrowing their eyes, the two Sannin collected their belongings. Shizune picked up Tonton and walked over to me, the pig squealing in protest. Sighing, I hid Kyuubi's chakra as best I could. The pig immediately calmed down and Shizune looked at me, surprised. What did you do? Hide Kyuu's chakra. I can't do it for very long, but I can maintain it long enough for a Hiraishin back to Konoha. At mention of my father's signature jutsu, the two Sannin stopped and turned to me. Yes, I can do the Hiraishin. Hurry up, I want to get back before Anko goes looking for Orochimaru. Again, I said the wrong thing. Jiraiya clenched his fist and Tsunade narrowed her eyes almost worriedly. Orochimaru? She asked, looking for confirmation. I nodded slowly. He attacked during the second part of the Chunin exams. He's looking for his next body. Looking a lot less calm, they began to gather random belongings from the room. When they finished, I held out my arm and each shifted their bundles to their other arm or their back. Close your eyes. It's a little disorienting. Not obeying my own rules, I kept my eyes open as I concentrated on the Hiraishin kunai I had left in my backyard, a short distance from the porch. I tried to make the Hiraishin as fast as possible, in between blinks. I shut my eyes for half a second and pushed us through space. When I opened my eyes, I saw the sunset reflecting off my pool. Naruto-sensei. I heard a voice shout. Used to the familiar greeting, I ducked before I could get tackled to the ground. Standing, I smiled at Haku, now glaring at me from the ground. It's nice to see you too, I chuckled. Haku stood with as much dignity as she could, finally noticing the three other ninja. And these are? Oh, yeah. Yuki Haku, I'd like to introduce you to Jiraiya, the Toad Sage, Senju Tsunade, the Slug Sannin, and Shizune, Tsunade's apprentice. I don't think she's been my apprentice for a while, Tsunade said, looking at the raven-haired girl fondly. Shizune blushed, hugging Tonton tighter. And, that, is Tonton, I said, pointing to the pig. Haku nodded and smiled at the ninja before looking back at me. Sasuke is training with Zabuza-san. Sakura-chan and Ino are in the clearing with Hinata-chan getting ready for the wedding, Haku reported. I nodded, still smiling. Okay, then. Jiraiya, I'm trusting you to tell Hiruzen that I'm back with Tsunade and Shizune. Mission successful and all that. I'll give him the details later. Shizune-chan, you can go inside and pick out any of the rooms on the second or third floor, just don't go in the doors that have Kyuubi drawn on them. Shizune and Jiraiya nodded and left, leaving myself, Haku, and Tsunade. What about me? You are coming with Haku and I to meet your new student, I said, holding out my arm again. The two kunoichi held on and I focused on the Hiraishin I had placed on the gazebo. Opening my eyes to the clearing, I smiled at the familiar magic. Spotting pink hair among a group of girls, I shouted for Sakura. Oi, Sakura! I called. Sakura's head shot up and she glanced around the clearing. Seeing me, she grinned excitedly before running to meet us. Naruto-sensei, I thought you wouldn't be back for at least another week, she said, hugging me. I chuckled and pulled back. The mission was easier than I thought it'd be. Haruno Sakura, meet Senju Tsunade, your new Shisho. Sakura stood still as Tsunade circled around her, appraising her. Finishing her circle, she nodded at me. You're right, she has potential. Are you sure about her summons? Slug summoners are pretty rare. I'm positive, I said, nodding back. I glanced at Sakura's necklace and frowned, remembering something. I guess I forgot to tell you. Sakura, bite your thumb and put blood on the necklace charm. You too, Haku. The two Junon looked a little skeptical and confused but I nodded encouragingly. The two took off their necklaces with a glance towards me. Biting their thumbs, the kunoichi held their hands over the charm, a single drop of blood landing onto the bloodsteel. The kunoichi watched as the metal absorbed the crimson liquid as it changed color. Sakura's slug turned a vivid pink with emerald spots. Haku's wolf darkened to match her hair and eyes. Studying the charms, Tsunade frowned. Is that blood steel? Hi. You've heard about it? I asked. Tsunade nodded then shrugged. Bits and pieces. It absorbs the blood and changes its form to match the DNA. It's supposed to be extremely rare. How'd you get it? It's rare in the human world. Demon foxes specialize in mining and forging it. All I had to do was order the charms, Hiraishin seal and all, and the court smith took care of the rest. I shrugged, walking away from the group and towards Hina-chan. I hugged her from behind and she laughed. Naruto-kun. I thought you were on a mission, she smiled. I shrugged, pointing at the slug Sannin. It was easier than I thought it'd be to convince her. Jiraiya is here too, he went to tell Hiruzen that we're here. He went or you ordered him to? A little bit of both, I smiled deviously. Hinata-chan chuckled in my arms. "Does Kakashi know you brought Shizune back so early?" "I just got back," I said, feigning indignation. Feeling the truth in my thoughts, Hinata-chan smiled. "Besides, I think I should give him less time to compose himself. The less notice he has, the less time he'll have to panic." Hina-chan only laughed. I released her from my arms and took her hand instead. She smiled, tightening her grip. "How's the rest of the world? Anything big and out of the ordinary happening out there?" "Janan don't hear much," Hina-chan pouted. I chuckled at her mock sadness. "Nothing really happened. I didn't even get in a fight. It was pretty boring, actually," I said, now being dragged away from the small crowd of people. Recognizing faces, I realized that everyone in attendance was either a groomsman or a bridesmaid. "All I've been doing is drilling the gentle fist," Hina-chan complained lightly. "Father is still under the impression that I'm still his weak little heiress. Guess you'll have to prove him wrong and beat everyone left." "Shouldn't be too hard." Gaara killed Dosu again to maintain the timeline. "I only have to beat 3 people." I rolled my eyes, remembering the order from the last exam. "Your first opponent will be Haku. If you beat her, you fight either Sasuke or Gaara, both of whom have been trained by me, although I'd put money on Gaara. That leaves you with either Temari or Shikamaru. Shikamaru would be worn out if he beats Temari, so he shouldn't be very difficult. On the other hand, Temari will be tag teaming with Sandstorm. They won't be easy. Then I'll summon. Yonaka-chan has some very fun fire jutsu on top of weapons." Hina-chan smiled expectantly. I chuckled at her expression and glanced at the assembled people behind me. "How's the preparations going?" "We're almost done. All we're waiting for is the end of the exams. I'm pretty sure Hiruzuna's putting in a good word for me with the daimyo." She shrugged. "I doubt you'll need it," I said, a hand on the seal I shared with her. I sighed as Hina-chan's eyes flashed with worry before she checked my emotions. I raised an eyebrow and she blushed slightly. "Sorry, it's just—" "I know," I chuckled before getting serious. "I don't know how Sasuke managed it until the tower, let alone the preliminaries. I could barely stand." "He was an Avenger," she muttered, watching Sasuke walk into the clearing, sliding Kamisora back into its sheath. "You really helped him." "Not enough. He still wants to kill his brother. I'll eventually have to tell him why Itachi did it." I knew that Sasuke was always going to prefer vengeance over security. He took the burden of his clan's hate, directing it at his current enemy. Unless he found out the truth about his brother, he'd never be satisfied until Itachi fell dead in front of him. Even then, I couldn't promise that he'd stay in Konoha to protect us, not after I let Itachi go so easily. Sasuke's smile evaporated when he felt the atmosphere surrounding Hina-chan and myself. His eyebrows met in concern and his face fell into a frown. "Did something?" "No, we're fine. Just hoping for the best during the Chunin exams." "I found the woman I wanted to be Sakura Shisho," I said, nodding at Tsunade and Sakura as they talked. Sasuke glanced at them and nodded. I turned back to Sasuke, smiling. "Haku will be doing more training with Koyuki and Kakashi. That means I'm free to train you whenever you want. I can help you with your Sharingan as much as Kakashi can. I can begin to train you in my personal taijutsu style, the War Awakuma. You could start on what I learned from the samurai, or I could teach you more advanced jutsu. Pick 2. I don't think we'll have enough time to get a lot done with only 2 weeks, but I'm sure that it'd help in the exams." "Can you show me the War Awakuma?" Sasuke asked. I chuckled as his hand twitched to his leg, to the femur I had cracked with my taijutsu. "Sure. What else? Sharingan, jutsu, or kenjutsu? Keep in mind who you might be facing and their abilities. Gaara has perfect control over sand and can summon raccoons. Hinata-chan has the Byakugan, Gentle Fist, the beginnings of the War Awakuma, and can summon foxes. Haku can use her ice techniques and Senbone. Kankuro is a master puppet user. Temari uses her battle fan to control wind with her wind nature chakra. Shino uses bugs, and Shikamaru can control you using his clan's shadow jutsu." Sasuke thought about the pros and cons of each Sharingan before nodding. "Sharingan," he said, surprising me. I was sure he would have chosen jutsu. I smiled and nodded. "We'll need to go to the Forest of Death for the War Awakuma. We can practice your Sharingan in one of the Namikaze fields." "Let's work on the War Awakuma first," he said, nodding. "Are you sure you don't need me?" I asked Hina-chan. She laughed, turning back to the groomsmen and bridesmaids. "Go train, Naruto-kun. Love you," she said, making the gathered shinobi all smile. I smiled back, holding my arm to Sasuke. "Love you too," I said, Hirai shining away to my primary clearing. Just as I released Sasuke, I heard a loud growl emanating from the trees. I stood in front of Sasuke and returned the growl, backed by a wave of killing intent. I smirked as the animal ran into the shelter of the thick trees. I glanced at Sasuke, frozen. I chuckled as he recovered. After the Chunin exams, I'm going to teach all of Team 7 how to deal with killing intent. You need to at least get used to my chakra and QBs or you could become a liability on the battlefield. But back to the present, the War Awakuma. The first thing you need to understand about this style is that it is designed to destroy the enemy with quick attacks. If I attacked you right now, I could kill you any one of 30 or so ways. Usually I only use the early steps, designed to incapacitate the enemy, in combat. First, before any of that, how heavy are your weights right now and when did you last up the weights? I asked. Sasuke thought about it before answering. 220. 50 on each leg, 45 on each arm, and another 30 on my chest. I increased the weights last Monday. Good, I wouldn't teach this if you didn't have at least 200, I nodded. Next, deactivate your weights and attack me. I need to see how you fight. Remember, if you want to hit you I need to aim to kill. I know, he said, getting into a taijutsu pose. He activated his Sharingan as I activated my Demon Eyes and shifted into the War Awakuma stance. Begin, I said, smiling as he blurred. I could still see him, each of his punches and kicks was noted and avoided. At the end of 10 minutes, I hadn't thrown a single punch and Sasuke was leaning against a tree, breathing heavily. I nodded at him. Leave the weights off for now. Take a break and relax, we'll pick up in 10 minutes. This style is a little more demanding than most others. It's worth it though, I've beat Guy using the early steps, I said, jumping to my favorite tree branch without a running start. Sasuke stared up at me before walking up the side of the tree to sit on Hina-chan's branch. Looking out at Konoha, I gave my fox-like grin. Sasuke was going to hate this training. The sun was almost at the horizon when Sasuke's eyes rolled into his head. I shunshined behind him, catching him before he hit the rocky ground. I smiled, proud that he had lasted so long. During Hina-chan's first lesson, back in our past, she couldn't take more than a few hours for the first few lessons. I shifted Sasuke to my back and walked home through the village, the path becoming unfamiliar. The village was a peaceful chaos, routine and well-rehearsed. Children laughed, running in the streets until adults called them inside for dinner. Neighbors greeted each other as they recognized the others' faces. A few people looked at Sasuke with concern until I explained that we'd been training. Reassured, they smiled and said their goodbyes, waving as they walked away. I was just passing the Hokage Tower when I saw a square rock behind me. I sighed, chuckling to myself at the Sandaime's grandson. Come on out, Konohamaru. I know you, Udon, and Moigi are hiding in the rock. A small tricolor explosion erupted from the box, the smoke lifting away to show the 3 academy students coughing as they knelt on the ground. Hey, just what I expect from boss, Konohamaru coughed. Too much gunpowder. I can't play now, guys. I have to get Sasuke back home, I said, glancing at the Uchiha's head now leaning against my shoulder. Konohamaru's eyes brightened. Did you beat him up? Can we watch next time? He asked, excited. I sighed in exasperation. Sorry, Konohamaru, we weren't fighting. I was training him in my taijutsu style for the Chunin exams. As for watching, you can't. I can't let you watch us train in this style. I invented this style. I'm only showing Sasuke because I think he might need it. So? I might need it, Niiken, Konohamaru whined. You won't. Maybe if you work really hard I'll teach you something when you take the Chunin exams, but that won't be for years. Then you have a long time to get ready. Sasuke's been training his entire life. He didn't last a full day training with me. The harder you train now, the more I'll teach you later, okay? Konohamaru's eyes lit up and he grinned at me. Yeah. Let's go train, he shouted, dragging his best friends by the wrist. I mouthed an apology to them. I glanced at Sasuke, still unconscious, and resumed the walk home. Kakashi sat on the couch, expecting us. When he spotted Sasuke, he sighed. What did you start him on this time? Flexibility and then the first 2 stances for the War Awakuma, I reported, laying Sasuke down on the second couch. You're teaching him the laughing demon? Are you sure that's a good idea? You've defeated. I know who I beat up with this technique. I'm not going to take him too far in, only enough to improve his defense and learn how to knock people out. He's already having trouble adjusting to the change in style. He needs to improve his speed before it gets too dangerous to teach him more. Also, I doubt he'll have a lot of time to learn the laughing demon. I'm also going to help him with his Sharingan and Hayate, Zabuza, and I are all going to help his Kenjutsu. Don't pull a Danzo, Kakashi warned, referring to method Danzo unsuccessfully used to make him stay in the village. Dangle a new dangerous technique each time he gets bored. I won't, I promised my former sensei. I yawned and Kakashi raised an eyebrow. When was the last time you slept? What day is today? Wednesday. I think I know. Last Tuesday, maybe? I don't know, I was on the move a lot. Doing what? Assembling the troops. I went to most of the villages again under a flag of truce. Kumo and Kiri have agreed to help us if we need it. The Tsuchikage said he wouldn't back Orochimaru up. The others didn't want to get involved but they promised not to side with Otto. How many favors do you owe everyone? Not that many. A lot of countries owed me favors from odd jobs Gaara and I've done. I explained what happened the last time we were in Kumo, why I had talked to Yugi Ito, and the Raikage understood. Turns out he thought I was the one trying to steal the Jinchuriki. Either way, I told him a little about the Akatsuki and we parted under neutral terms. Considering A's temper, I think I did pretty good. All I owe Kumo now is a spar with B. Impressive, Kakashi chuckled. The laughter died as Shizune walked into the room. I watched, amused, as Kakashi's visible eye widened and he fought back a blush under his mask. Oh yeah, Shizune Nijin, meet Kakashi. Kakashi, this is Shizune. She came to Konoha with Tsunade Obachan, I introduced. Shizune shifted tauntaun to her left arm, holding her right hand out to Kakashi. I elbowed the jounin and the ribs and he snapped out of it, shaking her hand. When my parents died, Kakashi took me in, I explained to Shizune. You weren't exactly helpless, Naruto, he said, embarrassed. I raised an eyebrow at my former sensei. I was half a day old. I'm pretty sure that is the definition of helpless. If you hadn't adopted me, I'd probably have been put in an orphanage. Could you imagine that? I might have still been a Jinan, I said, my wide eyes clashing with my smirk. Kakashi chuckled and stood up. Okay. I just wanted to make sure both of you came out of the forest, he said, stretching. I grabbed his wrist, smiling deviously. You can't leave now, it's almost sundown. Stay for dinner, at least, I said, widening my eyes innocently. Shizune fell for it, melting. Seeing her face, Kakashi's head leaned back tiredly. If you're having ramen, I'm leaving, he threatened. Serious? I grinned and pushed him into the couch before jogging into the kitchen. Let me see what I can whip up. You two play nice, I smirked over Shizune's head. I shut the kitchen door behind me and made two shadow clones. One of them smirked and crept to the door silently, ready to listen in on the two. The second nodded at me and moved towards the fridge, half a step behind me. I opened the fridge door and glanced at the stocked shelves and drawers. How about chicken? My clone asked. I nodded and pulled the ingredients out of the fridge. I glanced at my clone, thinking. You get started on dessert, I'll take care of dinner, I said, pulling a pan out of a cupboard and grabbing a cutting board. Hi, boss, he said, searching the cupboards. Dinner's on a table, I shouted through the living room door. Everyone was now gathered in the living room, talking while I cooked dinner. One by one, Kakashi, Shizune, Tsunade, Jiraiya, Zabuza, Haku, and Sasuke walked in. Each took a chair at the long table and I brought over the food, broiled chicken, pasta salad, and corn on the cob. Already having eaten my cooking, Kakashi, Zabuza, Sasuke, and Haku all served themselves and picked up their forks. Haku smiled, standing and pouring herself a glass of water. You guys are lucky, she said, watching the three additions to the table glance at the food warily. Naruto doesn't cook for just anyone. That's not true, I cook for you guys all the time, I protested, joining Haku by the cabinets. I grabbed glasses and poured everyone their usual drinks, coffee for Zabuza and myself, orange juice for Kakashi, and milk for Sasuke. I carried the glasses over two at a time and depositing them in front of the correct people. You only cook for us when Hinata-chan is here, Haku countered playfully. I rolled my eyes at the Yuki and walked back to the cabinets. Taking out 3 glasses, I poured sake for Tsunade and Jiraiya and orange juice for Shizune. I brought them their drinks and Jiraiya looked at his glass warily. You can relax, I chuckled. I got this in Rice Country before I found Tsunade. I thought she'd need a little more persuading to come back to Konoha. I was planning on using it as a bargaining chip but I thought you might appreciate it now. Good boy, Tsunade said, reaching for her glass. Shizune slapped her hand, picked up the glass and carried it to the sink, pouring it out and filling it with water. I told you to go easy on the sake, Shizune chided. Tsunade grumbled but accepted the water. I chuckled at the exchange, serving myself some chicken. Watching the others eat hungrily, Tsunade glanced at the food on her plate. Taking the first bite of the 3 arrivals, her eyebrows went up in approval and she nodded at the other 2. It's good, she said, sounding surprised. Sasuke scoffed. Of course it's good. Naruto's one of the best cooks I know, he said, pointing to me with his fork. I chuckled. Stop, you're making me blush, I said, sarcastic. Sasuke only laughed, returning to his food. I shrugged at the two Sannin and Shizune. When you're on the road or living on your own a lot, you pick up a few things. The rest of dinner was passed in the regular conversation and storytelling, the two Sannin adding their fair share. When it came time for dessert, I chuckled as Haku leaned forward. Relax, Haku. It's just your super crazy amazingly addictive triple chocolate cake? She raised an eyebrow and I shrugged. It is triple chocolate cake, I don't know about the rest of it, I said, pulling the cake out of the fridge. I grabbed 8 dessert plates, balancing them in one hand as I held the cake with the other. I placed the cake down in the center of the table and stared at Haku sternly. I want this cake to be here, in one piece, when I come back with a knife. If it isn't. I let my voice drift off threateningly and Haku stared at the cake. I smirked and grabbed a knife from the carving set. I cut the cake into 8 pieces, 1 slice each. I put each slice on the readily offered plates and sat down with my own piece. Glancing at it, I realized I wasn't really in a chocolate mood. Noticing the self-disappointment in my eyes, Haku brightened. No, you can't have my cake, I said sternly, the ice user wilting. Hey, Q. Want some cake? Your super crazy amazingly addictive triple chocolate cake? He asked, licking his lips as I stared at him, open-mouthed. When did everyone decide to name it that? It's just cake. No, it's not. Summon me, I want some kakaki. Control your chakra, this is my house, I said firmly. He nodded and bit his paw in preparation. Kushios no jutsu. I bit my thumb, placing my palm on the wooden floor. Kyuubi appeared, small and digging his teeth into his paw. I put my right hand on his forehead and absorbed his excess chakra, once again sealing it into the seal on my forehead. At the sight of the demon lord, Tsunade jumped, almost dropping the last of her cake. I cracked my neck, the chakra becoming a part of my skin. I picked up the plate and put it on the ground in front of my vulpine friend. Watch your tails, I warned. I like this kitchen, I know where everything is. I'm sure the all-powerful Kyuubi no Kitsune, feared everywhere, would have answered if he wasn't busy wolfing down my cake. I sighed and sat back in my chair, scratching his head absent-mindedly. I glanced up at the table, only to find everyone staring at me. You just summoned Jiraiya was cut short by an angry Kunoichi. So you give him the cake? I thought we were supposed to be friends, sensei, she huffed, crossing her arms. Relax, I'll make more cake after the Chunin exams. Hina-chan wants the wedding cake to be my super crazy amazingly addictive triple chocolate cake, I said, appeasing the former missing nin. Her eyes brightened and her face broke into a smile. I glanced at Tsunade, Jiraiya, and Shizune, all stunned into silence. I'm the demon fox summoner, Kyuubi is the boss. It's pretty logical when you think about it. How is that even? Isn't he sealed into you? Yes. And, if I wanted to, I could pull him back into the seal just by touching him. Q's in my chakra work in 2 different cycles with 1 intersection. Using the intersection, he can loan me chakra without endangering his psyche locked away into my subconscious. This intersection also allowed me to improve the seal my father created. I can use my own chakra to define the intersection between our chakras. Technically, I shouldn't need to go through the seals to summon Q, but it's a lot faster than physically separating our chakras. It's safer too. If Q's chakra gets too far away from my own, neither of us will be able to control it and he'll go back to being the mindless killing machine that attacked Konoha 12 years ago. Thanks, kid. Glad to know you care, he scoffed, his fur now matted with chocolate frosting. He licked his lips. Just be happy I let you out for cake, I chuckled, scratching behind his ears. Against his wishes, the fearsome Kyuubi no Yoku's eyes closed in contentment. If you want, I converted one of the rooms on this floor into a kennel of sorts. You can sleep in there if you want to stay out longer. Most of my mortal summons live there. I'll check it out later, he shrugged, shrinking a few inches before he jumped onto my lap, a tail slapping me in the face weakly. How's everyone doing? Pretty good, Haku shrugged, smiling at the demon. Zabuza shrugged. Learning the War Awakuma, Sasuke volunteered quietly. Yeah, I saw. I think you should increase the weights on your legs, kid. The War Awakuma is more a show of stealth than raw strength. Don't believe Naruto, he didn't invent the style. I did. How'd you do that? Not to be insensitive, but you're a fox, Jiraiya pointed out. Kyuubi glanced in my direction and I nodded. He jumped off of my lap and trembled before he transformed. Instead of shrinking into a mortal fox, Q grew taller, his fur sliding back into his skin. A few seconds later, he stood at 6 feet 5 inches, a human. Humans and my race are not very different. To keep ourselves separate, for both our safety and your own, we have a number of demon foxes and kitsune trained extensively in a human form. Most do not prefer these forms, they are generally weaker than their natural forms, but a number of demon foxes live in your shinobi villages undercover. We have our own spy network, as you would say. We monitor humans but usually stay uninvolved. Usually? Tsunade asked, raising an eyebrow. Q glanced at me, his now black human eyes asking for me to take this one. I nodded and he transformed back into his natural form, his point made. There is a difference between kitsune and demon foxes. Demon foxes have a distinctive strength and lineage. The number of tails alludes to the strength of the fox, and a demon fox always has two demon parents. Kitsune can be thought of as a subspecies of demon fox. Kitsune have no definite natural form. Both human and fox forms are equally comfortable and usually similar in power. No matter how old or strong they become, they will always have just one tail in their fox form. The biggest difference between kitsune and demon foxes is their parentage. Demon foxes must have two demon parents. Kitsune are half-bloods, I guess. They are the results of human/demon fox relationships. A kitsune is rare to find. Not many foxes hold humans in a high enough regard to mate, I explained. In my entire life, I've only seen 4 true kitsune, one of which is a very good friend of mine. And the rest? Haku asked curiously. I lowered my gaze. Humans fear what they don't understand. If they spot a fox transform into a human, or vice versa, most will not hesitate to murder the kit, QB said, growling at the wooden floor. The table fell silent. After a moment, I glanced up, smiling. We can't change the past, I said, sharing a smile with Kakashi. The war Awakuma aside, anything new happen in the village while I was gone? Not much, Kakashi shrugged. The Jounin were told to be on the lookout for Orochimaru and most of the village doesn't know he was even in the Forest of Death, he reported. Jiraiya narrowed his eyes suspiciously. What exactly happened with Orochimaru? He asked. Naruto didn't tell us much. How much did he tell you? Kakashi asked the other perverted ninja. Only that he attacked the second exam. That Orochimaru was looking for another. I think Shizune, Zabuza, and the Jonin should go to the living room, I said, staring pointedly at Sasuke and Haku. Don't complain, most of Konoha's Jounin don't know this information. I'm only going to tell the Sannin because they can help. Heavy Team was their teammate, they know him better than a lot of people. The 4 ninja left the room grumbling and glaring at me. I chuckled before turning back to Jiraiya. Serious? Why'd you make them leave? If it's that important, shouldn't they know? Jiraiya asked me. I shook my head, standing and walking to the door silently. I clenched my fist and slammed the side of my fist into the wood. Sasuke, Haku, and Shizune all fell away from the door. I heard Zabuza laughing in the background. That's better, I said, taking my seat once more. There are a number of reasons as to why I can't let them know. The biggest one is that Orochimaru has already set his sights on his next body. You know who? Who is it? How are they protected? Tsunade asked hurriedly. They are being protected by me. He's standing in my living room, I said, gripping the cursed seal. It didn't hurt, but the idea of it sickened me. Tsunade gasped. You don't mean Uchiha Sasuke? Orochimaru wants his Sharingan. When he attacked the exams, I was patrolling the forest. I had a feeling he would come back and I wanted to protect the Jonin from your team of a teammate. By the time I made it to my team, Orochimaru was getting ready to deliver the cursed seal. Hearing the seal mentioned, Jiraiya's eyes narrowed and Tsunade gasped, staring at my hand as it covered the seal. Did he actually? I took care of it. The fragment of his soul is dead. All I have now is the design, I said, removing my hand and exposing the Kama design. Recognizing it and realizing the importance of the seal, Jiraiya leaned forward. I couldn't push Sasuke away in time so I took the bite for him. QB destroyed the fragment before it could get comfortable. I had my team escape after I was bitten and I eventually chased Orochimaru out. He's still out there, biding his time until the final exam. He'll attack again, that much I know. Which is why we can't create a panic, Kakashi cut in. If the entire village knew, we'd have to go into lockdown. It's easier to let Orochimaru think he's successfully infiltrated the village. Once he makes his move, we can isolate him and defeat him. I don't think you understand how strong he is. You'll only get yourselves killed, Tsunade said, shaking her head. Orochimaru will not be fighting one opponent. I already know his plans. He's going to send his supposed allies, most if not all of which are now allied with me, to attack the main of Konoha while he battles with Hiruzen Ojisan. What he doesn't know is that I'm going to be fighting alongside Hiruzen. I've chased Orochimaru away once. Now, Hiruzen and I have come to an understanding. What understanding? Jiraiya leaned back in his chair. I chuckled as he nearly lost his balance. That When we fight, we aim to kill. I know that Orochimaru was your teammate. I'm saying that neither I nor Hiruzen can ignore our moral compass and let him slither around until someone else steps up and kills him. He is a Konoha missing nin. It is our duty to destroy what we've created. You didn't. I've already resigned myself to fighting him. Don't try to change my mind or limit my guilt. I could have, and probably should have, killed him that day in the Forest of Death. I was too lenient and I won't let Konoha or its villagers suffer from my actions. Suffer from your actions, Tsunade scoffed. I raised an eyebrow and she turned to glare, almost desperately, at me. You know what will happen to you, Naruto. Don't play the fool. I've never played the fool, I said quietly, staring at Kyuubi. From the day I was born, I've been raised to have what you call a hero complex. I know that almost every person you've ever cared about was lost chasing dreams. I'm saying that I'm going to beat the crap out of Orochimaru. I will marry Hyuga Hinata-chan. I am going to become the Hokage and surpass both my father and Hiruzen. And if you don't? What happens if you die facing Orochimaru? What will happen to Hinata? Team 7? You're going to go out there, look Orochimaru in the eyes, and realize that you are in over your head. How many people have died to become the Hokage? Tsunade shouted, standing abruptly. I was shocked to see her eyes watering. My gaze softened and I smiled sadly. Too many, I answered. Tsunade, I know that you still care about Konoha. Scream and yell all you want, you love this village with all your heart. The only reason you don't stay here is because you can't let yourself get attached to another boy chasing a dream. I know it, you know it, I said, my eyes widening earnestly. You can let yourself get attached, I'm not leaving. Jiraiya studied Tsunade as tears left her eyes. He put a comforting hand on her shoulder, smiling sadly as she leaned into the touch. Kakashi nodded at me and I cleared the dishes silently. I was about to turn from the room when I heard her speak again. She stared into my blue eyes, her own red and puffy. And if you do? She asked quietly. I walked over to her, crouching at her feet. How about a bet? I said. Her eyes brightened distantly and she nodded slowly. If I don't come out, you can forget about my dreams as long as you don't hold it against Konoha. I'm choosing to walk into this battle, no one forced me. On the other hand, if I come out without a scratch, I get your necklace and your trust, I said. Tsunade's hand closed around her grandfather's necklace and she looked worried, probably remembering the downfall of everyone she had given it to. Thinking deeper about the unlikelihood of me defeating Hebi Team uninjured, she nodded slowly, deliberately. I held out my hand and she accepted it, closing the deal with a handshake. Deal, she said, forgetting her horrible track record. In my memory, she had only won a single bet, the bet she had made with Jiraiya, right before he was killed in Ame. I winced, my ears ringing. I had remembered the final exam to have a full house but I had not counted on the sheer volume of the event, not at all muted by the mask I now wore on my face. The mask was more for show than not, a reminder of the other nation's promises as well as a warning to Otto. I stood with my team, all accounted for. I shared a glance and a fond smile with Kakashi, remembering how he and Sasuke had come so late that the latter was nearly disqualified. I glanced at Sasuke, Haku, and Sakura. All three Genin seemed excited for the tournament, even if Sakura was not participating. The pink-haired Kunoichi was now talking to her teammates, wishing them luck in the tournament. I smiled at the exchanged enthusiasm before glancing up at the cage box. All of my allies and enemies were gathered, sitting and talking to each other politely. I noted a certain stiffness between the Kazekage and the others, Hiruzen in particular. Smiling under my mask, I was about to avert my gaze when Hiruzen looked at me and nodded, waving me up to the box. I sighed and glanced at Kakashi. Don't kill the Kazekage, he warned. I only chuckled before messing up the Genin's hair, earning shouts of protest from each. I'll be right back, I need to talk to Sandaime-sama. Don't kill Kakashi while I'm gone, I smirked. Sasuke did a mock salute as Sakura and Haku nodded, Haku a little less enthusiastically. I chuckled, making my way towards the stairs. You wanted to see me, Sandaime-sama? I asked politely. Seeing me, Hiruzen smiled. You may take off your mask. No one here is going to attack anyone, he said, smiling around the room. Raikage chuckled, his booming laugh making me smile. I reached up and undid my mask, moving closer to the cage. Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto, the Raikage chuckled, walking towards me. He gave me his traditional punch on the shoulder. I tried not to roll my eyes at the greeting. It's been a long time since I've seen your mask. I'm not sure I've ever seen your face. Not many people have, I smiled. I'm glad we've straightened out the ambush incident. I meant no harm when I came into Kumo. I know, he nodded. By the way, B and Yugito wanted me to say hello to you for them. he reported. I smiled and exchanged the greeting before moving on to the Tsuchikage. Aniki-sama, I bowed my head politely. Kitsune-sennin, I must admit, it is strange seeing you outside of my country, he raised an eyebrow, still good-naturedly. I chuckled, blushing slightly. I'd say something in my defense but you'd probably find it either hilarious or insulting. Seeing as I'm not sure, I'll keep my mouth shut and leave the politics to Hokage-sama, I shrugged. Aniki only chuckled and I went further down the row. Namikaze Naruto, Terumi chuckled, smiling. How has Konoha been treating you? Well, as ever. Again, thank you for allowing Haku-chan and Zabuza-san to stay in Konoha. I apologize if it caused you any trouble with your people. Mei laughed at my formality. Naruto, you don't have to be afraid of offending me. I know your disposition too well to think you would insult me, she chuckled before glancing up at me. Are Zabuza and Haku here? I'd like to talk to them, remind them that some things in Mist have changed. Haku is in my Jinan team and competing today. She should still be with Team 7 down in the stands, I said, glancing at the crowd. I don't think Zabuza is here yet but he'll come in time to see the tournament. If you want, I could ask the two of them to find you. Thank you, Naruto. And, Hokage-sama, she said, catching Hiruzen's attention. Don't worry, I won't try to steal them back. If they are happy here then I won't try to take them away. Hiruzen chuckled and waved me behind him. I obeyed and he stood from his chair, walking to the edge of the balcony. Naruto, I'm sure the other cage won't mind if you join us. I think it's time we started this, he said to the gathered cage. Looking back into the arena, he cleared his throat before addressing the crowd. Everyone, thank you very much for coming to Chunin exams hosted in Konoha. We will now begin the final round matches for each of the 8 Jinan to come out of the preliminaries. Please stay until the end of the tournament. The crowds cheered and the Kazekage glanced up at Hiruzen. Konoha must have had a good year for there to be so many Jinan to have made it this far, he commented. Hiruzen nodded but did not reply. I took the initiative. I know you must be proud of Suna's team still standing. After all 3 are your own children, are they not, Kazekage? I asked innocently. The Kazekage nodded tightly, returning his gaze to the arena. The terrain may be different but, like the preliminaries, there are no rules in your battles, Genma announced to the Jinan. The matches will continue until one or the other dies or acknowledges defeat. However, if I judge a match to be over, it will stop there. Arguments are not allowed. Understood? The Jinan were silent and tense, all standing straight for the crowd. Alright, Genma said past the stick in his mouth. The first match will be Yuki Haku vs Hyuga Hinata. Those two remain in the arena while the rest of you go to the stands. Turning my eyes to the crowd as the 6 Jinan left the field, I saw Kiba notice the Anbu monitoring the arena. I watched as he narrowed his eyes and talked to Akamaru before turning back to Hinata-chan and Haku. Do you want to say something? Hina-chan asked as she shifted into the Juken stance. Haku smirked and withdrew a senbon from her pouch. Not much, just that I hope we're still friends after I beat you, Haku shrugged. I smiled proudly at my Jinan, so confident. Hina-chan laughed. Don't worry, you'll still be invited once I finish with you, Hina-chan smiled, activating her Byakugan without a hand seal. Haku chuckled, jumping away from my mate. Good luck, I thought to Hina-chan through our seal. Glancing at me in the cage box, she threw me a smile. Won't need it but thank you anyway, she thought back, looking back on Haku. I chuckled and leaned on the wall. Mei glanced at me questioningly. I recommend watching this match closely. Both Kunoichi are wearing over 100 pounds in chakra weights which they will probably deactivate for this match. Hinata-chan has mastered her family's Byakugan. She has complete knowledge of Tenketsu and has mastered both the Juken and the first stages of my own style, the War Awakuma. She has also signed the Fox summoning contract, like myself. On the other hand, Haku is one of my own students. She is your former missing nin, Mei. I'm sure you know that she is intimidating. She has been furthering her ice techniques with the assistance of one of my summons and has been absorbing my medical ninjutsu. With her medical knowledge and ice senbon versus Hinata-chan's Juken, this will be a very close match. At the end of my explanation, all 5 cage leaned forward in their seats, watching the two rookie Kunoichi as they narrowed their eyes at each other. Now then, round 1, Genma said. Begin. Taking the first move, Haku experimentally threw senbon towards Hina-chan. The Hyuga heiress did not draw a kunai to counter the rain of ice. She smirked and, following each shard, rocked back and forth on her heels and dodging each one. The senbon stopping, Hina-chan leaned towards Haku and released a small wave of killing intent that made a number of people in the stands freeze. Haku only laughed and drew another senbon. Naruto-sensei already taught us how to negate killing intent. That trick won't work on me. Throwing the senbon, she created a hand seal that I knew well. Haijutsu, Makyu Hyuzu. I've always wanted to see this technique. Hina-chan chuckled as the 21 mirrors surrounded her. I've heard a lot about these mirrors. You can move from one mirror to the next, create clones, and attack your opponents with waves of ice senbon. It's resistant to fire except for the strongest of jutsu. How will it fare against me? She asked, her hands moving through seals. Suten, Daibakufu no Jutsu. Water condensed from the air, rising from the ground, and began to spin around Hina-chan. When the vortex was large enough, it exploded outwards, the A-rank technique smashing the mirrors and sending Haku out of the ice. The Yuki chuckled as she stood up, soaking wet. Silly Hina-chan. Ice is made from. She was interrupted as Hina-chan's foot collided with her jaw, her right hand attacking the tenketsu in Haku's arm. Stepping back from the blow, Haku attempted to lift her arm, only to find that it was paralyzed. Silly Haku-chan. I mastered the Juken, Hina-chan smiled deviously. The smile melting away when Haku's left hand glowed with green light and the ice user held it to her damaged tenketsu. Finding me in the cage box, Hina-chan frowned. You just had to teach her medical ninjutsu, she shouted at me. I smiled and shrugged, pointing at Haku as she flexed her right hand. Sorry to interrupt, she coughed. Hinata-chan glanced back at her, sighing. Kai, she murmured, releasing her weights and disappearing in a blur. She reappeared seconds later, disabling Haku's arms once more. Can't do that technique without your hands, she said in a sing-song voice. Haku chuckled and picked up a fallen kunai in her mouth. Talking around it, she smiled. Don't need to, she chuckled. I glanced down, seeing Zabuzai in the stands with the rest of Team 7. He was laughing under his breath as Haku used his technique. I was actually talking about releasing your weights, Hina-chan replied, returning into the Juken stance. Haku narrowed her eyes before sighing. The ice user raced forward towards my fiancé, gripping the kunai between her teeth. Hina-chan let her approach, not moving until the kunai came dangerously close to her neck. Hina-chan leaned back, one leg flying up to meet Haku's side. The Yuki survivor stumbled to the side, grimacing. Hina-chan took advantage of the pause and sprang forward, her hands glowing with chakra. Haku ducked and kicked as much as she could, trying to push the Hyuga back, but she was helpless to avoid each jab and the assault on her tenketsu eventually overpowered her will to keep fighting. Hina-chan crouched over Haku, now almost completely paralyzed. Haku spat the kunai out of her mouth and chuckled. I think I'm done, she said, glancing at her frozen limbs. Genma jumped down from his vantage point and stared at the two kunoichi. That ends the first match, he announced. Winner is Hyuga Hinata. The crowd cheered as a couple of medical ninja rushed into the arena and lifted Haku onto a stretcher. Hinata-chan walked out with them, laughing with Haku. I glanced at the cage, most of whom were staring with wide eyes at the two kunoichi. I laughed under my breath as the Kazekage coughed uneasily. That was shorter than I thought it'd be, I commented. Hina-chan must have wanted to end it quickly, she doesn't usually use the Juken, Sundaime chuckled, shrugging. Good work, Naruto. Haku has made progress since she was assigned to your team, he said approvingly. He glanced at Hina-chan, smiling. Your fiancé has also fought well. I hope she makes it to the finals, he commented. I smiled and nodded. Hina-chan is confident that she'll win the tournament. I wish her luck against Ariguma, he won't back down like Haku did. At mention of my student, Reikage glanced up at me. He's competing? Shouldn't he already be a Chunin, if not a Jounin? What village is he from? I asked. The Kazekage took over. He is from Suna, he said, narrowing his eyes as he studied Gar in the stands. I was ready to promote him but he wished to be placed on a team with his siblings. The Reikage followed the Kazekage's eyes and found Gaara. Feeling the stares, Gaara looked up at the cage box. I smiled at him and he waved. Hokage-sama? Do you need me here? I'd like to go find Haku and Hina-chan and congratulate them. Go ahead, he nodded, smiling under his hat. I returned the smile, walking away until I paused at the door. Sabaku no Gaara is fighting Uchiha Sasuke next. I would pay attention to that fight. Both were taught by me. Hiruzen nodded and turned back to the arena as Genma announced the next fight. Not following my own advice, I closed my eyes and followed my chakra to Haku's wolf charm. I opened my eyes, only to find a number of medical ninja jumping away from me in shock. Haku glanced at me and rolled her eyes, still unable to move. Hey, Haku, I smiled. Hinata-chan stood from a chair at Haku's bedside, walked over to me, and kissed me on the cheek. Hey, Hina-chan. You two fought well. Kakashi said the same thing. He already left, said he didn't want to miss the next match, Haku explained, The medic's returning. I waved them away. I'll take it from here, I said. My hand lit up with green energy and I activated Demon Eyes so I could see the targeted Tenketsu. I moved my hand over each of the chakra points, repairing the damage done by Hina-chan's attacks. Hina-chan pounded apologetically to her friend. Haku-chan, don't worry about it, I'll be fine. Think about it this way, you won't be bruised up for your wedding. Hinata-chan chuckled at the reminder and smiled at me with pure happiness. I winked and returned to healing my student. I could heal bruises in seconds, Tenketsu are usually more difficult, I shrugged, finishing up. Haku glanced at me, eyebrows raised, before flexing her right hand. Not bad, sensei, she commented. I chuckled and held out my arm. Grab on, I'll take you back up, I offered. A medical ninja began to protest in the background and I turned to her. I am her sensei and probably a better medical ninja than most people in Konoha. I won't let her out of my sight until I'm sure she's recovered. The medic frowned but stepped back as Sasuke and Gaara were both brought in on stretchers. I sighed, missing the entire fight. I glanced at Hina-chan and Haku. You can stay here, Naruto-kun. I'll take care of Haku-chan, Hinata-chan offered. I nodded and she led the ice user back into the arena, leaving me with the two injured Genin. Glancing at them, I sighed. Seeing as you're still conscious, I guess you won? I asked Gaara. Green eyes shifted to me and the redhead chuckled. Barely, he shrugged, wincing at the movement. I walked to his side, my hands glowing. If I could move, I'd kill you for teaching him the War Awakuma. He used it? I asked, surprised. I thought he would have depended more on his ninjutsu. I taught him some fire techniques that could dent your ultimate defense. Again, if I could move, I would kill you, he said. I chuckled, staring at his damaged body with my red eyes, counting broken bones. How did he? Maybe I shouldn't have taught him so much, I said, studying his cracked ribs, dislocated shoulder, and broken ankle. The famous Ariguma, lying broken at the hands of a 12-year-old Genin, who knows the War Awakuma and released his weights. How much is he wearing, anyway? I could barely see him. He was wearing 220 when I started training him for the exams. Did he use Kamasura? Yes, another thing I have to kill you for, he glared while I finished the worst of his injuries. I'll be fine, Shukaku can handle the rest. You go work on Sasuke. Obeying my student, I left his side and walked to Sasuke, already crowded by medical ninja. I shooed them away and put my hands on his heart and forehead, ready to perform a chakra exchange. Opening my eyes, I glanced at the medics. Watch this. You won't see this technique used anywhere else, and with good reason. This technique is extremely dangerous for anyone with chakra stores less than those of a Jinchuriki, I said, separating Q and my chakras. I pressed my chakra into Sasuke's stores and he jerked at the transfer. The medical nin gasped as they saw Sasuke's wounds healing at an extraordinary rate. I stumbled back, the loss of chakra taking its toll before Q could give me more chakra. A medic rushed towards me but I waved him away as my skin began to glow red. When the color receded, I stood back up, examining Sasuke. What did you do? Akunoichi asked. I glanced back at her and chuckled. Something extremely dangerous that will cut his recovery time from months to days. I call this technique the chakra exchange. It's more of a transfer though, as I don't take any of his chakra. Simply put, I separate my chakra from Kyuubi's and inject it into Sasuke's Tenketsu. Then, instead of dying from chakra exhaustion, Kyuubi lends me more chakra until my own stores recover enough. That was what the red glow was. I saw a few medics nod, impressed and stunned at the same time. Sasuke opened his eyes slowly and groaned. I lost, didn't I? Sasuke, you were up against the Ariguma, an A-ranking ninja. Not many shinobi could last so long, let alone injure him that badly. As I spoke, Sasuke glanced at his body, noting the lack of broken bones and cuts. Chakra exchange? He guessed. I nodded. You should go back up, I'll be fine. Alright, I shrugged. I glanced at Gaara, sitting up in bed against the wishes of the medics. Gaara, when you are ready, come up to the cage box. Rikichi wanted to apologize. Really? Wants to apologize? He asked incredulously. I nodded, chuckling. That and I'm sure you wouldn't want to miss the opportunity to annoy the Kazekage. Who knows if you'll get another chance to threaten him in front of the other cage. True, Gaara smiled. He stretched, hiding a wince as Shukaku helped heal his wounds. He sat up for a few more moments before standing gingerly and walking over to me. Let's go. I held out my arm and he laughed under his breath. How many Hiraishin seals do you have in this village? I lost count. Are you including the necklace charms and the kunai? I asked as he gripped my arm. We both closed our eyes and I made the trip as fast as I could, in between blinks. At our arrival, Aniki and the Kazekage jumped. Aniki growled, recovering. "I really hate that technique," he muttered, remembering all the damage my father had caused Iwa single-handedly with his Hiraishin kunai. The Kazekage only narrowed his eyes, scowling behind his mask. "Araguma," the Raikage began, grinning. Gaara glanced up before ducking the inevitable greeting punch. "Long time no see." "Sorry, I had the impression that neither myself nor my Shisho were allowed in Kumo," Gaara chuckled good-naturedly. I shrugged, smiling. I growled quietly. "I told you not to call me that, Gaara." "Sorry, Deiko," Gaara grinned sheepishly. Aniki studied us with narrowed eyes before glancing towards the Kazekage. "Your son seems very comfortable surrounded by Konohanin," he speculated. The Kazekage only narrowed his eyes, not responding as Kankuro forfeited in the arena. Gaara glanced at his brother, groaning. "Gaara, you know he would have lost. The Aburame are famous for their bug techniques. Your brother's wooden puppets wouldn't have stood a chance," I pointed out. Gaara still pouted. "Think about it this way, Temari is up next. She'll be fighting Shikamaru." Gaara grinned as the two Jonin entered the arena, studying each other. Even from the cage box, I could hear Shikamaru mutter troublesome. I smiled, noticing Sandstorm curled around Temari's shoulder. "Shikamaru won't be winning this one," Gaara smiled deviously. Hiruzen glanced at the Suna ninja, eyebrows raised. I coughed, turning attention to me. "Temari won't be fighting this alone. When I came to Suna the first time, I was introduced to Temari, Gaara's sister. When we left, I left a kid in her care. She named the kid Sandstorm and they have been training together ever since. They have a relationship similar to the Inuzuka's friendship with dogs. The biggest difference is that Sandstorm can perform jutsu without Temari's assistance," I explained. The Kazekage smiled, leaning back. "Shikamaru's only chance to win this match will be to defeat both quickly, something he already won't want to do." "Why not?" Mei asked, studying the shadow user as he sighed. Gaara took over, grinning like his summons. "Because Shikamaru likes my sister," he chuckled deviously. "He won't do anything too direct in this fight. He'd probably let her win anyway so he doesn't have to deal with her being mad at him during the wedding," I pointed out. Gaara smiled, nodding as Shikamaru's shadow extended towards Temari. The Sunakunoichi let herself be caught in the shadow as Sandstorm jumped away from her, transforming in mid-air. When she touched the ground in a crouch, she grinned sadistically, fully human. Turning to the dumbstruck cage, I chuckled. "Did I mention that Sandstorm is a kitsune?" Silence and shock were my answers, especially from the Kazekage. Gaara and I grinned and turned back to the battle, ready to watch Shikamaru lose to the Wind Mistress. Needless to say, Shikamaru walked out shamefaced as Temari and Sandstorm high-fived each other. Genma jumped into the arena, announcing the end of the first round and giving everyone a 20-minute recess. Gaara and I walked to a secluded hallway, questions ready to be answered. "When is Orochimaru planning the attack?" "The final round. He expects me to be in the last match, in the arena so I can go Shukaku and rampage the village." "Good. Careful against Hina-chan. She's determined to get to the finals." "Then Orochi team will probably tell me to rush the attack to my match with Hinata. I'll stick to the plan if you do." "No problem on my end. I just need Hebi team to get to the roof. I'll break through the barrier." My mind went back to our last venture before returning to Suna. We were watching Otto slowly form. Flashback tilde. A base was being constructed a mile away from our campsite, still visible thanks to our animalistic vision. Gaara was pacing the camp, his mask on. I stared into our small fire. "So the plan," Gaara began. I nodded, glancing at him through my own mask. "What about it?" "Go over it, one more time," I sighed but complied. "From the original timeline, Orochimaru will infiltrate Suna, defeat your father, and take his place as Yondaime Kazekage. You'll know when they make the switch. Hebi team will still smell like snakes, no matter which face he steals. You go on with whatever you were doing, pretending to be oblivious to his plans and identity. When the time for the Chunin exams come, get to Konoha a few days early and find me in the village. You'll go through the exams. The first is a written exam designed to test your information gathering opportunities. I'll leave out you but I will say that, last time, you used your third eye. The next will be the Forest of Death. Get the other scroll then make your way to the tower in the center. Using a Kuminomi to locate my chakra signature might help. I'll be in the tower as soon as I prevent Sasuke from getting the cursed seal from Hebi team. Next, you will go through the preliminaries. Try to take your opponent, Rock Lee, out as soon as possible without killing him. If you let him have hopes of defeating you, he will unlock the first 5 chakra gates and cause ridiculous damage to himself. After that, You'll have a month of free time and training before the final exam, the tournament. In the first timeline, you were ambushed by Dosu. If you want to maintain the timeline as much as possible, kill him. Do whatever Orochimaru tells you for that exam, otherwise it'll look suspicious. If you can avoid it, don't kill anyone else though. Once Orochimaru makes his move, summon Shukaku and tell him to make it look good. Heavy team will attack Sundaime on the roof. I'll join them while you go around Konoha and keep track of everyone. Basically, go around and take out Orochimaru's pawns. Baki will be fighting with a Konoha ninja named Gekko Hayate. I hate to say this, but let them fight it out. Once Orochimaru is either dead or escaped, hopefully Sundaime will still be alive. He'll choose a successor and I'll recommend Tsunade. The end. Most people are happy and the rest are dead. Orochimaru, I said, trying to keep the bitterness out of my voice. Gaara nodded, gazing at the base. Why don't we go and destroy Oto now? He asked, clenching his fist as he studied the ninja. Because that would mess up Heavy Team's plans. It's easier for us if we let him have his way for now, cataloging each of his bases as we go, I said, glancing at the map lying flat on the ground, marked with X's for each Oto base and O's for each Akatsuki base, provided to us by Uchiha Itachi. Gaara nodded slowly and sat down by the fire. And flashback. After a while, Gaara leaned against the wall, thinking. What do you think will happen after the invasion? Konoha will offer Suna a treaty after you find out how Orochimaru tricked you. After that, I'm not exactly sure. In the last timeline, you became the Godime Kazekage. I'd love to see that happen again, but it is your choice if you are offered the position. I don't know about it. I don't think I'd be ready for that type of responsibility. Either way, I'll be standing beside you. Konoha will back Suna if you ever need our help, I said, turning back towards the arena. Gaara paused before nodding and following me back into the crowds. I took my seat beside Kakashi as one of the Kazekage's guards appeared behind our group. The man tapped Gaara on the shoulder before walking into the hallway. Scowling, Gaara winked at me before following the man into the empty hall to meet with the Kazekage. When he returned minutes later, he nodded subtly at me. This match is between Hyuga Hinata and Sabaku, and I fixed it, no Gaara. Those two come into the arena, Genma announced from his vantage point. The Tujana nodded determinedly at the other, making their way to the field. This match determines who goes on to the finals. That said, remember that if I declare the match finished, it ends. Begin. He called, jumping back. Gaara smirked, his hands flying through the familiar seals before he bit his thumb, slamming his palm on the ground. Watching him closely, Hina-chan activated her Byakugan before going through the same seals. When the smoke cleared, two summons stood facing each other, flanked by Hina-chan and Gaara. Gaara studied the mortal fox as Hinata-chan sized up the strange raccoon with narrowed eyes. Scowling, she spoke. That is completely unfair, Gaara. You can summon Shukaku already? She growled. Gaara chuckled sadistically, nodding at Shukaku. A wave of killing intent pulsed away from the sand demon, freezing the civilians and most of the ninja. Have fun, Shukaku, Gaara laughed, feigned insanity coloring his voice. Shukaku grinned and grew until he was as tall as the arena. Haku glanced at me with narrowed eyes. I waved her away as Shukaku left a path of destruction in his wake, heading towards the forests. Sasuke, Sakura, Haku, I need you three to take Shukaku. Don't worry, he won't kill you. He's on our side, I said, narrowing my eyes as the cage box filled with smoke. Kabuto placed his genjutsu over the crowds and my team easily released themselves. Seconds passed and the Kazekage eventually flew out of the smoke holding Hiruzen with a kunai at his neck. The Oto nin emerged from their transformations, smirking at the leaf Anbu. Do it, I heard the Kazekage order. The sound four created their barrier and, like last time, the first Anbu to come in contact with it died. I jumped onto the roof next to the Anbu captain, my mask already on my face. The course of history is going to change now, the Kazekage said, still in disguise. Hiruzen studied the ninja holding him captive. Are you saying that you're starting a war? He asked quietly. One should avoid resolution through armed force and should rather seek a solution through negotiations. There's still time, perhaps one gets addicted to peace with age. It's too bad, he smirked, Sarutobi-sensei. The leaf has been outmaneuvered. You've lost, perhaps. But nothing is decided until the end, Hiruzen chuckled. I believe that's what I taught you. Orochimaru. The Kazekage reached his hand to his face, peeling off the disguise. I growled as he smiled evilly at the Sandaime Hokage. I knew this day would come, Hiruzen announced. However, you won't get my head that easily. I told you, didn't I? It would be better for you to choose the Godime Hokage quickly, He drifted off. Sandaime. You will die here. The missing nin lifted his kunai, his tongue flicking out to touch the metal. After a pause, Hiruzen glanced at Orochimaru, somewhat incredulous. Are you so happy that you're crying, or do you have an iota of sadness in your heart to kill me, your sensei? Orochimaru smiled, stabbing his palm. No. Early on I was tired, now, I'm fully awake, he said, releasing the Hokage and walking away. I thought it'd be something like that. After all, I know you aren't one to hold a grudge, Hiruzen said, narrowing his eyes. You have no goal, no motive. I guess I do have a motive, Orochimaru said, flinging his hat into the barrier, to destroy Konoha. As I thought, Hiruzen said, a small smile on his aged features. To think, I'd be able to fight you again, Orochimaru smiled. Outside of the barrier, the Anbu captain studied the barrier. I see, he muttered, glancing at his team and finally noticing me. Kitsune, I didn't see you there. It's okay. This barrier can only be broken from the inside, right? Hi, he said, nodding. I smiled and closed my eyes. I'm going in, I said. The Anbu began to protest until I shushed him. Hiruzen has one of my Hiraishin kunai. I'm sure I can get inside. The Sound 4 will be more difficult, they've surrounded themselves with the barrier. I'll help Hokage-sama with Orochimaru. I shut my eyes and appeared at Hiruzen's left. Both of the older ninjas looked surprised at my appearance and I thought I saw Orochimaru rock back on his heels. There's nowhere to run this time, heavy team, I taunted. You've dug your own grave with this barrier. Orochimaru only laughed, his hands forming seals. Striking Shadow Snake, he shouted, his tongue morphing into a snake, shooting towards Hiruzen. I withdrew my Zuchi in a flash, slicing off the snake's head with a wave of motion. The snake writhed as it receded back into Orochimaru's mouth. You betrayed Konoha. You attacked my team. You tried to implant your disgusting soul into my student. You gave me the cursed seal of heaven. This fight does not concern your sensei. This is between you and me, heavy team. Orochimaru licked his lips and I grimaced. Why don't we stop playing these games, Naruto-kun? Orochimaru grinned. His hands formed seals I had often seen in my past. He proceeded into summoning the past cage. I smirked when the Yondaime refused to be summoned. My father won't be summoned using that technique, heavy team, I said, watching the two coffins emerge from the tiled roof. I see you've heard of this technique. Pretty little thing, isn't it, Naruto-kun? Orochimaru smiled behind the coffins. The doors opened and the Shodaime and Nidaime Hokages stepped out, staring at the Sandaime behind me. Long time, no see, Saru, the Shodai, Senju Hashirama said in a monotone. His younger brother nodded. Oh, it is you. You've gotten old, Sarutobi, the Nidaime, Senju Tobirama, noted. Sandaime nodded, stunned into silence. I never thought I'd see the two of you again, not like this, Hiruzen said, glaring at Orochimaru. It's regretful. The younger brother turned to Shodai. Reanimation, huh? Then this youth must have summoned us using the forbidden jutsu, he reasoned, glancing at Orochimaru behind him as the coffins fell to the side. Then, does this mean that we must fight you? Hashirama asked, staring at his former student. There is always fighting, no matter where or when you live. Orochimaru stepped behind them, holding two kunai aloft. Hiruzen narrowed his eyes at the snake Sanin. No good will come by deriding the dead and playing around with time. Breaking eye contact with his sensei, Orochimaru slid each kunai into the Hokage's heads. Let's get started, shall we? He smiled at me, the two reanimated Hokage steaming as they regained their old strength. They're ready. Staring at his deceased sensei, Hiruzen's eyes watered. I glanced at him empathetically. You are a monster, heavy team. You've summoned these souls for more than one reason. They might have been the strongest ninja of their time, but they were also Hiruzen's sensei. For performing this jutsu, and so many others, you will die today, I promised as the two Hokage began to rush towards me. Hiruzen, I'll keep the Hokages busy. You need to battle Orochimaru. I will help when I've finished. Don't get yourself killed, Naruto. I know my teacher's abilities. Don't underestimate them. I know, Oji-san. Go kill the snake, I'll save your sensei, I assigned. Hiruzen scoffed at the nickname but jumped towards Orochimaru. His predecessors jumped to meet them before they were interrupted by my blade. I sliced each with my Zuchi, forcing them away from Hiruzen. Oji-san? Orochimaru laughed at the title. Hiruzen narrowed his eyes, flying through seals. Kushios no Jutsu. Enma appeared out of the smoke, transforming once more into a staff for Hiruzen. I turned away from the snake Sanin and his sensei as a column of wood rose out of the tiles. My hands formed the rat seal and I muttered Kai, feeling over 300 pounds vanish away. Would release. Haven't seen it yet, I chuckled, watching the Shodai fly through hand seals. Pillars rose around me and I grimaced, recognizing the technique used to restrain Baijuo. I glanced up, staring into the first Hokage's eyes. Senjutsu Nade, your granddaughter, is here in Konoha. She is doing great, she even took on one of my students on as an apprentice. Hashirama made no reply as I shined away from the wooden columns. Nidaime studied me as I talked as I whirled Mizuchi around to deflect his thrown kunai. I stared at where I knew Orochimaru's kunai would be in their heads, largely unprotected if you knew how to remove them. Flashback Itachi. I coughed up blood, watching the reanimated Uchiha standing over me with a kunai closing in on my throat. At the last second, I rolled away, jumping behind him. I forced my hand closer and closer to his neck, reaching for the hilt of the kunai that kept him bound to Kabuto. Feeling the metal, I gripped it and ripped it away from Itachi. "Na Naruto," Itachi coughed, collapsing. I fell close to him, holding my broken ribs. Itachi stared at me, his body back under his control. "Naruto, let me." "I'll be okay," I said, my hand lighting up with green energy. "I'm glad you are back in control. I know what you did for Sasuke. I'm sorry." Itachi watched me in silence, flexing his right hand. "I don't belong in this world anymore. I need you to." He was interrupted by a rain of kunai, pinning him to the ground. I whirled around, reaching for my own kunai. I was startled to find Shikamaru standing over me with expressionless eyes. "We need to keep going, Naruto-sama," he reported. I glanced at Itachi's body before nodding, ready to fight pain again. And flashback. Shooting towards me, Tobirama launched a spinning kick towards my head. I countered with my own kick, using the spin to strengthen my next, chakra-reinforced, punch towards his head. He blocked the blow, grabbing my wrist and twisting my arm backwards. He pressed my wrist to the small of my back, jumping away as his brother wound a spiral of wood around my body. I winced as the wood tightened. I pushed Q's chakra out of each of my tenketsu, spinning around in a kaiden. The wood pushed outwards as the demonic chakra came into contact with it. I jumped away from the wood, towards Hashirama. "It really is a shame that I have to fight you too," I said in between kicks and punches. Hashirama met me blow for blow. I feigned a uppercut and the Shodai leaned away to the side, leaving the back of his head vulnerable. Faster than Guy could say Yosh, the kunai was in my hand and ripped away from the deceased Hokage. He shuddered, just as Itachi had, before falling to his knees. I jumped away from him, towards his younger brother. Tobirama narrowed his eyes at me, his white hair flying out away from his face. His hand flying to his back, I smiled as he drew Raijin no Ken, the sword of the Thunder God. I grinned and drew my own sword. "Before you attack me blindly, you should know that I was trained by the samurai and Kiri's 7 swordsmen. Also, this blade is the Namikaze sword, Mizuchi. It may not be infused with electrical energy, but it can pack quite a punch if I add my chakra to the mix," I said, pushing both my wind nature chakra and Q's fire nature chakra to create the flaming purple sword I now held in my hands. "If you still feel pain, I apologize," I said, running towards Tobirama. He tightened his grip in preparation. When our swords met, the 3 elements exploded away from each other. Tobirama's sword was engulfed by purple flames, Mizuchi was tingling with electricity. Feeling the spark rush to the hilt, I dropped the katana as Tobirama threw his own weapon away. "I didn't expect that," I admitted, glancing at Raijin no Ken, still aflame. I saw a shadow move towards me and I instinctively ducked, holding a kunai in front of my face. I stopped when I saw Hashirama standing over me, staring at his younger brother. Tobirama was powerless to stop his brother's wood techniques as they wound around his body. Glancing at me, Hashirama nodded. "Go, I can hold him," he said sadly. I ran to the Nidaime, reaching into his head and gripping the kunai. Tearing it away, the Nidaime fell to his knees, coughing as the wood restricting him receded. "Thank you, Shodai-sama," I nodded my head, glancing at Hiruzen, breathing heavily across from Orochimaru. I glanced at the deceased ninja. He nodded, his hands forming a seal I recognized from my days with Tenzo as Team 7's captain. A tree sprouted from the tiles, each limb extending outwards until Orochimaru found himself trapped in a wooden cage suspended over the ground. "What is your name?" Shodai asked me, standing close to his brother. I smiled, pointing to myself. "Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto, future Hokage," I grinned. The Shodai only chuckled as his younger brother stood up. Hiruzen walked up to us and I nodded, returning to Orochimaru. He glanced at me, scoffing. Hey, if it isn't Naruto-kun, I promised you something heavy, team." I told you that you would not be leaving this rooftop with your life. I'm here to keep that promise. Kushios no Jutsu. Kyuubi appeared, only half his normal size. I jumped to his head, a palm on his forehead as I stored his excess chakra. I have seen your crimes, Snake. Shinigami-sama will be pleased with your soul at his gates, Q growled. Orochimaru paled as Q lifted a paw, ripping the cage to shreds and pinning the missing nin to the tile's roof. Start screaming, Snake. You'll get no mercy from me. I walked away, leaving Kyuubi to his fun as Orochimaru's girly screams filled the air. Each of the Sound Four, rushing in to help, were quickly disposed of, courtesy of Kyuubi's thrashing tails. I walked to the three Hokage, whistling. Each stood at me, amazed and frightened for the leaf. What? I asked, aware of their fears. He won't do anything but kill Heavy Team and his minions. He knows what his punishment will be if he touches anything or anyone outside of Auto. You seem to be on good terms with this Baijuo, Jinchuriki, showed. I glanced at the bloody mess that was Orochimaru. I grinned as Q joined us, shrinking till he was up to my waist. I put a palm on his forehead, scratching his ears. Isn't that what you wanted when you divided the Baijuo amongst the nations? If a Jinchuriki respects their Baijuo, and the other way around, they can form a dangerous tag team. I reasoned. The Shodai and Nidaime only chuckled, glancing at Hiruzen. How old is this one, Saru? Tobirama asked. I blinked, remembering that I still had my mask on. I reached up to it as Hiruzen answered. Naruto is one of the youngest Jounin in the history of Konoha. He skipped the Chunin exams altogether. He is 12 years old. The Hokage all turned to me, inevitably. My arm went to the back of my head, embarrassed as I removed my mask. Hiruzen Oji-san, I complained. You act like it's such a surprise. I'm my father's son, I shrugged. Hiruzen nodded, chuckling. Namikaze Naruto is the last of the Namikaze clan. His father, Minato, was the Ondaime Hokage, the third coffin Orochimaru tried to resurrect. He died sealing Kyuubi into Naruto 12 years ago. I still need to kill that Uchiha for what he did, Kyuubi growled. I nodded as the two deceased Hokage looked surprised. I remembered that they both thought Madara to be dead. Most of Konoha is under the impression that there are only 5 Uchiha left in existence. 4 years ago, Uchiha Itachi killed everyone in his clan with the exception of his younger brother Sasuke and his pregnant girlfriend. Itachi then left Konoha as an S-ranking missing nin and joined up with the Akatsuki, an organization made to collect the 9 Baijuo from all over the world and create a super weapon. The leader is a war orphan from Ame named Nagato, also known as Pain. He is only a puppet, though. The true mastermind is Uchiha Madara. He's still alive? I thought he died after our battle, Hashirama said quietly. That's because he wants everyone to be under the impression that he died. He is laying low, gathering followers and making plans. You wounded him badly enough that he is still weak, at least compared to his former strength. Crippled, he won't make a move until he's sure it will be successful. Unfortunately for us, that means he can stay hidden while he puts together his forces. You sound like you know a lot of Madara. I do know a lot about Madara. Whether he knows it or not, I already placed a spy inside the Akatsuki. Personally, I doubt that Madara killed his brother for the eternal Mangekyou Sharingan. I know that he feared that the Uchiha would be oppressed by the Senju when Konoha was first created. That paranoia drove him to plot against the two of you, leading to his banishment within his clan. I remember hearing of unrest within the Uchiha clan, Tobirama commented. I nodded. History often repeats itself. When Itachi massacred his clan, they were plotting against Hiruzen. They felt that they weren't getting the proper recognition for helping to found Konoha. Itachi had the worst hand to play. When he heard of the revolt, he informed the elders. He was currently an Anbu captain, and Danzo decided to use that to his advantage. Danzo? Is he still alive? Tobirama asked, remembering his student. Q growled. That warhawk lives on out of spite, nothing more. If I were you, Naruto, I'd. It's a good thing you aren't me, Q. Otherwise a third of Konoha would be dead, I pointed out. Kyuubi grumbled, laying down. Ever since you died, Tobirama-sama, Danzo has become totalitarian. Even if everything he does benefits Konoha, it benefits him just a little bit more. Root is completely under his sole control, all of its shinobi only puppets on his political chessboard. He is the head of Konoha's council and, until I took my seat, he was not afraid to attempt to intimidate or extort the council members into voting his way. Of course, I might be a little unfair to him. He's wanted me in Root since the day I turned 6. Actually, that was when he started asking me. He's been asking Kakashi since you were 2, Hiruzen corrected. I growled. You are attracting attention to yourself, Not many 2-year-olds can walk on water or outrun Anbu. We continued going back and forth until Hashirama cleared his throat. What happens now? Tobirama and I don't belong in this world anymore. I held back a shudder from the similar words. I smiled sadly. I learned a lot about this technique when I thought Heavy Team was the biggest threat. According to my information, there are only a few ways to send you back. How? Tobirama asked, glancing at his brother. The first would be for your summoner to dismiss you. Seeing as that won't be happening, I drifted off, glancing at what was left of Orochimaru. The second is to seal your souls away so that you can't be summoned again. The last is to... My voice died as I glanced at Hiruzen. Hashirama nodded understandingly. To kill us again? He guessed. I nodded sadly. Hashirama glanced at his brother before shrugging. Alright, let's get this over with. What? Hiruzen asked, his eyes wide. I put a hand on his shoulder. It's okay, Saru. We've died before, Hashirama said quietly. We've had our time here, it's time for us to go. You'll see us again. Just not here. I left Konoha to you for a reason, Sarutobi. Make sure you leave it to someone who will take care of it, Tobirama smiled. I glanced at Hiruzen and he turned away as I drew Mizuchi. Naruto? You can take Raijin no Ken. Mizuchi is a fine blade but it never hurts to have another on hand. Say hello to Tsunade for me, Hashirama added, thinking of his granddaughter, still in Konoha. I smiled at the Shodai and Nidaime, almost numb to what I was about to do. I nodded slowly to the two Hokage and brought Mizuchi down in a lethal arc. Hiruzen jumped as the bodies hit the ground. The next day, Council Room. I have decided, with a good deal of thought, that I can no longer serve as active Hokage, Sundaime announced to the council. One of the elders hid a smile and Danzo tried to hide his happiness. Have you decided on a successor? Koharu asked. Hiruzen nodded. I have been considering two people in particular. The first has respectfully denied the opportunity so that he can focus on his other responsibilities, Hiruzen reported, not looking at me. The second is Senju Tsunade. Tsunade is a drunk, Koharu chuckled. I sat up in my chair, ready to defend the Godime candidate. Tsunade fulfills all requirements and then some. Not only is she widely famous as one of the legendary Sannin, she is also one of the greatest medical ninborn. What she lacks in organizational skills will be compensated for by her apprentice, Shizune. Tsunade knows how to get her point across. By threatening and yelling, yes, Homura countered. I sighed. Which is the only way to communicate with a number of men. If you haven't noticed, I am not exactly quiet or polite in these council meetings. Consequently, I usually get what I want. All Tsunade needs is to learn the subtleties of politics, something I'm sure you, as elders, should be able to school her in. Homura and Koharu fell silent, opening the door to Danzo. I will not deny that Tsunade is a powerful medical kunoichi. I do, however, question her loyalties towards the village hidden in the leaves. Even now, she could prove a liability for Konoha. Are you implying that my student does not have Konoha's interests at heart? Hiruzen nearly growled. Danzo glanced at the Sundaime, smirking. Her teammates seem to have Konoha's best interests at heart. Hiruzen, Danzo said with a fake smile. I sighed again. Orochimaru was a time bomb. His disloyalty was inevitable the moment his parents' lives ended. He decided to adhere to his already questionable Nindo and learn Kinjutsu. Tsunade is different. When she loses someone, she tries to find someone to fill the gap they left behind. Nawaki and Dan both died in pursuit of becoming Hokage. Now her trust is in me because I share that ambition, I said, pulling Shodai's necklace out of my shirt. Danzo narrowed his eyes, recognizing it. And if you fall? Koharu asked pointedly. I tucked the necklace back in my shirt as Hiruzen answered for me. Yesterday, Naruto successfully defeated both the Shodai and the Nidaime single-handedly. Naruto is easily on level with the Sannin as well as the Kage. He will not be defeated so easily, nor will he abandon Konoha. I blushed slightly. I had help with Nidaime-sama, I corrected, one hand on the Raijin no Ken's hilt, now at my waist. Even with Shodai-sama, I don't think he was expecting me to break out of his wood. You seem very trusting of this 12-year-old, Homura said, narrowing his eyes at me. I kept my face smooth as I drew Raijin no Ken. Hiruzen chuckled as the elders and the clan heads leaned back in surprise. Naruto released both Hokage from Orochimaru. Before they left this world, Tobirama-sama entrusted his blade, Raijin no Ken, to Naruto. Can you honestly say that I should have any reason to doubt this, Jounin? This is not about me, I said, retracting the sword into its crossguard. This is about deciding the next Hokage. The council, the elders, and myself are here to advise Sundaime-sama. We have no real say in his successor, I said, sitting down. Hiruzen nodded at me, laughing under his breath. Now that is settled, Senju Tsunade will be appointed Ga-Daime Hokage as soon as the daimyo approves her, Hiruzen ordered. I think that is all we came here to discuss. Jounin-sensei, come to my office. The new Chunin have been chosen. Dismissed. I stood from my chair, laughing with Tori about the ridiculousness of the meeting. We parted at the door. Tori left towards the academy to resume her class. I left for Hiruzen's office. Kakashi caught up with me easily and we walked away from the seething elders. In the Hokage's office. Hiruzen sat at his desk, a piece of paper held in his hands. He glanced up at us, the assembled Jounin-sensei, and smiled. First, I'd like to say that I haven't seen this many Junin-made Chunin in one exam in a long time. We have a total of 4 new Chunin, all of them rookies. The older Jounin-sensei all sighed in unison, expecting that their teams hadn't made it through. Who are the new Chunin? Kurenai asked Hiruzen, rocking on her heels. Hiruzen chuckled at her enthusiasm before consulting a list. The new Chunin are Naruto, Asuma smiled warmly, Yuki Haku, I grinned, Uchiha Sasuke, Kakashi chuckled under his breath, and Hyuga Hinata. At the last name, Kurenai's face broke into a grin as wide as mine. Stopping in her celebration, she glanced at me, her red eyes smiling. When's the wedding? She demanded, grabbing my shoulder. I held back a wince as Asuma laughed. His laughter died when she turned to him, fist raised. Do not ruin this for me. I took the opportunity to pull a Kakashi, vanishing out the window. I hurried to my house, where I knew everyone was waiting for news of the Ga-Daime. Team 7, Kakashi included, were already there. Tsunade was with Shizune and Jiraiya, taking a leave from his traveling to come to my wedding. I was interrupted by the familiar tackling hug. Breathless, I chuckled. I guess I won't tell everyone who the Ga-Daime is, or the new Chunin. All at once, the weight vanished and my ears were bombarded with questions. First things first, the Ga-Daime has been decided if they'll take the position. Who is it? Tsunade asked, oblivious to her sensei's wishes. I looked at her pointedly and she took half a step back. What? Hiruzen recommended you to be the Ga-Daime Hokage. I agreed completely, I smiled. Tsunade looked reasonably shocked. Me? Hokage? I don't think so, she drifted off. I raised an eyebrow. I mean, one student is one thing, a whole village is another. And you'll be perfect. Don't worry, Hiruzen is still here to help you and I'm sure Shizune will keep you on track. I'll be there if you need me to deal with Koharu and Homura. I think I can handle those two, Tsunade coughed. Without punching them through a wall? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Maybe you should talk to them, Shizune said, glancing in between Tsunade and me. Jiraiya laughed and Tsunade growled, raising her fist. As Jiraiya blanched, I cleared my throat loudly. Tsunade, I do live here. I'd appreciate it if you didn't punch Uro-sennin through a wall. Besides, I didn't even announce the Chunin yet. The room quieted in anticipation and Kakashi sighed. You don't need to draw it out, Naruto. Just tell them who got promoted. You're no fun, I pouted. Kakashi rolled his eyes and I turned back to the Junin. There were 4 Junin to be made Chunin, all of them rookies, Narashikamaru, Yuki Haku, Uchiha Sasuke, and Hyuga Hinata. Again, I was tackled by Haku, Hina-chan, and Sakura. Following my expectations, Sakura seemed happier for her teammates than she felt angry at her own rank. Okay, I said, pulling the kunoichi off of me. Chunin is a big deal, that means we're getting married. Hina-chan said in a sing-song voice. I smiled at her, nodding. Exactly. Less importantly, it means that you are now able to be a team leader on missions. Team 7 will still function as a squad but you will get more difficult missions. You will still have a team leader, either Kakashi or another Jounin, but it probably won't be me. Why not? Sasuke asked calmly. I smiled sadly. Everyone knows who I am, I'm an S-ranking nin in the bingo book. I'll be sent on the most dangerous missions, A and S rank. Team 7 will be going on easier missions, B to A rank. The only times you'll see me are on A ranking missions or in the village. Otherwise, I'm removed from Team 7. I was only your Jounin sensei because Team 7 only had 2 Junin. Ah, Haku pouted. Don't worry, I shouldn't be sent out for a while. After all, we have a wedding to throw. I smiled at Hina-chan. She grinned back and I wrapped my arm around her shoulders, glancing at the midday sun. Speaking of which, when is the wedding? I never asked. 2 weeks, Hina-chan answered, smiling. I nodded, thinking about the guest list. You should probably get the San siblings, we need Gaara and Temari here for the last-minute preparations. The entire wedding is a little last-minute, I pointed out. Hinata-chan smacked my shoulder playfully and chuckled. Okay, I'll get them tomorrow. I'll give Suna a few days to recover from heavy team. Sounds like a plan, Kakashi said, stretching. He glanced around the room, his gaze lingering on Shizune before moving on. I laughed under my breath as Hina-chan smiled knowingly. Hinata, you should tell your father that you made Chunin. I'm sure Kurenai already told him. Hina-chan shrugged, seeing my memory of her Jounin-sensei's reaction. If she didn't, it can wait until I get home, she said, hugging my side. I chuckled. Who wants lunch? I asked, walking towards the kitchen door. Hearing Hina-chan come into the kitchen, I glanced up from the counter. She smiled at me, walking behind me and wrapping her arms around me. Love you, I reminded her. She chuckled and hugged me tighter. Always and everywhere, she smiled. Everything will be different now. Orochimaru is dead. Sasuke doesn't have the seal and still has her family. I hope he and Sakura-chan start going out. They'd be a good fit if they stopped pretending for the other. I know. Sakura's getting out of her fangirl attitude. Now we're just waiting on Sasuke to figure out what's in front of him. Hinata-chan sighed, nodding against my shoulder. I guess Gaara and Mitsuri aren't going to be together this go-round. He and Haku-chan will be good for each other once he figures out what to tell her. You've been watching them too? I asked quietly. Hinata-chan nodded into my shoulder again, releasing my as I picked up the plate of sandwiches. I carried them outside and Hina-chan called into the living room. Food's outside, she shouted through the door before following me to the backyard. Setting the plate down, I picked up a sandwich and sat down next to Hina-chan. Lunch was soon over but that didn't force us inside. The sun was warm and partially hiding behind a layer of fluffy clouds. I glanced at them, knowing Shikamaru would be on his familiar hill. Anyone up for a swim? I asked, directed towards Team 7 and Hina-chan. Jiraiya threw a hopeful glance towards Tsunade. I noticed Kakashi throw a more subtle glance towards Shizune and I smiled knowingly. Sakura, Haku, and Hina-chan immediately agreed, running into the house to grab bathing suits, something always left at my house for emergencies. Even Sasuke nodded, laughing under his breath. He walked at a more sedate pace towards the house, flanked by me. Changed into my bathing suit, I grabbed towels from one of the closets, laughing as I remembered the first time I showed Kiba and Hina-chan the pool. When I walked out of the house, the others were already in the pool. I glanced empathetically towards Jiraiya, now sporting a black-eyed Tsunade looked on triumphantly. 2 weeks later. Stop fidgeting, Sasuke hissed to me. I glared at him. I was not fidgeting, I was straightening my tie. Again. I glanced down at my black suit, fighting the urge to tear it to shreds. The clearing was beautiful, the clouds softening the sunlight. There would have been singing birds if there was not a number of demon foxes and raccoons in attendance. I stood in the gazebo, Sasuke at my side. I glanced at Hiruzen, presiding over the ceremony, and he nodded encouragingly. My eyes turned to Sakura, dressed in her lavender kimono. Her eyes were turned down the aisle of chairs, catching my attention. The world melted away when my eyes caught Hinata-chan. She looked stunning, her kimono elegant and simple, embroidered with silver sakura petals, just like the kimono I had lent her so long ago. The dress was a paler purple than the bridesmaids' dresses, the obi pure white and stitched with silver branches. Her blushing face was hidden partially behind a sheer lace veil pinned into her hair. Her dark hair was smoothed into 2 buns, not unlike Tenten's normal style. She walked easily, gracefully, down the aisle at her father's side. She met me in the gazebo, her father lifting her hand and placing it on my own arm. I couldn't help but smile. You look so beautiful, I thought towards her. Hina-chan's blush darkened and she tightened her grip on my arm, smiling shyly under her veil. I found myself not hearing Hiruzen, the background fading away as I gazed at Hinata-chan. When it came time to say our vows, I smiled broadly. I, Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto, vow that though time may pass, fortune may smile, trials may come, no matter what we may encounter together, I will love you, Hyuga Hinata, always and everywhere. Hinata? Hiruzen looked at Hina-chan. She smiled, her eyes watering. I, Hyuga Hinata, vow that I will stay at your side, no matter what tries to part us. I swear to laugh with you in good times and to comfort you in bad. My body, heart, and soul all belong to you. I love you, Namikaze Naruto, always and everywhere. She smiled, tears falling down her cheeks as she stared into my eyes. Then, by the power vested in me as the Sandaime Hokage of the village hidden in the leaves, I now pronounce you man and wife. Naruto, you may kiss your bride. I smiled as I lifted the veil covering my mate's face. I pulled her into my arms and the witnesses clapped and stood up when our lips met. Parting all too soon, we were soon rushed by our friends and family, all coming to congratulate us and wish us well. I hope for your sake she's not too troublesome," Shikamaru sighed. Tamari smacked the back of his head. "What he meant to say is that he hopes that you are happy together," Tamari growled. Shikamaru shrank before the Sunakunoichi as she grabbed his wrist and pulled him away. Tenten and Neji took their place. My jaw fell just a bit as I noted their joined hands. Tenten released her hold on Neji, moving to hug Hinata-chan. "Aw, Hinata-chan. I'm so happy for you," she smiled. Hina-chan blushed, beamed as her cousin nodded towards her, a small smile on his face. "Thank you," Hinata-chan blushed, smiling towards me. I talked a little with Neji before Tenten dragged him away. I chuckled at the behavior, so much like their future past selves. The infamous Kyoritsune settling down with a mate? Never thought I'd see the day, a familiar voice behind me chuckled. I turned, smiling at Gaara. "Are you still upset that you weren't best man?" I joked. Gaara stuck his tongue out at me, stopping when Haku pushed him aside in her rush to congratulate us. After another tackling hug, Gaara pried the former Kirikunoichi off of me and my mate. The second he let go, Hinata-chan tackled Haku in a hug. I rolled my eyes at her revenge. "Hinata-chan. You're in your wedding dress. You can't roll around on the grass," Ino scolded. Hina-chan stood from the ground, mumbling apologies as her blush deepened even more. Her anger forgotten, Ino continued on to squeal about how beautiful the ceremony and Hinata-chan were. Gaara rolled his eyes at the change in personality. "Does that happen a lot?" he asked out of the corner of his mouth. I sighed, nodding. "Every day. I'm pretty sure it's a kunoichi," my reply cut off as I spotted movement in my peripheral vision. Turning my head, my face broke into a smile as I saw Sasuke, his arm around Sakura's waist as they both laughed. Gaara followed my gaze. "It's about time those two decided they don't hate each other," Gaara chuckled. I nodded before glancing at Ino, hoping she hadn't noticed. "So Ino, how's your dad? I haven't seen him around the standby station in a while." Ino shrugged. "He's alright. He and Ibiki-san are still busy interrogating the Auto-nin from the invasion." Hina-chan raised an eyebrow, concerned. "The invasion? That was over 2 weeks ago," she frowned. Seeing the change in demeanor, Ino glanced around her, looking for something else to talk about. I winced when her eyes zeroed in on Sasuke and Sakura. Hina-chan followed Ino's eyes and smiled. I thought there was something going on between them. Ino glared at the pink-haired kunoichi, almost growling. "Billboard brow," she growled. I winced and grabbed her arms. "No. You let go of me." "Not if you're going to go over there," I said calmly as the blonde struggled against my arms. Not giving up, Ino leaned to the side, trying to knock me off balance. "Not going to work," I said in a sing-song voice. Ino huffed, still trying to break away. Haku sighed and stepped forward, hand raised. She smacked the back of Ino's neck, knocking her out. "All done," she smiled at the now unconscious kunoichi. I sighed, picking Ino up. "Haku-chan, you didn't need to knock her out, you should have let her blow off some steam. Now she'll wake up angry." Hinata-chan frowned, studying the blonde kunoichi's face. "What's done is done," I sighed. "Let's get back to the house. We still have a party to throw, don't we?" I shrugged, holding out my arm. Hinata-chan accepted it, Gaara and Haku staying behind. "We'll make sure everyone gets to the house," Gaara suggested. I smiled knowingly at the redhead and he blushed, clearing his throat. "Get going, love birds foxes? Either way, get out of here." "Sure thing, love raccoons?" I winked. Haku blushed and Hinata-chan bit her lip, trying not to smile. We hirai-shined away, to the kunai I left on the coffee table in the living room. I placed Ino down on the couch and walked outside as Hinata-chan placed a blanket over her. Staring at the backyard from the porch, I smiled. Paper lanterns hung from ninja wire over all the tables, winding around the patio and the pool. White hibiscus floated lazily on the rippling water, reflecting the setting sun. The tables were all covered with a pale lavender tablecloth and set with silverware. In the center of the patio, a long table stretched from one end of the patio to the other, covered with food. In the center of the long table sat the wedding cake. Going along with Hina-chan's wishes, I had made my super crazy amazingly addictive triple chocolate cake, as it was now named. The cake itself was built into 3 tiers, each wider than the one above it. The 2 lower layers was frosted in dark chocolate frosting, the last in milk chocolate. Cherries and lilac blossoms made of sugar dotted the cake. A small figurine of Hina-chan and I sculpted out of ice courtesy of Yuki Haku adorned the top. Finishing admiring my handiwork, I took my place at a table, as assigned by Sakura and Hinata-chan. Hinata-chan came outside, her kimono replaced by a white dress. No longer reflecting the Hyuga clan, Hina-chan opted for a strapless floor-length gown. The fabric darkened as it got closer to the ground, ending in a dark violet at the hem. She smiled at me, taking the seat beside me. We watched as people drifted in, saying congrats one more time, and take their assigned seats around the patio. When everyone was seated, a voice yelled out for a speech. Pushing Sasuke up, Sakura smiled deviously. Okay, I'll talk, he coughed, smiling between Hina-chan, myself, and Sakura. First, if anyone here gets married, don't make me the best man. I suck at speeches. A few people laughed and Sasuke glanced at me. I nodded encouragingly, and he sighed. First, congrats you too. Hinata, I'm so sorry you're stuck with my Dobby-eva-sensei, he chuckled, lifting his glass to me. Oi, I called warningly. Sasuke only chuckled at me. That Dobby-eva-sensei can kick your ass. Yes, I seem to remember you cracking my femur when we were sparring, he chuckled. But then, after all that crap I put you through, every insult I tried to throw at you, you still looked out for me. You'd make sure I was okay after our spars and you were next to me through every tight spot I've been in. I once told you that everyone I cared about was dead and you looked ready to punch me in the face. You told me that I cared about people whether I wanted to or not. It was only when we were in Wave that I realized something. We are brothers, Naruto. So, Hinata? Welcome to the family, Sasuke smiled, sitting back down as the crowd clapped. Sakura got up next, blushing slightly. Tough act to follow, she mumbled, glancing at Sasuke. First, congrats again, she smiled at us. Naruto, I remember the first thing I did when I found out you were a Jounin-sensei with Kakashi-sensei, back in my happily abandoned fangirl days. I saw you and thought, how is this baka stronger than my Sasuke-kun? Then you shut me up before I could say anything. Do you remember what you said? She asked me, smiling as she told her story. I chuckled. Glaring is not going to make me any weaker, just as it will not make you and Sasuke stronger. Instead of complaining about my position, work on improving yours, I answered. Hiruzen chuckled in the background at my maturity. And I kept hating you, Sakura said, shaking her head in disbelief. I don't think I even liked you until I started learning medical ninjutsu. You taught me that there was something other than fighting, in both my career and my attitude with people. Hinata-chan, don't lose this one, she smiled at my mate before sitting back down. Hiruzen stood, holding his glass. A toast, he proposed. Everyone picked up their glasses, staring expectantly at the Sandaime. To the Namikazes, let Kami keep you in this world both happy and together, safe from harm and hardship. To the Namikazes. Everyone chorused, lifting their glasses to their lips. Hinata-chan and I laughed, intertwining our arms before drinking the white wine. That's the end guys. If you enjoyed then make sure to leave a comment. This is Chaos Shinobi signing off.